They were originally twin siblings, but fate had a world of difference between them. The older brother was abandoned by his parents in a desolate village since childhood, and he followed an old beggar to make a living by collecting scraps, while the younger sister was well cared for by her parents, being the apple of the family's eye. But what they got in return was not care for the boy, but daily scolding and disgust. At this moment, Qin Hao, who couldn't suppress his anger, was about to retort, when a cold mechanical voice suddenly sounded in his mind, detecting that the host's anger value was full. Activating the Wine Sword Immortal System. This system has planned 2 cultivation routes for you. Choose one. The Sword Path of Emotions, representing seeking the Tao with emotions, taking on the responsibility of protecting parents, family, and the world, even if it means risking your life without regret. Choose 2. The Heartless Sword Path, cutting off worldly emotions and attachments, being unburdened, henceforth decisive in killing, following the path of killing, traveling the world alone with a sword. Upon hearing this, Qin Hao made a decisive decision. Protecting my family? Protect what? This family treats me as their family? Without emotions in my heart, drawing the sword naturally, I choose the path of ruthlessness. Congratulations to the host for successfully choosing Awakening the Heart of the Ruthless Sword. The beginner's gift package has been activated for the first time. Please check it carefully. 2 consecutive system prompt tones sounded, and Qin Hao's heart was filled with joy. Merciless Sword Heart and Rookie Reward. What are these things? After watching, Qin Hao is even more hopeful. On the other hand, Qin Langtian saw that Qin Hao showed no remorse at all, remained silent, and angrily said, "You unfilial son, knowing that you were so frivolous and dissolute, stubborn and unrepentant, I shouldn't have brought you back in the first place. You only cause trouble everywhere, tarnishing the reputation of the War King's mansion. It would have been better to let you fend for yourself outside." Seeing this situation, Mother Lin Sushi kept shaking her head and sighing. Why are you so disobedient? Listen to your mother and quickly apologize to your father. As soon as the words fell, Qin Xinyue also put on a posture of not giving up. Qin Hao, looking at the good things you have done, you are just a wild dog picked up from outside. You should be begging on the street and living a hard life. Fortunately, my father is generous and kind, accepting you into the Wang mansion, but you do not think of repaying, and even speak against him. If you make my father angry, this county princess will not let you off. You should quickly kneel down and apologize to my father. Upon hearing this, Qin Hao's inner joy faded away, slowly coming back to his senses. He looked at the 3 people in the hall who were criticizing and rebuking him, with only coldness and ruthlessness left in his eyes. He didn't want to explain, nor did he need to explain. In his memory, since he was brought back to the mansion, he was never truly accepted from beginning to end. Why should he kneel down and apologize? They treat themselves as beggars. Who has ever looked at them with respect? Who outside knows that he is the flesh and blood of the War King Qin Langtian? When have they ever acknowledged their identity to the outside world? In their hearts, there is only Qin Xinyue, this precious daughter, and oneself is ultimately just a dispensable outsider. Since you regret bringing me back, there's no need to beat around the bush. I'm not interested either. As soon as this remark was made, Qin Langtian was immediately furious. You reckless fool, to think that I, Qin Langtian, have lived my whole life openly and honestly, with integrity and righteousness. How could I have given birth to such a rebellious and unfilial obstacle like you? As an older brother, you should be humble and respectful, uphold filial piety and fraternal duty, but now you speak so disrespectfully, disrespecting our parents, and having such a narrow-minded attitude that you even compare yourself to your sister. It's absolutely absurd. Furthermore, your sister reached the late stage of the innate realm at the age of 16. With exceptional talent, she is the center of attention throughout the entire Shi Kingdom. What aspect of her is not superior to you? What do you have to compare with her? After speaking, Qin Langtian couldn't help but feel anger surging up. He stood up directly, left his seat, and walked down the hall in big strides, fiercely slapping Qin Hao. At this moment, feeling the pain on his face, Qin Hao's eyes were cold and his heart was icy. You are right, I can't compare with her. I have been an orphan since I was young, abandoned in a desolate village, living without anyone to care for me, and she, on the other hand, is treated as a precious gem by you all, enjoying a life of luxury and abundance, envied by everyone. Comparing the two of us, it's like heaven and earth. It's just a matter of luck, being pampered since childhood, like a delicate flower in a greenhouse, squandering countless cultivation resources. Even a fool can succeed. If she had been abandoned in a desolate village back then, it's uncertain whether she would have survived until today. Qin Hao stared at Qin Xingyue's condescending face with naked mockery in his tone. How dare you? How dare you fill your mouth with obscenities to this county princess? After saying that, Qin Xingyue, who was already furious to the point of madness, swung her palms, utilized the true essence in her body, and hit Qin Hao's chest solidly. But, with a miserable scream, Qin Hao spat out blood and flew away, rolling several times continuously before barely getting up from the ground. He was currently an uncultivated mortal, and just now Qin Lengtian's slap, although it carried anger, after all, it only used an unusual amount of force, so apart from some swelling, it was basically harmless. Qin Qingyue, on the other hand, was moved to kill, and in order to avenge the insults, her means were extremely vicious, and she came up to ask for Qin Hao's life. Qin Yu, stop it, seeing her own son and daughter in the same situation, turning against each other, made Lin Suxi's liver and heart broken, painful. Immediately unable to sit down peacefully, he ran down the lobby in 3 steps, holding the seriously injured Qin Hao in his arms and carefully checking his injuries. How are you okay? Qin Hao coughed several times in a row and spat out fresh blood before barely opening his eyes. Look, this is the good daughter you've raised. The moment she strikes, it's a killing move. She really wants my life. Lin Sushi couldn't stop shaking her head and rushed out to defend herself. No, it isn't. It's true that Qing Yue's temper is a bit bratty, but she didn't mean it. And no matter what, she wouldn't do something like hand-to-hand combat, in order not to aggravate the conflict any further. Lin Sushi said a whole lot of good things on Qin Xinyu's behalf, but Qin Hao didn't appreciate it and broke away from her warm arms, shaking and standing up. Enough with the drama. When she struck out just now, if she had intended to block, with the strength of the two of you, would you have let her win? It's ridiculous to put on your motherly heart when it comes down to it. If you guys really think I'm an eyesore, just let her slap me to death. Anyway, as far as you guys are concerned, I'm nothing but a pile of slime that can't be put up against the wall. A disgrace to the Battle King's house. The words were so desperate that Lin Sushi was flustered and shook her head repeatedly. No, it isn't. Mother assures you that there was never any such thought. After all, you're the flesh that fell from mother's body. Before he finished, Qin Lengtian stepped forward and pulled his wife, who was crying and sitting on the ground, up, and then he cursed at Qin Hao. Bastard! What a wild thing! How dare you yell at your mother! What a shame! Hearing this, Qin Hao's gaze was firm, not backing down. Qin Lengtian, don't you dare tell me what to do in front of me. You have not done your duty as parents since I was born, so who are you to educate me now? In these 3 years, how have you ever said a single caring, thoughtful word to me? What has it ever given me, other than a single reprimand and a cold shoulder? In the face of her son's stern rebuke, Lin Sushi was filled with guilt and had no place to go. She had to admit that over the years, in order to go to the next level of strength, she had closed down and practiced hard, thus neglecting her son's existence, only occasionally coming out of the gate to ask a few questions. Thinking about it now, the couple owed Qin Hao too much, while Qin Lengtian's lips opened and closed, and he even said several words to find face for himself. He was justified and speechless. At the same time, it was gradually touched, and while it did not move on the surface, it began to reflect on itself inwardly. Could it be that the king has really done wrong? From the day he recovered his son, he had wanted to get the news out to the public, but also think that Qin Hao wandering for many years, most of the body died some bad habits, temperament jumping off the loose. It is really difficult to get into the Hall of Elegance. Why don't we put them around for a while to raise them, and wait until our son has changed his old ways? Who knows? The matter dragged on, waiting for as long as 3 years. At this time, Qin Hao was already broken and said in a determined tone, "Say it, why don't they all talk? Since you guys can't see me as a loser, I don't want to climb high either. From now on, we'll sever our bloodline kinship, and we'll never speak to each other again." End of chapter. In an instant, the hall was silent, and the air seemed to solidify into ice, causing everyone to freeze on the spot, as if they were wooden and stone sculptures. What did you say? Shocked, Qin Lengtian was the first to react, his pupils glaring, his face slightly trembling, looking at Qin Hao with a face full of unbelief. He could never have imagined that Qin Hao would dare to make such a decision. Qin Hao's tone was ice cold to the extreme, without any semblance of bloodline affection to speak of. Each word spoken was like a loud slap to his angular face. Who is he? The great and renowned, the invincible battle king that shook the 8 directions. At this moment, not only was he disliked and speechless, but his own flesh and blood would have to break with him and go their separate ways? It is simply outrageous. Originally, because of Qin Hao's continuous pressing, Qin Lengtian vaguely developed a trace of guilt, feeling that he indeed owed his son somewhat. But now, hearing such treacherous words from Qin Hao, he was so furious that his 3 corpses jumped, wisps of veins appeared on his forehead, and his nostrils became extraordinarily thick. Slowly, what little guilt there was vanished into thin air. The anger in Qin Lengtian's chest soared extremely quickly, once again gaining the upper hand. Lin Sushi looked especially anxious and shook her head with tears in her eyes, trying to persuade her to change her mind. How have you lost your head? What's all this nonsense? Haven't you longed for a full home after all those years of wandering around? Why do you say such heartless things? Facing Qin Lengtian's anger and Lin Sushi's sadness, Qin Hao's face was as usual, not moved in the slightest. Do I have to say it a second time? Since you don't even see me as a son, thinks I'm a worthless piece of trash, then there's no need for me to stay here with a deadweight. From today onwards, I announce my departure from the War King's mansion, and I have nothing to do with you. After saying that, Qin Hao didn't stay a moment longer. With a look of determination like iron on his face, he took a step and turned toward the door. Despite his injuries, it didn't stop him from putting his promises into practice and never letting others underestimate him. From start to finish, it never stopped, not even for a second. How do you really bear to abandon mother? Looking at her son's lonely back, drifting away, Lin Sushi immediately panicked and recklessly tried to chase after him, but before he could go out, he was stopped back by the furious Qin Lengtian. Leave him alone. Tell him to get out, as far away as he can. This rebellious son is sent from heaven to anger us. Keeping him around, the king will have to live 100 years less. So disobedient and unfilial that he dares to claim that he wants to sever his ties with us. Who on earth gave him the guts to do so? At this moment, Qin Lengtian was already overwhelmed by anger. With his violently beating heart, his chest heaved together. Furious, and a hysterical growl escaped his mouth. That's not all. Seeing that Qin Yang had not yet gone far, in order to vent his anger, he threw 7 or 8 expensive vases in a single breath, which landed on the ground and fell to pieces. If you have a backbone, leave this door today and never come back. Big deal. This king will pretend that he doesn't have you as his son. Before the words fell, Qin Hao, who was about to walk out of the gate of the royal mansion, suddenly turned back to his head with a calm and relaxed expression. You can rest assured on this point. If I, Qin Hao, can say it, I can do it. Even if I were to live on the streets and die outside, I wouldn't be wooing under your name, lest I disgrace and humiliate the honorable and noble war king. I can't afford such a sin. At the same time he said that, Qin Hao let out a loud laugh and crossed the vermilion threshold with one foot, going to nowhere. It is just like the famous line of the poet Li Tai Bai, laughing up at the sky and going out the door. Is my generation not a Pangao person? Rebel son, sinner, count me blind for having taken you back to the house in the first place. Even if you are uneducated, how dare you be so arrogant? How outrageous! This king would like to see what kind of a name you sins can mix up without the shelter of the royal family. Until Qin Hao's back disappeared from sight, Qin Lengtian remained unabated in anger, standing in the hall and roaring madly. It was good that no one outside knew that Qin Hao was his biological blood. Otherwise, the hallowed war king would have been scolded by his son and lost face. He was also cut off from his father and son after the incident, which can be called an unprecedented family scandal. Once the word got out, where would he put his old face? When those fellow ministers in the court heard about it, it was not certain that they would add oil and vinegar behind their backs, making up nonsense and making this matter the talk of the town after dinner. It's all because you usually spoiled that rebellious son too much and indulged him in his misdeeds. From now on, do not receive any of his belongings. Being penniless and leaving the war king's mansion, I'd like to see how he can still be rampant and unbridled. Qin Lengtian sat back in his eunuch's chair, staring angrily, gritting his teeth, and spreading fire on his wife again. In his opinion, it was all because Lin Sushi overly spoiled her son and gave him tons of money. Only then did Qin Hao have the chance to go out and spend his time and be capricious. Now that rebellious son has left the royal residence, he has cut off his wealth. Even eating is a problem. Not to mention hanging out in hookahs and moonshine houses. When he is poor and desperate, he will naturally hang back and repent, remembering all the benefits of the royal family. With that in mind, Qin Lengtian looked as if he had the odds stacked against him, just waiting for the rebellious son of his mouth to come back obediently to confess his faults and beg for his forgiveness. By then, he'll still be at his mercy. But to Qin Lengtian's inquiry, Lin Sushi was filled with confusion and expressed her innocence. Lengtian, why do you say that? In these 3 years, I've never given Hao any money. Since marrying into the royal family, I have never asked about the finances of the house, except for accompanying you out to fight and cultivate, and living in deep seclusion. You should know that I never carry any money on me, so why are you suddenly complaining about me? Upon hearing this, Qin Hao froze. You've never given money to this rebellious son? Looking at Qin Lengtian's expression, Lin Sushi couldn't help but ask, did you not give it either? Qin Lengtian was silent for a moment, then still undeterred, he turned his gaze back to his daughter. Qin Yu, the money your brother squandered, did you give it to him? Or did he ever ask you for it? Upon hearing this, A trace of color flashed in Qin Xingyue's eyes before she said with a haughty face, "Humph, how can that be? How could I give money for that scum to squander?" In the end, Qin Lengtian even called the account housekeeper of the mansion, very urgently, wanting to get that answer. But the result was surprisingly consistent. For 3 years, Qin Hao did not take the slightest money from the house. How is this possible? At those words, Lin Su she couldn't help but be gloomy and murmured under her breath, "So, we gave that kid nothing, and he never asked us for anything." End of chapter. Young master, where are you going? In front of the gate of the royal residence, he saw Qin Hao strutting out. Several of the royal guards on guard duty immediately stepped forward to block the way. As the previous Qin Hao had been a loose cannon all day long, he had many bad deeds and never pleased the king and the princess. Even by 2 years younger county princess looked down on. Often in the residence as a messenger will inevitably look at people under the dish. To this picked-up young master inevitably did not look in the eyes. Today, this scrappy young master had made a big mess outside again, disgracing and humiliating the entire royal family and losing face. According to the guards' guesses, Qin Hao would definitely be reprimanded and severely punished by the king again this time. And now, but seeing Qin Hao leaving as if nothing had happened, as the mansion's slaves and loyal dogs, they couldn't help but interrogate and make fun of a few sentences in the meantime. "It's not your turn to ask where I want to go." Having already severed his relationship with the royal family and completely drawn the line, Qin Hao's heart gradually cooled down. "Young master, the king is angry. We can't let you go without his permission." Seeing that Qin Hao didn't listen to advice, he didn't stop. The guards in front of the door looked at each other. An unpopular guy, they hadn't put it in their eyes. Enduring the chattering and yelling, Qin Hao coldly glanced back, his gaze sharp and stern, icy and piercing. Asterisk 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 off. Good dogs don't get in the way. At the same time, an ethereal and invisible sword intent emanated from his body, and the guard's heart couldn't help but tremble with fear, as if he was being strangled, becoming silent. That inexplicable sense of oppression, permeated with coldness and ruthlessness, caused them to feel fear and even awe, and they could not help but take several steps backward, consciously making way. As Qin Hao walked past, the guards lowered their heads and put away their previous mocking and disdainful expressions, raising their hearts to their throats as if they were paying attention. Is this the heartless sword heart? The only way to truly possess it is to cut off emotions and become cold and heartless. The more cold-blooded and ruthless you are, the more killing intent you have, and the more you give up those boring desires, in order to bring the heartless sword heart to its fullest extent. Just as I thought. Indeed. Feeling the surging sword intent in his body, along with his powerful and extraordinary self-confidence, Qin Hao quickly comprehended the mystery. Immediately, his footsteps were firmly forward, with a cold and frosty look, no longer holding a trace of attachment to the royal residence behind him, until he left completely and his back disappeared at the end of the street. No one dared to say more, much less chase after him to stop him. On the other hand, because of Qin Hao's blatant departure, Mr. and Mrs. Qin Lengtian had an argument and were quarreling. "Qin Lengtian, why don't you send someone to bring Hao back? Can you really bear to see your son on the streets, homeless? We've owed him so much over the years. We can't afford to make another mistake. Can we?" While saying that, Lin Su she cried her heart out and sobbed uncontrollably, learning that Qin Hao had never taken a penny or a cent from the royal family, and that his daily expenses for the past 3 years were all self-sufficient. She immediately felt remorseful, feeling that she really had not fulfilled her responsibility as a mother. To make amends, she urged her husband to change his mind and go and bring back his son. But who is Qin Lengtian? The status of honor in the dynasty, but also in charge of the military power for many years, has always been a say-no, iron-hearted lord. Now, that disobedient and unfilial son had just left, and he had also put down the cruel word that he would never allow Qin Hao to step into the royal residence again. So how could he go back on his words? Once he backtracks, isn't that like letting him punch himself in the face? Enough. Tired of being asked, Qin Lengtian heaved, the tea on the table shaking with him, flames rising in his pupils. What do you know as a woman? That rebellious son has the audacity to contradict his parents and run away from home now, and there is no doubt that he will do even more abominable things in the future. Wouldn't letting him come back now prove us wrong? This king has lived a bright and honorable life, yet you want me to bow down to a tainted and rebellious son? This will never happen. If he wants to go, let him go. Better to die outside, out of sight, out of mind. At the moment, though, he realized that something was wrong with him. However, due to the face of the head of the family, his mouth still refused to give in. A near growl was used to cover up the heartbreak. Qin Lengtian, listen to you speak as a human being? Hao is our own flesh and blood. If you don't love him, how can you expect him to die? A tiger's poison doesn't even eat its son. So heartless. You don't deserve to be a father at all. Seeing that her husband was not half remorseful, Lin Suxi's eyes opened angrily, and she was so angry that she was almost ready to take action. And Qin Langtian remained unmoved, his gaze cold and stern as he unhurriedly stated his intentions. Ma'am, you don't have to worry too much. That sinner can't get far with no money. When he learns that it's not easy to be hard out there and mixes it up to the point of being desperate, he'll naturally come back obediently. When the time comes, are you still afraid that he won't change his ways and kowtow to us? If we don't let him suffer a little bit now and wear down his wild and impetuous temperament, and if we just let him go on like this, he'll go against the world in the future? Having said that, Lin Su she remained unforgiving, 2 bean-sized teardrops hanging on her face. Qin Langtian, you have your own plans, I won't interfere, but let's say it in advance. If Hauer has any troubles, don't blame me for turning my face away. East of the city, the Land Temple. After leaving the royal residence, Qin Hao walked slowly all the way and eventually found this place. Temple roof tile broken. All over the knot cobwebs, the ground is full of yellow hay. A desolate and dilapidated scene. Obviously no one has been here for a long time. According to the memory of the original owner of the body, when the former Qin Hao was in a bored mood, he would go here to drink and get drunk, and stay out at night. And now Qin Hao, having left the Battle King's mansion, likewise had nowhere to go. So he came to this broken temple, right as a shelter. As soon as he entered the door, he immediately felt an incomparable sense of tranquility and ease, and his mind was so relaxed that he couldn't help but stretch up and yawn. At the same time, also did not forget that there is business to do. Hastily woke up the system, checked the long-awaited newbie gift package. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining the Heartless Sword Dao Mind Technique. Tai Shang Jia Jia Chop. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining the Devouring Devil Gourd. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining the Spectral Demon Sword. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining the Mixed Elements Heaven Mending Pill. With the persistent beeps coming from his mind, Qin Hao's heart blossomed and he couldn't wait to check their usefulness. P.S. The new book begs all readers to catch up, and if you have a ticket, Iron can give a ticket. End of chapter. Taishang Desperate Emotion Shop. It is the supreme mind method of the Path of the Sword, divided into 12 realms, and only by completely cutting off the desire for love can its true power be utilized. When practiced to the 12 layers of the perfect realm, it can be transformed into a killing field with one person and one sword, killing God in God's way and Buddha in Buddha's way. Devouring Devil Gourd, it can devour thousands of living beings and nurture 10,000 spirit wines. Taking it can nourish the flesh and enhance cultivation. In addition, there is a wine god mantra engraved on the Devil Gourd, and when it is cast with 10,000 spirits wine, it can skyrocket the battle power by 10 times in a quarter of an hour. Underworld Devil Sword, from the underworld, not forged by human hands, it is born and raised by the earth, absorbing the ancient devil's chi to become, and when it comes out of the sheath, it will see blood and return. This sword is ferocious and unpredictable, not to cut off the love and desire. The heart has the intention to kill the person shall not hold the sword. If the heart is shaken, will be subjected to the backlash every kill, will be swallowed by the soul of the other side of the sword, so as to nourish the soul of the sword, the power of the increasing. Mixed Elements Heaven Mending Pill, a collection of 100 kinds of spiritual medicines refined. After taking it, although you have to endure trials and pain, you can change your destiny against the heavens, break the aftermath, and obtain a cultivation qualification that is unparalleled in the world, while at the same time enhancing your strength. After listening to a large section of the system's introduction, Qin Hao's gaze became a bit hot. Right now, all he wanted to do was get stronger. His attention eventually landed on the elixir that glowed with a greenish-purple halo, and with a gentle sniff, the ethereal fragrance refreshed his heart. In order to step onto the pinnacle of the world and ask for the celestial dome, he was prepared to endure any pain. With this in mind, Qin Hao no longer hesitated, only to see that he held the Mixed Elements Heaven Mending Pill firmly in his palm, closed his eyes tightly, and then swallowed it into his abdomen in one mouthful. In an instant, a burst of heartbreaking pain surged within the body, sometimes as if a blazing fire burned, burning hot and unbearable, sometimes as if falling into the 9 ghosts of the cold cave, cold to the bone. It didn't take long for this pain to spread rapidly, from the Dantian Qi Si, to the 5 viscera, 6 bowels, all limbs and even every pore from head to toe. It was as if there was a pair of invisible hands, breaking and remodeling Qin Hao's body, constantly rubbing it round and flat, fiddling with it. Ah! Qin Hao sat on the ground. According to the system's prompts, his hands changed their sealing techniques, held his breath, held onto his yuan shun, silently endured the pain, clenched his teeth and closed his eyes until his face was sweating like rain, and his muscles underwent violent convulsions, before he roared hysterically. Alarmed by the surrounding rats and ants scurrying, The air crows and birds flying have not dared to approach. Although he suffered from boundless pain and was tossed to death, what pleased Qin Hao was that the body was undergoing a radical change. Abundant power gushed forth like a spring, inexhaustible. This power was flowing to all meridians under the guidance of his intention, constantly expanding and washing and injecting essence. Feeling the wonderfulness of going from weak to strong, Qin Hao inwardly sweetened his heart. At the final moment, Qin Hao's various bone joints even issued crackling sounds, vibrating the dust around him and his sleeves fluttering. The whole man is so refreshed and heroic that he can't be compared to the old days. At this moment, not only did he possess an excellent talent qualification, but with the help of the elixir, he kicked open the door on the cultivation path and ascended the ladder. What surprised him even more was that in just half an hour, he had actually this weak body that had never practiced, crossed the entire Hotian realm in one fell swoop, and directly reached the middle stage of the innate realm. That kind of speed would have to be described as 1,000 miles a day. High on the list, Qin Qingyue, Qin Hao's sister from the same mother, who was known as a genius girl, was only in the late stage of the innate realm now. If she knew about Qin Hao's divine progress, wouldn't she be so jealous that her eyes would turn red? Although he had never cultivated before, Qin Hao also had an understanding of this world's cultivation realm. From low to high, martial realms were roughly divided into 9 major realms: Hotian realm, innate realm, Big Dipper realm, Royal Void realm, Spirit King realm, Emperor Dao realm, Emperor Zun realm, Sacred Soul realm, and Juggernaut realm. In addition, for each realm, there were 3 thresholds: early, middle, and late. In today's world, when one reaches the Sacred Soul realm, they can roam across the 4 directions and no one dares to stop them. Battle King Qin Langtian had practiced hard for dozens of years before breaking through the shackles and stepping into this realm, becoming the top powerhouse of the world. As for Qin Hao's mother, Lin Su Shi, who was currently still at the peak of the Emperor realm, her wish for many years had been to impact the Holy Soul realm, to match her husband's strength on an equal footing. As for the higher Dominator realm, it was already a rare existence in the ancient times, and has not appeared for thousands of years now. After another incense stick of time, Qin Hao adjusted his breathing and felt that the realm was already solid, so he was going to start cultivating that book. Tai Shang Jia. Cultivation. Their own cultivation level is only the first element, but also with a powerful stance of the mind, in order to be able to win in the face of the enemy. Invincible. If not, even if one is empty of a great power, one cannot utilize it. As the name suggests, the supreme emotionless chop is to cut off the thoughts of love and lust, as a prerequisite, in order to comprehend the subtle essence of it, and achieve the name of emotionless swordsman as if it were an arm's-length sword. However, when Qin Hao turned over the first page, intending to memorize those secluded and ancient words on it, he had difficulty in concentrating and integrating them. At this moment, in the depths of his soul, it was as if a voice was constantly interfering with him, preventing him from cultivating the emotionless sword Dao. Qin Hao was puzzled. What's going on? Could it be that I have a cluttered mind and too many desires, not suitable for practicing this sword technique? After a few explorations, he finally discovered that the weak and unwilling voice was actually the remnants of the body's original owner's obsession at work. Although abandoned since childhood, drifting in all directions, no one to rely on, never received half of the warmth and care from the family. Now that he is dead in body and soul, he still can't let go of his living parents and relatives. Seeing this situation, Qin Hao was speechless. I can only say that it is sad and pathetic. What else do you miss? Do they ever think of you as their family? Go in peace. Your unwillingness, humiliation. I will do you justice. Silly boy. What on earth are you holding back? Your family owes you. They never really accepted you and you're still thinking about them. It's hopelessly stupid. Leave your body to me and depart in peace. The humiliation and unwillingness you have suffered, I will definitely seek justice for you on the day of my accomplishment. After a bit of bitter persuasion, that remnant of persistence gradually dissipated without a trace. When Qin Hao's gaze once again looked at the supreme absolute chop, he was finally able to start real cultivation without any influence. Stone Country Palace, 3rd Princess Residence. Shi Luoyan was sitting in front of the bronze mirror, and as her hand gently raised her eyebrows, her face, which was already exquisite and beautiful, became even more delicate and charming, and her beauty was boundless. At the same time, she was a little distracted, her eyes flickering out from time to time, looking slightly anxious, as if she was waiting for something. Suddenly, a bird of prey landed from the air on the windowsill and chirped twice at her. Finally, unwrapping the bamboo tube from the lark's leg and drawing out the secret letter inside, Shi Luoyan immediately recognized that it was her good sister Qin Qingyue's handwriting. The letter reads, Sister Luoyan, a great thing has happened. Qin Hao has been expelled from the royal residence and is living on the street. Finally, the day has come. In that case, father shouldn't make me marry that loser in order to fulfill a former engagement, right? Although they have never met, her marriage to Qin Hao was decided by the Son of Heaven before she came out of her mother's womb, and the marriage was arranged by the finger, the purpose of which was to consolidate the relationship between the ruler and the courtier, and to make Qin Langtian dead set on selling his life. 3 years ago, when Qin Hao had just returned to the Battle King's mansion, Qin Xingyue told her the news at the first opportunity. At that time, Shi Luoyan was still full of expectations and specially inquired about Qin Hao, but after learning that this was an incompetent person with low character and cowardly mediocrity, she was instantly greatly disappointed. How does a handless, down-and-out street beggar deserve her royal princess? If you really want to marry someone like that, you might as well jump into the river and kill yourself. Therefore, Shi Luoyan considered her lifelong happiness, as well as the princess's face, and gave birth to the idea of repenting the marriage. But Qin Longtian's position is high and untouchable, and for the sake of the stability of the situation in the court, the emperor will never take the initiative to tear up the former contract. One day, when Qin Hao recovered his identity and the old events were revisited, she would still have to marry into the War King's house against her will. No way. Absolutely not. Having made up her mind, for 3 years Shi Luoyan had sent people everywhere to spread gossip and rumors, deducting all kinds of dirty water onto Qin Hao's head. This, coupled with Qin Xingyue's unrelenting assistance, finally caused the Qin family's father and son to turn against each other and their relationship to completely break down. At this point, Shi Luoyan was still uneasy. As long as Qin Hao lived in the world, there was still a possibility that he would return to the War King's mansion and be recognized by Qin Langtian as his son. Simply don't do it. Don't do it. If you don't get rid of the grass, it will grow again in the spring. Qin Hao, if you don't die, this princess can't sleep. Murmuring something to herself, Shi Luoyan's killing heart had risen, and she wanted to put an end to it forever. However, the imperial city was filled with eyeballs everywhere, so if Qin Hao was killed inside, it would definitely attract the wrath of the War King's palace. Finally, with a twinkle in her eye, a plan came to her. It was decided that for the time being, people would be sent to find Qin Hao's whereabouts. Follow him secretly and kill him as soon as you find him leaving the imperial city. End of chapter. After a long night, a ray of morning sunlight pierced through the thick clouds, and the imperial city of the Stone Country once again welcomed bright sunlight. In front of the gate of the Land Temple in the eastern part of the city, there was a spacious and flat open space, surrounded by leg-high weeds, which surrounded almost the entire temple, forming a relatively distinct and independent area. This place is dilapidated and desolate. Even the statue of the god enshrined inside is covered with dust, not seeing the real face. Obviously no incense to worship and take care of for a long time. But for Qin Hao, it is simply used as a temporary place to settle down and practice martial arts, and the accommodation is free of charge, which is suitable for him who is penniless at this moment. At this moment, he is holding his breath. Will be in the hands of an ink-black long sword to the wind and dance. The body-shape flashes earn Tengmuo, floating and agile. One move, the breath ling-ling vertical and horizontal. The cold aura flashes. Yesterday night, Qin Hao had memorized the entire set of Taishang Desperate Chop's key points in his heart. And now he was executing the very first style of the opening chapter, a sword across the world, and naturally, he was accompanied by the underworld devil sword, which had a fierce killing intent. This sword was more than 4 feet long, with a wide and imposing shape, and its surface was engraved with delicate and subtle runic patterns. The body is as black as ink, surrounded by a deep purple arc of light, but the sword body and the blade is covered with gaps and cracks. Obviously in a big battle suffered serious damage. The might is not the same as before. In addition, there was a snow-white jade-like bead embedded in the hilt of the sword, which was smooth and rounded, and whenever Qin Hao made a move, a scarlet-red light would faintly emerge. Nowadays, it had already recognized its owner with Qin Hao's blood drop, and could be used like an arm, gradually reaching the tacit understanding of human sword unity. Drink dash. With a long whistle, Qin Hao's vertical body leaped into the mid-air. All the breath in his body surged out, and with a forceful swing, the underworld devil sword fell heavily with the power of no dangling. In an instant, a several hundred-pound tiger squatting boulder exploded into countless tiny pieces of dust that flew up into the sky and floated everywhere in the messy morning breeze. At this point, the first stance of the Taishang Desperate Chop was finally accomplished, worthy of being the top mastery of the Emotionless sword Dao. This strong power is truly terrifying as hell. The figure fell back to the ground, and when the dust in front of his eyes cleared, looking at the destruction he had caused with his own hands, Qin Hao couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air, secretly shocked. It was absolutely impossible for an ordinary martial artist of the innate realm to make such a terrifying sword move, and this was largely due to the power of the supreme absolute chop. as well as the great enhancement brought about by that mixed elements heaven mending pill that had tamped down the foundation. If we continue practicing like this, it won't be long before we'll be able to travel across the world and go anywhere. In just one day's time, such a brilliant progress had been achieved, and Qin Hao felt satisfied. With emotion, he turned around and returned to the broken temple, finding the unused devouring demon gourd, then bit his index finger and dripped blood onto it, like the spectral devil sword. Since it was a reward given by the system, it had already belonged to Qin Hao, and the refining process was effortless, with just 2 slight buzzing sounds, and then it obediently recognized its owner, harvesting 2 major helpers one after another. Qin Hao's confidence increased greatly, and he was about to cultivate the next sword stance again. Right at this moment, Qin Hao's eyes stared as a burst of footsteps suddenly came from outside the door, accompanied by conversations. Can anyone live and stay in such a tight place? Is the information reliable or not? Don't waste your time. That's right. I heard that the boy was kicked out of the royal residence and has become homeless. If you don't want to live on the streets, you'll have to come to a broken temple like this to settle down. Surname Qin, we know you're in there. Get your ass out here. When Qin Hao heard this, he immediately realized that these people were coming at him. I wonder what a few of you are doing here. Afterward, Qin Hao held the underworld demon sword and went out of the temple door in a dignified manner. Only a few big men were seen surrounding the outside of the broken temple, all of them with an unkind look in their eyes. Qin Hao, it's really you, kid. You still owe me a lot of money for the drinks at the Drunken Immortal House. Isn't it time to settle up? We're looking for you today to settle this score. Hearing this, Qin Hao frowned. Over the past 3 years, the original body did often go to the Drunken Immortal residence to buy drunkenness, but the Drunken Immortal residence never let him pay for the drinks. The original body guessed that the other party was looking at the face of the Battle King's house and was purposely trying to curry favor. Now that you've learned that you've been expelled from the War King's residence, you can't wait to lash out? Qin Hao naturally didn't know that this Drunken Immortal house was renowned in the imperial city of the Stone Country. All the people who come and go are distinguished officials and the rich and powerful families. The owner behind it was the Li family, the top family in the imperial city. As these few people said, the previous Qin Hao did eat and drink for free at Drunken Immortal House and never paid the bill, so much so that he was in debt. In fact, there's another layer that's not well known. All of these hooks were secretly manipulated by the third princess Shi Luoyan. In order to make Qin Hao feel the false compliments and flattery, he ate and drank for nothing every day and enjoyed himself. As a result, huge debts were incurred and accumulated. Now that he knew that Qin Hao had been expelled from the royal residence, he took the opportunity to make trouble. Shi Luoyan's purpose was to force Qin Hao to leave the imperial city so that he could implement the plan in his heart. Qin Hao also noticed that something was wrong. It is true that there is no such thing as a free lunch, but at this moment, Qin Hao was penniless, so naturally he had no money to pay back. You've come all this way for nothing. I don't have any money on me. As soon as the words fell, the man standing on the left immediately clenched his fists and stepped forward to drink. No money? On the way here, our proprietor commanded that if you don't pay back the money, you'll be beaten half to death and then driven out of the imperial city. It looks like we're not going to make it today, so you guys will try it? Qin Hao didn't talk nonsense, lifting up the underworld demon sword and flexing his fingers, emitting a crisp dragon roar. This sword has never seen blood when it came into my hands. Today is the right day to take a few of you to start the attack. Unexpectedly, the few people from the Drunken Immortal building were amused and laughed, their faces full of sarcasm and disdain. Naturally, they had long since learned that Qin Hao was a waste that had never cultivated. Who are you bluffing here now with a sword? Qin Hao, kill us if you have the guts. I'd like to see what a punk like you is capable of. It was the first time in his life that Qin Hao heard a request like this one. In that case, I will fulfill you. Before the words fell, Qin Hao's hand had already pressed slightly on top of the hilt of his sword, and a stern sharpness had already climbed onto his splendid cheeks. With that, he was seen turning his body around and making the sword stance that he had just mastered, a sword across the world. Without waiting for those few people to come back to their senses, a fierce wind suddenly rolled up on the flat ground, and an invisible sword chi with gusts of tearing sharp sounds came towards them. In an instant, he became a dead soul under the sword and died. Perhaps these few people were not able to see clearly what kind of means Qin Hao had exerted to put them to death. I'll have to ask the King of Hell for advice. Immediately after that, Qin Hao violently realized that the white jade pearl on the hilt of the sword had a different appearance, becoming as red as blood and shining brightly at a speed visible to the naked eye. With a buzz sound, the air at the blade of the sword began to twist and wriggle, forming a tiny vortex, and some transparent points of light floated from those 3 corpses, instantly being incorporated into it. Qin Yang quickly thought that the underworld demon sword was absorbing their souls, repairing its own damage, and boosting its power. It really is extraordinary. But what amazed him was yet to come. And it wasn't long before a burst of energy feedback came from the palm holding the sword, surging into his body like a stream, being fed by the soul power. Qin Hao had a refreshing feeling like a spring breeze, and an evil smile gradually appeared on his face. Savoring the sensation of killing for the first time caused a subtle change within him. The next moment, a message came to his mind. First kill of the Hotian realm, plus 1 kill value. A stunned look appeared on Qin Hao's face, and he immediately returned to normal. It turns out that killing gains kill value. No wonder it's called the Relentless Sword Dao. When you choose this path, you are destined to reign in the killing. End of chapter. The Warlord's Mansion. Since Qin Hao left, the more Lin Sushi thought about it, the less she felt. Often he sits alone and laments, unable to quiet his mind in practice. Not only do you feel that you owe your son so much, it's hard to get the mother-son relationship back to what it once was. There was also a great deal of disappointment and sadness at her husband's callousness. The couple also quarreled from time to time as a result, and Lin Sushi even put down harsh words. Qin Lang Tian, if you don't get Hauer back, I'm not done with you. After a cold war, Qin Lang Tian had the heart to coax Lin Sushi. However, Lin Sushi was packing up her belongings and preparing to leave the War King's mansion. Qin Lang Tian's heart ached. Is it for that disobedient and ungrateful son? The married wife, who has been together for many years, wants to make a clean break with herself? Su Young, what are you doing? Qin Lang Tian rushed forward to stop Lin Sushi. Let's have a talk. Lin Sushi turned back and glared at him without a good look. You forgot that it's my big brother's birthday in a few days, and I'm going to rush back to be with him for his birthday. Although she had married into the royal family for many years, her relationship with her mother's family had always been amicable. Lin Sushi came from the immortal Holy Land Langia Holy Land, the big brother she spoke of. It was the current Holy Lord of the Luengia Holy Land. Every year on Big Brother's birthday, Lin Sushi must personally go to the gathering, never absent, rain or shine. Lin Sushi's identity also provided Qin Langtian with a great bottom line. It made his position in the dynasty rock solid and untouchable. Look at me. I've been so busy lately that I've forgotten such a big deal. I will now appear before His Majesty and apply for a period of time away from the imperial city to accompany you to pay my brother a visit. Looking at her husband's attentive appearance, Lin Sushi didn't give a good face at all and simply expressed her refusal. How could I dare to labor on your War King's great journey for such a small matter? You're only thinking of your position in the court, and you're so eager to build your career. When have you ever cared about your family? If you have that heart, hurry up and get Hauer back. Don't let him suffer outside. If Hauer isn't found, I'm going to spend the rest of my life in my mother's house. After all, it's all about that unfilial son. Hearing Lin Sushi's words, Qin Langtian couldn't help but raise a nameless fire. Immediately, he cooled his face and skimmed the clothes he had just straightened to the side. Whatever, trying to get me to bow down and give in and go begging for that sinner to come back. Never in a million years. I advise you to die before it's too late. As if he had been stepped on to the sore spot, Qin Langtian angrily made his attitude clear, and with a cold snort, he slammed the door in exasperation. Another disagreement. Lin Sushi shook her head inside, her eyes gradually red, both afraid that she would never see her son again, but also blame her husband's insensitivity. At this time, his daughter Qin Xingyue arrived at the sound of the noise, and seeing the situation, he quickly guessed the reason. Mother, did you fight with my father again? Not from me. In the middle of the conversation, Lin Sushi, however, waved her hand gently, not wanting to continue to dwell on this issue. You err. Mother is going back to the Luengia sacred realm to accompany your uncle for his birthday. Do you want to come along and visit your uncle and cousin and the others? Mentioning her uncle's cousin, the daughter of the Luengia sacred lord, Qin Xingyue shook her head vigorously, the boss's reluctance, as if she had met her natural mortal enemy. Lin Shizhu, after Lin Sushi, was the current saintess of the Luengia sacred domain, Qin Hao's cousin, Qin Xingyue's cousin, although she was only less than a year older. No matter whether it was her cultivation talent or her appearance and temperament, she had to overpower this younger sister and had always been in the front. Moreover, she resented Qin Xingyue's arrogant character, and Qin Xingyue resented the fact that someone was stronger than her in every way, causing the two sisters to quarrel when they met, like pins and needles. A couple times, it even got physical. Mother, you're on your own. I'm not going to make a fool of myself if I have to travel so far and not get a welcome from my cousin. In comparison, I'd rather go into the palace to play with Sister Luo Yen. With that, he ran off in a huff. Lin Sushi also let her daughter's nature. No more questions. At this moment, in the palace, Sir Luo Yen had just received a secret letter from Drunken Immortal House. After opening it, the originally delicate and petite face instantly revealed a flash of disbelief. All dead? A sword to the throat? Her eyebrows were clustered, and a thoughtful look appeared in her eyes. Although the ones sent this time were only a few Hotian realm mole crickets, however, Qin Hao had no cultivation in him, but it was more than enough to deal with him. Now, all the people he sent were actually killed in turn? Moreover, the person who struck out seemed to specialize in swordsmanship. Could it be that the Battle Royal family has sent experts to protect them secretly? Thinking that Qin Hao had already broken with Qin Lengtian Battle King, Shi Luoyan shook her head again. Did Qin Hao hide his strength? Shi Luoyan was in the midst of suspicion when the palace maid outside the door hurriedly came to report with small broken steps. Reporting to the third princess, County Princess Qin Yu seeks an audience. Before he could finish, Qin Yue barged in on her own. After greeting Shi Luoyan, he directly sat down and played with the exquisite teacup on the table. Sister Luoyan, I've done you a great favor. I went through a lot of trouble to drive Qin Hao away. How are you going to reward me? After dismissing the palace maid, Shi Luoyan pulled her to the side with an extremely solemn tone and began to verify her suspicions. Sister Qingyu, are you really sure that Qin Hao is an invalid with no cultivation? At those words, Qin Yue froze. Sister Luoyan, why do you ask? Spinning around, he nodded his head and said in an extremely certain tone, that's for sure. Could I lie to you? Shi Luoyan thought of the secret letter she just got and said, what if Qin Hao is deliberately hiding his cultivation? No way. Qin Yue's tone was extremely certain. Qin Hao is a solid waste. If he has cultivation in him, even if he can hide it from me, can he still hide it from my parents' eyes? Hearing Qin Yue's words, Shi Luoyan felt justified. One must know that the Battle King couple was one of the top experts within the Stone Country. A person could be said to have an unfathomable cultivation. How could such a strong person not see the depth of Qin Hao? Besides, if Qin Hao had cultivation in him, War King Qin Lengtian wouldn't have belittled him so much. But the people sent by Drunken Moon Mansion, all of them were killed. So who did this? Qin Yue looked at Shi Luoyan with a puzzled expression and couldn't help but ask, Sister Luoyan, is something wrong? Shi Luoyan shook her head, already having a new plan in her mind. Since this one failed, let's do it again. As long as Qin Lengtian was still in the Imperial City, he couldn't get out of his control. Thinking that Qin Hao was Qin Yue's brother after all, Shi Luoyan couldn't help but ask, Sister Luoyan, if I kill Qin Hao, will you hold a grudge against me? P.S. Are there any ironies out there who read the book? Can you vote? Thanks. End of chapter. Sister Luoyan, are you kidding? Hearing Shi Luoyan's words, Qin Yue immediately froze in place. Looking at the cold aura that was vaguely revealed in Shi Luoyan's pair of clear autumn water bright eyes, Qin Yue couldn't help but change her face. She could sense that Shi Luoyan had indeed moved to kill. She wanted to kill Qin Hao. Born in the royal family, Shi Luoyan had lived a rich and privileged life with bells and whistles since childhood. This also gradually made her develop an arrogant and unruly character. But she was, after all, still a young girl of 16 or 17, and something like taking someone's life lightly really alarmed her. What's more, the man was still related to himself by blood. Nominally, it was even his own brother. Thus, Qin Yue was at a loss as to how to answer Shi Luoyan's inquiry for a moment. It seems that you are not entirely without a bit of affection for this brother you picked up. It's no wonder that people can't be cruel. Seeing the hesitation on Qin Yue's face, Shi Luoyan smiled meaningfully. Sister Luoyan, no, it's not what you think. Qin Yue hurriedly explained. Although I have some blood relations with Qin Hao, I don't care about his death or life. He's as different to me as a stranger in the street. It's just that my mother cares a lot about Qin Hao. If Qin Hao dies, I'm afraid my mother will be very sad. Qin Yue's lips slightly closed as she voiced her deepest concerns. As she spoke these words, Qin Yue herself didn't know how she felt. In the end, she even ghostly held up the case, and in a low tone, solemnly made a request to Shi Luoyan. Sister Luoyan, I know you don't want to marry Qin Hao, but in any case, it's not to the point of hurting people and driving them out of business. What's more, I'm afraid you won't be able to deliver on my parents' side once word gets out. If you really can't, consider it a favor to me to keep him alive. Listening to Qin Yue's request, Shi Luoyan was silent for a moment before suddenly revealing a smirk. If you've asked, how can my sister be unkind? I promise you that I can leave Qin Hao's life behind. However, he must leave the Imperial City and never appear again. Understanding Qin Yue's attitude, Shi Luoyan hesitated for a moment before changing her mind. If she insisted on killing Qin Hao, she was afraid that she would lose this good sister. Besides, if Qin Hao really died, the Battle King's palace would definitely investigate. The War King's anger, even if she was a princess, I'm afraid she wouldn't be able to withstand it. When Qin Yue heard this, a look of gratitude appeared in her eyes and she bowed to Shi Luoyan in a regular manner. Thank you, Your Highness. for your fulfillment. At the same time, she gradually began to reflect on her behavior herself. Even though how unpleasant Qin Hao was, after all, he was an elder brother by blood. While he was racking his brains to help an outsider against him, is it inappropriate to do so? At the thought of this, her mood suddenly became dull, as if her chest was blocked with a piece of something, seemingly nothing, neither spit out, nor swallowed. Then, Yo-Yo sighed, lost interest in continuing to linger in the palace, said goodbye, and hit the road back home. After Qin Qingyue left, Shi Luoyan's gentle smile disappeared without a trace. Her face was as cold as frost, and she slowly clenched the fists in her sleeves. Qin Hao, although I promised Sister Qinyu to spare you from death, but regardless of whether you've hidden your cultivation or not, this princess is going to make you an invalid. Don't blame this princess for being ruthless. You can only blame your bad life. In the middle of the broken temple. At this moment, Qin Hao was checking his attribute panel. Name, Qin Hao. Cultivation level, middle of the innate realm. Martial art, Taishang Oblivion Chop. Treasure, Devouring Devil Gourd. Underworld Devil Sword. Kill value, 1. After studying it for a moment, Qin Hao sort of figured out the role of this kill value. Extra points. Whether it was the cultivation realm or the progress of martial arts cultivation, all of them can be boosted by adding points with the kill value. It seems that in the future, one is destined to embark on a path of killing. In the next moment, Qin Hao's mind moved and added this only 1 point of killing value to his cultivation. In the next moment, Qin Hao felt that his middle innate realm had loosened a bit, but it's fleeting. Looks like there's more killing to be done. Afterward, Qin Hao directly walked out of the land temple and recklessly rushed to the most prosperous and lively area in the imperial city. After killing the few people sent by drunken immortal house, Qin Hao naturally didn't forget to lick his bag. Looking at the nano ring in his hand, the corner of Qin Hao's mouth rose slightly. These guys, although their cultivation is not high, are quite an asset. Coming out from the royal palace, Qin Hao could be said to be penniless. These money-giving children just solved their own urgent problems. The purpose of this trip was to brew 10,000 spirit wine. The devouring devil gourd could devour treasures containing spirituality between heaven and earth to brew the 10,000 spirit wine. A few moments later, Qin Hao arrived at the most prosperous market in the imperial city. The purpose of his coming here was to find some raw materials for brewing 10,000 spirit wine. The busy area of the imperial city. As far as the eye could see, the streets were all over the place. The pedestrians were bustling, and everywhere there were competing buyers and sellers stores, filled with the sound of shouting and selling one after another. If it's your first time, you might be confused and dazzled. Fortunately, before, Qin Hao had been hanging out here for 3 whole years, playing around the 3 streets and 6 cities every day, traveling to the east and the west, so that it didn't cause any trouble to the present-day Qin Hao in terms of direction. It didn't take much time to find a store selling beast blood and medicinal herbs. What can I get for you? Sir, we have everything in the store. If you name it, I can help with it. Seeing the person coming, the fellow next to the counter was immediately full of smiles and bowed extremely fawningly, as if he was an old friend who hadn't seen him for a long time. Qin Hao opened the door and said, "Do you have any ferocious beast essence blood here?" Hearing that there was business to be done, the smile on that fellow's face grew even wider. "My lord, you finally asked the right person. We're an old store that's been thriving for decades, with all grades of ferocious beasts essence blood, like what unicorn wolves, snowy mountain eagles, gray wood foxes, etc., totaling hundreds of species." Hearing that, Qin Hao didn't drag his feet at all, fished out a bag of spirit stones from his nascent ring and casually threw it onto the counter. "Cut the crap. The essence blood of a second-grade fierce beast. Give it to me up by these spirit stones." Although he had made a fortune, it was only enough for Qin Hao to purchase some second-grade ferocious beast essence blood. "Wait a moment, my lord. I'll prepare the goods for you." The little fellow was overjoyed to meet such a quick buyer. A moment later, Qin Hao walked out of the store with a hint of satisfaction on his face. After preparing enough ferocious beast essence blood, he bought a few 100-year-old wine on the way, and then returned to that broken temple on the same way. End of chapter. A corner of the imperial city. Inside the broken temple, the night was low, everything was silent, and the sparse starlight pierced through the thick clouds, shedding a mottled silver glow, reflecting Qin Hao's shadow on the ground. Qin Hao held the devouring devil gourd tightly in his hand, a flash of anticipation in his eyes. The underworld demon sword gifted by the system was soul-consuming and powerful, so what kind of efficacy should this devouring demon gourd that could nurture 10,000 spirit wine have? He loaded the 100-years-old brew into the devouring devil gourd, then took out the ferocious beast's essence blood and slowly poured it into the devouring devil gourd. The essence of the blood color is dark, like a flame in the dark night, and the moment the wine meets the magic gourd surface of the bloodlight, as if there is a life like a slight tremor. and indescribable energy fluctuations from the gourd emanated from the inside of the gourd. The wine churned and the blood glowed, and the entire small courtyard seemed to be enveloped by this mysterious power. Feeling the power surging in the demonic gourd, Qin Hao's mind moved at will, sitting on his knees, closing his eyes and concentrating, his mind constantly replaying the previous killing scene, every swing of the sword, every chopping blow, circulating over and over again in his mind. Ruthless sword Tao begins with the heart and ends with the sword as the heart. Killing stops killing, killing is right. Qin Hao thought silently in his heart. The devil's sword in his bosom emitted a faint shimmering light, and a stern sword intent began to permeate around his body, which contained a rich killing and destructive aura that took the hearts of the people. I, Qin Hao, will definitely use this sword to cut down all obstacles. His eyes snapped open, and a brilliant light shone in them. Whether it is love and hate, or sadness and happiness, are all passing clouds, not moved by external objects. Only the remaining sword will survive. Ruthless sword Tao, when the right way to kill and destroy. God blocking to kill God, Buddha blocking to kill Buddha. This was the path he, Qin Hao, was going to take. Qin Hao violently pulled out his magic sword, which trembled uncontrollably, as if it was trembling for his enlightenment. Just then, a rush of footsteps broke the quiet, and a group of black-clothed men aggressively barged in. Qin Hao, the people from my drunken immortal mansion were just here to collect money for their drinks, yet you killed them all. You have a cruel heart. The black-robed man in the lead crossed his long sword in his hand and looked at Qin Hao angrily. Kneel down obediently and let me waste your limbs in cultivation, or else, die. Qin Hao snorted. He wants to hurt me and I'm forced to fight back. Is that considered vicious? A bunch of nonsense. Who doesn't know that drunken immortal house is invested by my Li family? You dare to provoke the majesty of my Li family. You will definitely pay the price today. The leading black-clothed man shouted angrily, his long sword pointing straight at Qin Hao. Qin Hao let out a cold smile, and there was a hint of conjecture in his heart. There was clearly something wrong with him both killing people and the group not wanting to kill him. I'm afraid that the Battle Royal family is behind all this, right? Did Qin Langtian want him to have no way to live outside and be forced to return to the War King's mansion to seek refuge? It was a pity that he had long since ceased to be the weak Qin Hao of old. Qin Hao looked at the leading black-robed man and shook his head, his magic sword slowly coming out of its sheath. It's just a pity that you guys are unlucky. I've already enlightened the emotionless sword path, so I'll take you guys to sacrifice my emotionless sword path first. As soon as the words fell, Qin Hao instantly disappeared in place. The leading black-clothed man looked startled, looking left and right, but when he heard a loud noise coming from behind him, he turned his head to look, only to see that the person who stood at the very end of the team had already fallen in a pool of blood. Qin Hao wiped the blade of his magic sword carelessly and gazed up at the leading black-clothed man. The leading black-robed man's heart was greatly moved, pointing at Qin Hao. Quick, kill him, kill him. Seeing this, the crowd quickly drew out their weapons and killed Qin Hao. Qin Hao's figure surged up like a cheetah hunting for food, so fast that it almost surpassed the capture of the naked eye. By the time the one who rushed at the front came back to his senses, the underworld demon sword was already in front of his eyes. This, so soon. A head shot up into the sky as the last thought flashed through his mind and the headless body fell to the ground with a crash. Damn it, this guy is no ordinary martial artist. He kills with such vicious moves. The trashy son of the War King's house is actually an expert. The crowd gasped in shock, looking at the two corpses that had fallen to the ground, hesitant to move forward for fear of becoming the next one. Scared? Qin Hao murmured in a low voice, and the underworld demon sword emitted a bizarre light, a cool sensation spreading into his body, unimpeded. The relief brought about by the feedback of his soul power made it somewhat difficult for him to pull himself away. Qin Hao looked at the crowd and grinned. Let's use your lives as the beginning of me killing to prove my way. Qin Hao dodged and rushed into the crowd, and all of a sudden, swords were flashing and screams were heard. Every swing of the underworld demon sword was accompanied by a low and long sword sound, which was the prelude to the music of death, causing one's soul to tremble. Wherever the sword light reached, space seemed to be torn apart, and the boundary between life and death was mercilessly crossed in this instant. Emotionless sword technique was harsh and precise. Each sword was precise and accurate, pointing straight to the vitals without the slightest delay. The enemy's figure continuously fell down in the swordlight, not even a trace of struggle left behind. Moments later, the air was thick with the smell of blood. Qin Hao was covered in blood, holding the underworld devil sword, slowly walking towards the leading black-clothed man. Wait, before the words fell, a cold light flashed, and the leading black-clothed man covered his neck, his eyes widening in horror as he fell to the ground on his back, a sword to the throat. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining 10 kills in the Hotian realm, rewarded with 10 points of kill value. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining the first kill of the innate realm, rewarding 10 points of kill value. The system's beep sounded in Qin Hao's head. It was as if it had stimulated some kind of gene in him, and his body trembled with excitement. Underworld magic sword blade out of the vortex reappeared. A transparent point of light from the corpses above the floating out. In the blink of an eye will be absorbed. The sword hilt of the white jade pearl emitted more and more blood-red demonic color, immediately followed by the feedback of soul power. A cool sensation surged through his body, and the fatigue from the previous battle dissipated in an instant. Qin Hao looked at a corpse on the ground and took a deep breath. If he didn't have this force, I'm afraid that he would be the one lying on the ground right now. In this world, only they are strong enough to guard their lives, and even their beliefs and dignity. Qin Lang Tian, you want me to submit? No way. Qin Hao stood in front of the broken temple, and his magic sword flashed out, carving several large characters on the wall. This is not a place to stay, but a place to be. The world is so big. Where can we go? The big deal is to leave the imperial city. Qin Hao's voice echoed in the broken temple as he turned around and left, his back firmly determined. Though the imperial city was large, it was not his home, and though the broken temple was small, it was not his resting place. Since he had chosen the path of the emotionless sword Dao, he was destined to not be able to remain in one place, and could only keep moving forward. Cut down all the love affairs, cut down all the obstacles in front of you, and challenge stronger enemies to climb higher mountains. Where is a man's home when he walks in all directions? This imperial city of the stone country. Don't stay. End of chapter. Broken temple. Qin Hao sat on his knees and called up the system to check it out. Name, Qin Hao. Cultivation level, middle of the innate realm. Martial art, Taishang Oblivion Chop. Treasure, Devouring Devil Gourd. Underworld Devil Sword. Kill value, 20. Looking at the 20 points of killing value, Qin Hao couldn't help but fall into contemplation. How should this 20 points of killing value be distributed? 1 point of killing value can loosen my cultivation realm. What kind of effect will 20 points of killing value have? Now that he killed the Li family, the imperial city secretly do not know how many pairs of eyes staring at him as the son of the War King's house. I am afraid to continue to stay in the imperial city inch by inch. However, if you leave the imperial city to find your own way, without strength, it is even more difficult to walk. His current self was still too weak, and raising his cultivation strength was the most important thing. After a brief thought, Qin Hao decided to add all the kill value to his cultivation. It was just as well that he wanted to see how much of a boost 20 kill points could bring him. Can we break through to the late innate stage directly? The killing value bottomed out, and all of a sudden a stream of pure and condensed killing breath quickly converged towards his dantian, followed by a majestic power venting out. Qin Hao immediately stabilized his mind, guiding this power to fuse with his dantian, transforming it into pure spiritual power, pushing the boundaries of his cultivation forward. Suddenly, Qin Hao's aura around his body surged, and a faint spiritual light emanated from his body, which was a vision that naturally flowed after a breakthrough in cultivation. Late innate realm. Qin Hao slowly opened his eyes. His eyes flashed with a strange color, clenching his fists and feeling the power that filled his body. I can't imagine that 20 points of killing value could make my cultivation move from the middle stage of the innate realm to the late stage of the innate realm in one fell swoop. This killing value actually helps so much in cultivation enhancement. Having such a huge enhancement strengthened Qin Hao's idea of killing to prove the Tao. Now that my cultivation has broken through again, looking at the entire young generation of the stone country, a late innate realm at my age is considered a genius. It's late, and it's time to leave the imperial city, Qin Hao secretly said in his heart. But before he left the imperial city, he had one more important thing to do: lick the bag. However, after half a day of searching, Qin Hao only searched out a little bit of gold, silver and soft, which was better than nothing. A great family? That's it? Qin Hao looked at the scattered treasures in front of him and couldn't help but shake his head. Only this much. Not even a single copy of the third-grade ferocious beast's essence blood could be bought. Speaking of essence blood, he turned his head to look at the devouring devil gourd that was still faintly glowing on the side. There was no telling when the All Souls wine brewed in this would be ready. The other side. Battle King's mansion. Battle King's court. Court lights. A team of guards waist with a long sword, hand holding a torch standing. Face solemn. But it is difficult to fight the king's house, that anxious atmosphere. A silhouette arrived in front of the door, and the guards immediately saluted respectfully. Mississippi. Qin Qingyue nodded and said, "Is father there?" "Lord Qin is in his study. Please wait for a moment, miss. I will go and make an announcement." "It's not necessary." Qin Qingyue waved her hand and went straight to the front of the study, raising her hand to knock on the door, but then she stood still, her face showing hesitation. Should he or she tell Dad that someone was planning to do something to Qin Hao? Although in his own opinion, Qin Hao was a playboy who had corrupted the reputation of the Battle King's house. He was, after all, also his own brother. But if father asked how he knew about it, what should he explain? Just then, a majestic voice came from inside the study. Yuer, what are you doing frozen outside the door? Why don't you come in? Qin Xingyue's heart trembled as she immediately pushed open the door to her room. Only Qin Lengtian was seen with his hands behind his back, gazing at the huge map hanging in front of him. When Qin Xingyue saw that Qin Lengtian didn't say anything, she had no choice but to stand still and wait quietly. A moment later, Qin Lengtian sighed heavily and turned around. Yuer, it's so late. What is it that you're looking for my father for? Qin Xingyue looked at her own father-in-law, wanting to speak. Qin Lengtian frowned slightly. What is it? Did someone bully you? Father, why don't you send someone to find Qin Hao? Thinking of the killing intent that the third princess had displayed towards Qin Hao, Qin Xingyue finally couldn't help herself and opened her mouth to say to Qin Lengtian, although she extremely disliked Qin Hao, when she thought that she had to help Shi Luoyan, an outsider, to deal with her own brother, there was inexplicably some discomfort in her heart. What did you say? Are you going to persuade me to go and bow down to that rebellious son, too? Qin Lengtian looked very surprised, looking up and down at this daughter of his. Father, I know that you've always had many grievances against Qin Hao, but this time when he left the Battle King's mansion, I'm worried that he'll be in danger. Qin Xingyue's voice carried a few moments of urgency. After all, he is also the son of my Battle King's mansion. In case, Qin Lengtian sniffed and frowned, his gaze like a torch, as if he could see into the hearts of people. Qin Xingyue couldn't help but lower her head, not daring to look directly at the other party. Looking at Qin Xingyue's appearance, Qin Lengtian was somewhat incredulous for a moment. He was well aware of his daughter's complex emotions towards Qin Hao, both disgust and sympathy, but more than anything else, it was the tug of being of the same bloodline. At the end of the day, excluding the bloodline connection, there was not much brother-sister love between the two. Now Qin Xingyue was willing to plead for Qin Hao, which made him very surprised. Yuer, don't you hate that rebellious son the most? Why do you now wish for me to go and bring this rebellious son back instead? Qin Xingyue was stunned, and hurriedly said, I'm watching my mother teared up because of Qin Hao's matter. I don't want to see my mother sad. I don't care about Qin Hao's death or life at all. Qin Lengtian snorted coldly. Your mother is a woman. What does she know? Yuer, do you know that a truly strong person rises in adversity? Qin Lengtian's voice was low and powerful. Qin Hao has the blood of the Battle King's house flowing in his body. He must learn to face all challenges, including life and death. Only then can he become a true pillar of strength. If you are sheltered by the Battle King's palace all day long, not thinking about progress and craving for pleasure, my Battle King's palace will not raise such idlers. As the words fell, Qin Xingyue hesitated, but still spoke. But what if someone wants to kill Qin Hao? Humph, I'll see who dares to touch my Qin Lengtian's son. Qin Lengtian snorted coldly. His tone was undoubted, as if there was an invisible force surging around him. His aura was like a rainbow, and the candlelight swayed, causing the air around him to freeze. He asked himself that no one dared to kill Qin Hao in this imperial city of the Stone Country. Even if Qin Hao was no longer treated by him, no matter how wasteful and playful he was always the son of the Battle King's house, the bloodline of this sacred soul realm Battle King Qin Lengtian of his. Anyone who wanted to kill Qin Hao had to first weigh whether they could withstand the wrath of the Battle King house. Don't mention Qin Hao's matter again. Father has his own plans, no matter what. He is also my son, your brother. Qin Lengtian waved his hand. Go, remember to tell your mother not to miss her big brother's birthday. Yuer excuses herself. Qin Xingyue bowed respectfully and turned to leave. Ugh. Qin Lengtian sighed heavily, but then let out a cold snort. Humph. Rebellious son. End of chapter. Inside the broken temple, Li Chengnan stepped in the middle of the pool of blood and looked around at the corpses, his brows furrowed. A man in black came to his side and kneeled down on one knee. Lord Li, it's been checked. There are no survivors. All dead? Li Sungnan was very surprised. Yes, my lord. And the murderer's methods are extremely cruel. The corpses of our people look simply miserable. The man in black forced down the stomach flips and agonized. It was the first time he had ever seen such a cold and ruthless approach to killing, as if the murderer was a cold killing machine that saw the slightest bit of humanity. Got it. Li Chengnan looked at the corpse on the ground and contemplated for a moment before waving his hand and leading his men away. Stone Kingdom Palace. The palace loomed large, gilded and illuminated. Inside a quiet and chic palace in the deep garden, Shi Luoyan held a secret letter in her hand, and the short and heavy words on the letter, mission failure, no return for all, pierced into her heart like cold ice. They're all dead? Shi Luoyan was a bit incredulous for a moment. Are you kidding me? One should know that in order to ensure that this assassination plan was foolproof, She had dispatched an innate realm cultivator and several Hotian realm cultivators, and such a lineup would be more than enough to deal with a waste of a son of the world, even if it was an innate realm cultivator of the same realm. Facing this group of killers cultivated by the Li family, they would still have to die with hatred. Yet it was such a luxurious lineup that died inside that broken temple. That Qin Hao was nothing but a wasteful son of the Battle King's house. How could he have a cultivation beyond the innate realm? How is that possible? Could it be that there are people from the Battle Royal family secretly helping, protecting Qin Hao? As soon as she thought of such a possibility, Shi Luoyan's heart immediately panicked a bit. Although the batch of Li family assassins she sent out rarely showed their faces, the weapon feats they were good at could still be recognized by the experts of the Battle King's house. But in a whirlwind, Shi Luoyan's heart suddenly calmed down. No way. According to the nature of War King Qin Langtian, how could Qin Hao be protected by the experts of the War King's house by his side? Definitely overthinking myself. After thinking for a while, Shi Luoyan realized that she might have been wrong about Qin Hao all along. Even the people from the Battle King's mansion were deceived by Qin Hao. Qin Hao. Ah, Qin Hao. I can't imagine that you are hiding so deeply. Having a cultivation that can kill an innate realm expert, yet acting like a dude. What a deep heart. After her mood calmed down, Shi Luoyan suddenly surged with a wave of anger and unwillingness. It was a disgrace that she, the third princess of the Stone Kingdom, had failed to succeed twice against a loser. Even if this punk hid his cultivation. What's worse, if Qin Langtian knew that Qin Hao had hidden his strength, he would definitely recall Qin Hao back to the Battle King's mansion, pouring out all his resources to cultivate him and make him the next Battle King. Facing a direct bloodline like Qin Hao, who was able to hide his strength from being discovered and had an extremely deep city mind, Qin Langtian, the old fox, would definitely not let go. At that time, instead of being able to break her engagement with Qin Hao, it might put her in an even more passive situation. As soon as she thought of this, Shi Luoyan became instantly furious, hating that she could not dismantle Qin Hao. She didn't want to be the link between the Stone Kingdom and the War Royal House. This was something she could never accept. Qin Hao, you must die, Shi Luoyan recited silently in her heart. Her beautiful eyes glittered with determination. Qin Hao, the waste fellow she originally thought could be easily manipulated, had now become a thorn in her side that she had to remove. She was well aware that once her plan to assassinate Qin Hao was revealed, it might attract the monstrous wrath of the Battle King's house, but as far as she was concerned, her Shi Luoyan's fate could only be decided by herself. Any stumbling block that presumes to hinder her pursuit of happiness will be removed. Thinking about it, Shi Luoyan's mind couldn't help but conjure up a purple-clad figure of outstanding elegance, and a gentle color appeared on her face. Only a teenage supreme being like the Xiang Saint Sun is worthy of this princess. The moment she thought of that purple-clothed figure, Shi Luoyan's mouth couldn't help but evoke a gentle smile, but it was then replaced by coldness. The Violet Sun Saint Sun, the Saint Sun of the immortal Holy Land Violet Sun Holy Land, was the recognized #1 heavenly pride of the desolate domain. It was the dream lover in the hearts of countless young girls, and the only one in her Shi Luoyan's heart. Looking at the entire desolate domain, only such an outstanding heavenly pride can stand shoulder to shoulder with her Shi Luoyan and go to that supreme peak of martial arts. So, for the sake of my Shi Luoyan's future, for the sake of my happiness with the Xiang Saint Sun, Qin Hao, just work hard and go to hell. Thinking of this, the killing intent in Shi Luoyan's heart grew stronger. Somebody, subordinate, a black-clothed figure flashed out, kneeling on one knee. Immediately send a message to the Li family, and tell them to send out a few late innate realm powerhouses, and make sure to intercept Qin Hao after he leaves the imperial city. And remember to cut off Qin Hao's head and present it to this princess, Shi Luoyan said in a deep voice. Even though the method of decapitation was a bit cruel, the only way she could settle down was to actually see Qin Hao's corpse. The black-clothed figure looked up at Shi Luoyan in slight surprise, as if surprised by Shi Luoyan's cruel methods. What? You got a problem? My subordinate obeys. The black-clothed figure bowed respectfully and turned around to leave, only to be called back by Shi Luoyan. Commander Li, you go along too, and remember to make it clean. Li Ying bowed at his words and quickly left. Looking at Li Ying's back, Shi Luoyan sighed slightly. I'm sorry, Sister Yue. Sister is going to go back on her word. Li Ying was at the Big Dipper realm cultivation, and it was as easy as a slap in the face to kill a Qin Hao. This time, Qin Hao will definitely die. Meanwhile, outside the imperial city, Qin Hao had already changed into an ordinary merchant's clothes, with a few imperceptible expectations on his face. He glanced back at the imperial city that had imprisoned him for so many years, and in his heart there was both the relief of relief and the infinite longing for the future. However, Qin Hao was clear that although he had left the imperial city, the real challenge had just begun. However, he wasn't afraid. Because the truly strong could only continuously challenge themselves and break through their limits to reach that legendary peak of martial arts. From now on, the sky is high enough for birds to fly. Xianhuan Great World. I, Qin Hao, am here. Qin Hao whispered softly to himself, an unprecedented light flashing in his eyes. His figure faded into the night. It wasn't long after Qin Hao left. A shadow of discord crept in. A young man dressed in gorgeous brocade clothes stood not far from the city gate. His gaze like a falcon locked on the direction Qin Hao had left. Qin Hao. Ah, Qin Hao. Away from the imperial city. Without the blessing of the Battle King's mansion. You are that wingless fledgling. With only the fate of being pulverized to pieces. The corner of Li Haoyu's mouth hooked into a cold smile. A contest of life, death and destiny has begun. End of chapter. The Warlord's Mansion. Ancient trees in the sky. On both sides of the green stone road. Delicate lanterns gently swaying with the wind. Reflecting mottled light and shadow. Qin Xingyue stood in front of the study window. Gazing into the distance. Unable to hide the anxiety and complexity between her brows. She wore a long dress embroidered with gold lace and lavender color. Her hair was pulled up in a bun. And jade hairpins were lightly inserted. Showing the nobility and majesty of a county princess. But at this moment, this dignity seemed to be shaken by the waves in her heart. Just then, a rhythmic knock sounded on the door. Mississippi, the pale voice came through the door. Come in. As the words fell, an old man with white hair and beard pushed open the door, turned to look around, and then carefully closed the door. Uncle Fu, is there any news about Qin Hao? Qin Xingyue sighed and said, because Qin Langtian couldn't pull his face to find Qin Hao, he had no choice but to ask his butler, Fu Bo, by himself to find out Qin Hao's news. The housekeeper Fu Bo nodded and said, Miss, I've inquired about it. It's just, Fubuki wanted to say something. Just what? It's just that the news the old slave inquired about is a bit unbelievable. Uncle Fu simply couldn't believe that the wasteful son of the world, who had lived under his own nose for several years, could do something like that. Qin Xingyue's curiosity was also mobilized, but there's no harm in saying it. Uncle Fu bowed, with a few points of gravity on his face. Miss, according to the news that old slave got, that young master Qin Hao actually beheaded a late innate realm assassin alone within the broken surface of the imperial city. This matter has been spread in a small range in the upper levels. I'm afraid it's not false. Uncle Fu, are you sure you're not mistaken? Although Qin Xingyue's voice was light, it carried a majesty that could not be ignored as she once again confirmed to the housekeeper beside her. Fu Bo. Fubuki nodded solemnly. Qin Xingyue's beautiful eyes opened roundly. The teacup held tightly in her hand trembled slightly. The tea spilled out a few drops and landed on her lapel. But she did not even realize it. To kill a late innate realm expert alone? That Qin Hao, who had been ridiculed by her countless times, that wasteful elder brother who was useless in her eyes, now possessed a strength comparable to her own? This sudden news was like a bolt from the blue, making it difficult for Qin Xingyue to accept for a moment. How is that possible? How could he be like this? Qin Xingyue muttered, her heart a mix of emotions. She recalled all the belittling and mocking she had done to Qin Hao in the past, and couldn't help but feel a sense of shame and uneasiness. If things were true, if Qin Hao really had that kind of strength, if she was surpassed by such a person who had once been stepped on by her, where would her pride and self-respect be placed? Qin Hao, how deep are you hiding? Where is Qin Hao now? Qin Xingyue's beautiful eyes flashed with strange colors as she opened her mouth. Miss, when the old slave went to the broken temple, he found that Qin Hao had left behind a line of large characters, perhaps related to his whereabouts. What's the word? There's no place for a man here. There's a place for him. Uncle Fu bowed slightly. Old slave guessed that he most likely intends to leave the imperial city, and is only afraid that he is already on his way now. He can't leave. Qin Xingyue shouted in a low voice, then was suddenly stunned. Why are you in such a hurry? Could it be that Qin Hao made her feel the pressure? Uncle Fu also noticed Qin Xingyue's abnormality and said, Miss, why don't the old slave go and fetch him back? Uncle Fu, send someone there immediately and make sure to keep Qin Hao alive. Yes, ma'am. Uncle Fu was just about to turn around and leave when he suddenly froze in place, looking at Qin Xingyue with some surprise. Miss, even asked him to protect Qin Hao? Could it be that someone dares to misbehave with Qin Hao? Uncle Fu suddenly said, Miss, should we report this matter to the king? Father, he's gone to the palace. There's no time. Qin Xingyue urged. Uncle Fu, what are you still waiting for? Go quickly. Old slave excuses himself. Uncle Fu respectfully bowed and led the way, leaving Qin Xingyue alone in the study. Qin Xingyue looked out the window at the darkening sky, her heart surging with an unprecedented sense of crisis, strength that can decapitate an innate realm cultivator. She used to always taunt Qin Hao as a waste, but if she is really surpassed by this waste, Qin Hao, do you think I'll be afraid just because of this? No matter what your purpose is for hiding your cultivation, I won't let you have the chance to surpass me. Qin Xingyue gritted her teeth and shouted in a low, indignant voice. Trail. Qin Hao stepped into the dim light of the morning sun, and after leaving the imperial city, he set out on the road to the great wasteland alone. Before formally starting his own cultivation path, he planned to make a trip to the great wasteland to pay homage to the old village chief. On the one hand, this was an explanation for his original body's obsession. On the other hand, it was also considered a closure for his past. From now on, there will only be the traveler Qin Hao, not the War King House Qin family Qin Hao. However, fate didn't seem to intend to make it easy for him. Hey, punk! A teasing voice came from behind Qin Hao. He turned around, only to see Li Yifeng, who was dressed in a brocade suit, looking at himself with a cold smile. Behind the other party stood a group of martial artists dressed in black with cold faces. Li Yifeng, it's you! The person at the head was none other than the young master of the Li family, Li Yifeng, a youth who prided himself on being the best of the young generation in the imperial city. In these 3 years, Li Yifeng often invited Qin Hao to drink. Qin Hao didn't expect that he would actually be obstructed by this person when he left the imperial city. Qin Hao, I really didn't expect that you would still have the guts to leave the imperial city after killing someone from my Li family, without the blessing of the War King's house. Do you really think that I would be afraid of your status as the son of the world? Today is the day of your death. The corner of Li Yifeng's mouth hooked into a cold smile, and a sinister light flashed in his eyes. Beside him, several martial artists of the innate realm who also had notable cultivation were waiting in a strict formation, obviously aiming at Qin Hao's life. Qin Hao's face was calm, his gaze like a torch as he swept around the surrounding enemies, already having a plan in his heart. This group of guys obviously came prepared. It seems that this battle is unavoidable. The only way to show one's determination and strength is to stop it with a battle. Li Yifeng, there is no grudge between you and me. Why are you looking for trouble from me? Li Yifeng snorted. Grudges? Just by virtue of the fact that you, a waste of space, are not worthy of the third princess, and you are trying to get your hands on my woman. This is a capital offense. But, Li Yifeng turned his words around and laughed strangely. If you are willing to kneel down and kowtow and beg for forgiveness, I might consider sparing your life. The third princess? Qin Hao frowned. It seemed that there were hidden secrets he didn't know about. There's no point in talking more. Since you've chosen to stand against me, then I won't be blamed for being merciless. Qin Hao's voice was not loud, but it was permeated with an icy chill. He, so eager to die? Li Yifeng sneered. Get him killed for me. As the words fell, a group of martial artists quickly killed Qin Hao. The battle was imminent. Qin Hao's figure moved slightly, spiritual energy surging within his body, and a powerful aura instantly erupted, causing the surrounding air to seemingly freeze. In the next moment, the underworld demon sword quietly came out of its sheath, cutting through a black light and carrying Qin Hao to fall into the crowd. But this time, Qin Hao clearly detected a trace of resistance. This group of innate realm experts who had come to kill themselves were superior to the previous group of rabble, both in terms of quantity and quality. Obviously it was a bad fight, but Qin Hao wasn't afraid. To cultivate the emotionless sword Dao, all one had to do was to cut off love affairs, and fear was just as much a part of that. Cutting off the shackles of fear in one's heart is the only way to achieve the merciless sword path. Ha ha ha, kid, suffer. A black-clothed figure suddenly flashed behind Qin Hao, laughed maniacally, and the big knife in his hand glowed with red light, violently chopping downward, vowing to split Qin Hao into 2 halves. End of chapter. The big knife would fall, with the momentum of force pressing down 1,000 mountains, and the black-robed man with the big knife revealed a cruel smile, as if he had already seen Qin Hao being split into 2 halves under this knife. However, just in the nick of time, only Qin Hao's figure quickly twisted. The large knife that glowed with a life-threatening red light grazed his shirt, bringing up a blazing stream of air. No good. It actually dodged it. The black-robed man with the large sword in his hand was very shocked and said in his heart that it was not good. At this time, he was still in mid-air. The old force had been exhausted, and the new force had not yet been born. Qin Hao's voice was cold and piercing. Your reaction is too slow. Afterwards, the underworld demon sword in his hand instantly flared up with a soul-capturing black aura, stabbing straight into the chest of the black-clothed man with the big knife at a weird and tricky angle, and then violently pulling it out. Hot blood gushed out, staining Qin Hao's clothes red. The man in black with a big sword covered his chest, his eyes looking at Qin Hao with disbelief, and fell to the ground heavily. Li Yifeng couldn't help but feel palpitations when he saw this. A sword killing an innate realm expert? How is this possible? This kid's strength isn't right. Form a formation to deal with him, a black-robed man said angrily, and a group of innate realm experts quickly formed a formation, killing Qin Hao once again. Qin Hao held the underworld demon sword and met him head-on. spiritual energy was catalyzed and infused into the underworld demon sword, which flickered with a bizarre light, and every time it was swung, it brought up a gust of bloody wind and rain. There were screams and screams. Qin Hao was like the god of death, rapidly harvesting the lives of his enemies. This, how? Li Feng swallowed and took a few steps back. The experts of the innate realm were actually like grass under Qin Hao's sword. That's not possible. As the long sword slashed through the neck of the last innate realm expert, only the Li family's young master remained on the entire battlefield. The young master of the Li family couldn't help but have a look of horror on his face as he looked at the corpses all over the ground. Qin Hao gently wiped his magic sword and slowly walked towards Li Feng. He trembled and pointed at Qin Hao, saying, "You, what are you doing?" Qin Hao was speechless, only that the devil sword in his hand once again glowed with weird black light, and Li Feng was so scared that he fell on his butt on the ground and retreated in panic. Qin Hao, you can't kill me. I'm the young master of the Li family. If you kill me, the Li family won't let you go. There was a hint of despair in Li Feng's voice as he tried to use his identity as the last bargaining chip, but he didn't know that in Qin Hao's mind, there had long been no way back. Who sent you? Qin Hao's voice was as cold as ice. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth, revealing a strong killing intent. He needed more than just answers. He was more interested in knowing if it was the Battle Royal House that had sent someone to deal with him. Li Feng looked at Qin Hao. His body couldn't stop trembling. If he didn't say anything, he would immediately die now. But if he said it now, he was afraid that neither the third princess nor the War Royal House would let him go. Speak or die. Qin Hao approached closer and closer, his eyes gradually becoming gloomy. He had already planned to cut through the past, and if these people were sent by the Battle King's palace, then they were destined to not make good. If a man kills me, I will kill him. If the Battle King's house wanted to kill him, he would surely destroy the Battle King's house. The young master of the Li family swallowed his saliva and was about to open his mouth to tell the truth. However, right at this moment, a powerful aura exploded like thunder, killing towards Qin Hao. Qin Hao was shocked in his heart. His left hand yanked Li Feng's collar, and his right hand immediately swung his sword to resist, only to see the coming person slapping his palm on top of the sword. A huge force suddenly came along the sword, and Qin Hao retreated a dozen steps before stabilizing himself. Li, Commander Li? When Li Feng saw that the person coming was Li Ying, he was stunned. Then he was ecstatic. Qin Hao, you're dead. Commander Li is a powerhouse of the Big Dipper realm. Li Ying gazed at Qin Hao and said in a deep voice, "Release the young lord, or else, die." That's right. Qin Hao, let me go, or you will die without. Before the words fell, Qin Hao ran a sword from top to bottom through Li Feng's ceiling, and the latter's body couldn't stop trembling and hesitating, and a yellowish-white substance flowed out along his lower body. Ding! Congratulations to the host for completing 10 kills in the innate realm, rewarded with 100 kill value. The system beep sounded noisy. Qin Hao drew his long sword, his face showing disgust. Li Ying's eyes widened in shock and anger. Asshole! How dare you dare to kill my Li family's young master? Just a few innate realms. Just kill them, Qin Hao said indifferently. Only then did Li Ying notice that the corpses of the Li clan's experts were all around him. Such a vicious killing move. This son really has a strong killing heart. To be able to kill all of these innate realm experts, the cultivation of this waste of a son of the Battle King's house in front of him was definitely not weak either. This Qin family's son, he was hiding too deeply. Qin Hao looked at Li Ying and asked coldly, "Are you also a member of the Li family?" Li Ying said in a deep voice, "Those who are about to die. Why ask more questions?" As the words fell, his figure flashed, and the long sword behind him was sheathed, directly striking out. Qin Hao was also not the least bit afraid, and the light of the underworld demon sword flooded up, pointing directly at Li Ying. However, he had misestimated the gap in cultivation between the innate realm and the Big Dipper realm. Li Ying of the Big Dipper realm's moves were severe, and each move contained a powerful force. After fighting but a few times, Qin Hao was at a disadvantage, and his body was also cut by the long sword in many places, and his injuries caused his strength to drop further. Li Ying was, after all, a powerful person of the Big Dipper realm, while Qin Hao was only of the innate realm, and there was an essential gap between the two side strengths. It can't go on like this, Qin Hao secretly said in his heart. Qin Hao forced Li Ying back with a sweeping move, then quickly took out the devouring devil gourd. A mouthful of 10,000 spirit wine entered his throat, and as he quickly recited the wine god mantra under his breath, his body's aura actually instantly skyrocketed, directly reaching the heavenly Dipper realm. Immediately following that, he called out the system again, and without hesitation, he added all of the kill value to his cultivation. In a flash, the aura on his body skyrocketed, rapidly reached the Big Dipper realm. A secret art that can raise your strength? Commander Li's face changed slightly at the sight. However, he did not flinch, but instead became more determined to kill. A mere secret art with an unstable foundation. How could it compare to his cultivation at the late stage of the actual Big Dipper realm? Qin Hao, even if you raise your strength, you will definitely die today. If you want to blame it on your bad luck. Li Ying saw the right moment, stabbed his sword into Qin Hao's abdomen, and slapped his palm on his opponent's chest. Qin Hao spewed out blood and his body flew backwards. But it was also this palm that actually allowed Qin Hao to break through to the middle stage of the Heavenly Dipper realm in the process. Immediately afterward, he quickly fled the battlefield with the help of the counterforce. No good. Li Ying's face changed. He was trapped. I, Qin Hao, will remember this hatred of the Li family. When we visit the Imperial City again someday, we will make the Li family perish. Before the words fell, Qin Hao had transformed into a black shadow and disappeared into the night. Looking at Qin Hao's distant back, Li Ying's face was incomparably ugly. Big Dipper realm, how could he really break through to the Big Dipper realm? Blood spilled from the corners of Li Ying's mouth, and he was also lightly injured from the battle just now. What are we going to tell the third princess? Yet just then, several powerful auras suddenly fell, and an explosive shout rang out like thunder. Li family, how dare you? End of chapter. A corner of the Imperial City. The silhouette of the palace looked more solemn and mysterious in the moonlight. The princess's mansion was brightly lit, but it couldn't hide a hint of gloom. Shi Luoyan sat in front of the exquisite carved window. The moonlight sprinkled on her stunningly beautiful face, but it did not reflect the usual gentleness and serenity. Instead, it was replaced by a deep sense of contemplation. She lightly twisted a string of warm jade beads in her hand, and with each turn, she seemed to be weighing some inner decision. The Big Dipper realm. Are you sure that waste has really reached this realm? Shi Luoyan's voice was low and powerful, carrying an unquestionable majesty. Even the battle-hardened Li Ying could not help but feel a chill in his heart at this moment. The strength of the princess seems to have grown stronger again. Li Ying knelt on the ground, his tone firm. Your Highness, my subordinate personally fought with that guy Qin Hao for dozens of rounds, and could have killed him, but who knows that Qin Hao suddenly gained a lot of strength, and his methods were so bizarre that my subordinate didn't pay attention and let him slip away. It was my subordinate's unfavorable work that failed to leave Qin Hao behind. My subordinate is willing to take the punishment. Li Ying bent his head, his words revealing a hint of helplessness. I thought that this time, Qin Hao's death would be the nail in the coffin, but who knew that the other party had suddenly broken through to become a strong person of the Big Dipper realm, and his cultivation realm was not much different compared to his own. Qin Hao's sudden outburst of elevation had undoubtedly broken his cognition. When Shi Luoyan heard this, her eyebrows knitted tightly, and a flash of complex emotions flashed through her eyes. She had thought that Qin Hao was nothing more than a piece of trash that could be manipulated at will. However, what was in front of her made her realize that she had perhaps underestimated this former fiancé. She couldn't believe it even more. Obviously a useless waste. How did she transform into a cultivation genius? Could it be that Qin Hao had some opportunities? If this is really the case, if Qin Langtian learns of this matter, he will definitely recall Qin Hao back to the Battle King's mansion. At that time, Shi Luoyan's voice ended abruptly, but the implication was self-evident. Her marriage contract with Qin Hao was originally a pawn set up by her father in order to link up her feelings with the War Royal House and check and balance the War Royal House. If Qin Hao was a waste, and there was no one left to succeed the War King's house, he himself could still fight to withdraw from the marriage. But in time, if Qin Hao should really become a climate, then the marriage contract between her and Qin Hao would be finalized. No way! I must not let this happen. Shi Luoyan stood up violently, exuding an irresistible aura around her. Your Highness, do you think this Qin Hao could possibly have practiced a devil technique? Li Ying frowned tightly, his eyes revealing a trace of doubt as he voiced his opinion. When Shi Luoyan heard Li Ying's words, the teacup she was holding in her hand gave a slight lurch, and a thoughtful look flashed in her eyes. What makes you say that, Commander Li? Li Ying continued. Think about it, Princess. The murderous and cold-bloodedness displayed by this person Qin Hao is really chilling. Moreover, the secret arts he performs are also extremely bizarre. Just a few days ago he was just a useless waste, with no cultivation talent or strength to speak of. But in a short period of time, he has transformed into a Heavenly Dipper realm powerhouse. This kind of rapid increase in strength is just too strange. Among the Gongfu I know, only the legendary demon race Gongfu could possibly achieve such amazing results. Devil clan Gong methods have always been vicious and poisonous, and those who cultivate them tend to have a drastic change in temperament and become cruel and murderous. Looking at Qin Hao's behavior nowadays, he is really too similar to those who have been eroded by the Devil clan's Gong methods. Princess, if this is really the case, then Qin Hao will definitely become a big problem. Shi Luoyan's eyes lit up at the words. Right. The Devil tribe is an evil existence that everyone has to kill since ancient times. If the news that Qin Hao is a spy of the devil tribe and cultivates the devil tribe's gung fu spreads out, I'm afraid that there is no place for him in the whole world. As for whether or not Qin Hao was a real spy of the demon race, who cared? The devil appears, everyone shouts, and is executed. Thinking of this, Shi Luoyan couldn't help but reveal a cold smile. Li Ying, you immediately put out the word that Qin Hao cultivates devilish skills and is addicted to killing his fellow clansmen in exchange for an increase in his strength and cultivation, and then fabricate some stories to circulate, to situate his identity as a spy of the devil clan. Li Ying arched his hand and saluted. My subordinate takes orders. Shi Luoyan looked at the bright moon outside the window, her complexion growing colder and colder. Qin Hao. Ah, Qin Hao. As long as the name of you being a spy of the devil tribe is confirmed, I will immediately draw the withdrawal of the marriage to my father. If you want me, Shi Luoyan, to marry you, it's never possible. Meanwhile, inside the War King's mansion, the atmosphere was equally grave. Qin Xingyu sat in her study, playing with an exquisite jade hairpin in her hands. It was her favorite object. Whenever she was upset, she would take it out and scrutinize it. Uncle Fu, you said that Shi Luoyan actually sent a heavenly deity realm powerhouse to deal with Qin Hao? Qin Xingyue was a bit angry, although she didn't have deep feelings with Qin Hao, but after all, she was a member of the same clan. Besides, Shi Luoyan had already promised her, but now she was sending a powerful person of the heavenly dipper realm to deal with Qin Hao, which was too much of a disrespect to herself. What about Qin Hao? Is he still alive? Qin Xingyue had a complicated look on her face. In her opinion, when a Big Dipper realm powerhouse made a move, Qin Hao would definitely die. Fu Bo lowered his head and replied respectfully, Miss, it said that Qin Hao didn't lose his life. Instead, he even escaped from that heavenly deity realm powerhouse. What did you say? The jade hairpin in Qin Xingyue's hand trembled slightly, a hint of surprise and complexity flashing through her eyes. Facing a Big Dipper realm powerhouse, Qin Hao even managed to escape? Her heart was inexplicably a bit uncomfortable, and Qin Hao's absurd appearance of singing and indulging in horseplay the whole day came to her mind. That trash Qin Hao, who was once laughed at by everyone, was able to have such strength? On the basis of him? The jealousy and unwillingness in Qin Xingyue's heart grew as wildly as weeds. He's still alive? Qin Xingyue muttered, then shook her head again. How is it possible? Isn't he just a waste? How could he have become so strong? Just then, Uncle Fu seemed to remember something important and lowered his voice to whisper in Qin Xingyue's ear. Qin Xingyue's face suddenly changed at the words, and the jade hairpin in her hand almost fell off. What? It's already rumored outside that Qin Hao is a spy of the devil race? She repeated the words incredulously, her mind a mix of emotions. Even if she was not related to Qin Hao by blood, she knew very well that once such a rumor spread, it would be doomed for Qin Hao. It even implicated the warlord's house. Your battle royal family's sons are all devil spies, colluding with the devil race. Did your battle royal family really not notice anything at all? Is it true that your battle royal house didn't harbor demonic spies or even collude with the demons? Once she thought of this, Qin Xingyu suddenly felt the gravity of the matter, and the person behind all of this was undoubtedly Shi Luoyan. End of chapter. Asshole. Inside the War King's mansion, the atmosphere was as heavy as iron, and Qin Longtian's voice shook like thunder. Filled with anger, he had just returned from the palace with a face so furious that it seemed as if he could drip ink, and under one palm, the solid tabletop instantly turned into powder and splattered in all directions, highlighting the rage that was almost gushing out from within him. A number of maidservants and guards within the mansion had knelt down on the ground, their faces showing panic, fearing that Qin Lengtian would take the wrath of Qin Lengtian onto himself. They were well aware of the majesty and coldness of this battle king, and at this moment, they were even more aware of the monstrous anger in his body. Rebel son! Sins! Qin Lengtian roared angrily once again, each word seeming to be squeezed out from between his teeth, filled with hatred and disappointment towards his unworthy son. Qin Hao! His voice echoed through the hall, chilling the heart as if even the air had frozen. Qin Xingyue hurriedly stepped into the hall. Startled by the sudden storm, she swept her gaze and was immediately attracted by the bright yellow imperial decree on the floor, which clearly stated that Qin Lengtian should personally investigate the matter of Qin Hao's demonic initiation. She was instantly distraught, sensing the gravity of the situation. Oh no! Qin Hao's matter was already known by the emperor. Father, you already know? Qin Xingyue frowned, a hint of uneasiness in her tone. This rebellious son cultivated demonic powers and killed the Li family's young master. It's already a big deal all over the city. His Holiness has decreed that I personally ascertain this matter. Qin Lengtian gritted his teeth in anger. Although he hadn't thoroughly investigated the matter, he had already decided in his heart that Qin Hao must be related to the Devil Dao. How could he not know the details of that rebellious son? How could he suddenly become an expert of the Big Dipper realm and commit such a heinous crime? If Qin Hao hadn't fallen into the devil's path, wouldn't it mean that he, Qin Langtian, had no eyes, failing to notice even Qin Hao's hidden cultivation? This was simply a great irony and insult to this holy soul realm cultivation of his own. Qin Langtian already had a conclusion in his mind, and he determined that Qin Hao had fallen into the devil's path because he was harboring a grudge after leaving the War King's mansion. This betrayal and degradation overwhelmed him with pain and anger. His hallowed War King Qin Langtian's bloodline had chosen to fall into the devil's path. It's a shame. Just then, there was a sudden cacophony of voices from outside, mixed with cries. Qin Langtian's brows furrowed as he said in a deep voice, "What's all the noise outside? All irrelevant people? Drive them all out for me." One of the guards hurried in and dropped to one knee. "Lord Battle King, the Li family is here." Qin Langtian's pupils instantly narrowed as he violently got up. The Li family is here. However, before he could react, he only saw two figures flying into the hall and smashing heavily on the ground, spitting blood from their mouths and their breath wilting. It was clearly two of the Battle King's house's caretaker guards. "Battle King, your Battle King house's son killed my Li family's young master. You must give my Li family an explanation for this matter." Li Shang, the head of the Li family, led a group of Li family members to aggressively barge inside the War King's mansion. Qin Langtian frowned. "Unbridled. This is the War King's mansion. What does your Li family want?" Li Shang took a step forward, pointed his finger at Qin Langtian, and said angrily, "Qin Hao killed my son. Qin Langtian, I want you to hand over Qin Hao immediately. Otherwise, my Li family will definitely go through thick and thin with you." Qin Hao had already left the Battle King's mansion some time ago. "He's not in the mansion." "You lie," Li Shang shouted in a stern voice. "It's clearly you who want to harbor Qin Hao. This king acts honorably. Why would he need to lie?" Qin Langtian took a step forward. The pressure of a Saint Soul realm powerhouse emanated. Li Shang couldn't help but feel a palpitation in his heart, and then his anger rose. "I come to ask you for an explanation and you try to use your power over me? Surnamed Qin, don't think that your cultivation at the Sacred Soul realm can scare me. Do it if you have the guts. If you don't give me an explanation for Qin Hao's killing of my son, I'll make you pay for your life even if I'm not the head of the Li family." Li Shang didn't allow a single step. "Humph. A mere Li family dares to act recklessly in front of this king?" Qin Langtian snorted coldly. "It's true that rebellious son isn't in the mansion at the moment, but this king will never harbor him. This rebellious son has even fallen into a demon. This king will surely destroy his family in justice. I'm going to believe you when you talk. Come on people, pass down the order to completely remove Qin Hao from the Battle King's mansion." Qin Langtian's voice was icy cold. "From now on, he will no longer have any relationship with my Qin family. This king will even personally kill this demon with his own hands to give the world an explanation." As the words fell, there was a dead silence in the room. Even Li Shang did not expect Qin Langtian to be so decisive, choosing to remove Qin Hao and kill him. Qin Xingyue's lips moved slightly, wanting to say something, but she hesitated. She was going to say that the matter had not been finalized and whether it was too arbitrary, but as soon as she thought that Qin Hao had already broken through to the Big Dipper realm, surpassing her own cultivation of the late innate realm, an unspeakable displeasure, and even jealousy welled up in her heart. She ultimately failed to open her mouth to persuade Qin Langtian. "Humph. This matter is not yet finished. Qin Langtian, I'm waiting for you to execute the devil Qin Hao. Go!" Li Shang waved his hand and the crowd of Li family members quickly left. As Qin Langtian's order was given, the matter of the War King's mansion wanting to kill Qin Hao, the son of the demonic world, quickly spread through the streets of the Imperial City, and the entire Imperial City instantly boiled up. People talked about Qin Hao's degeneration, and for a while, almost no one in the Imperial City did not spit on Qin Hao. Instead, Qin Langtian's act of righteousness was widely praised, and for a time, Qin Langtian's reputation reached unprecedented heights. Inside the residence of the third princess, Li Ying walked into the house, knelt down on one knee, and congratulated Shi Luoyan. "Congratulations princess! Congratulations princess!" Qin Langtian was furious when he learned that Qin Hao had become a devil, and ordered that Qin Hao, the devil, be put to death. This matter is known all over the city, so Qin Hao will definitely die. The corner of Shi Luoyan's mouth curled up into a playful smile as she sniffed. This Battle King was really interesting. He just spread some random rumors himself, and he even took it seriously, not even bothering to check it out. It seemed that his dissatisfaction with Qin Hao had already reached its peak, but this is good, Shi Luoyan thought in her heart. After sitting on the matter of Qin Hao's fall from the devil, the marriage contract between her and him was considered to be completely dissolved. She was already dissatisfied with this marriage, and it had been a thorn in her heart, but now she was finally able to pull it out. She had a good reason to get out of that bind. "Pass the order down." This young lady is going to completely draw a line with that Qin Hao. And in the future, no one is allowed to mention the word Qin Hao within my princess mansion. Sure, Luoyan's voice carried a hint of indifference. Although their own purpose has been achieved, but the remaining drama is still to do enough. At the very least, one had to show that one felt uncomfortable and hard and pained by the news that Qin Hao had become a demon. In this way, when he went to request for the marriage contract to be broken, I was afraid that Qin Lengtian would not be able to say anything. She wanted everyone to know that the reason why she, sure Luoyan, had taken the initiative to give up this engagement was because of Qin Hao's depravity, not because she, sure Luoyan, was thin-skinned. End of chapter. Stone Country. Inside Stormcloud City. Inside an inn room in the center of Fengyan City, Qin Hao was sitting quietly on his knees. His eyes were tightly closed, like a statue of a god in meditation, and his body emitted a layer of faint light, which shone brightly and dimly, rhythmically moving like breathing. A moment later, Qin Hao slowly opened his eyes, a glint of essence flashing through those eyes, and then he heavily exhaled a mouthful of turbid qi. This mouthful of turbid qi was like a white pizzle, quickly dissipating in the air. 2 days had passed since the last thrilling battle with Liang. During these 2 days, Qin Hao had stayed in this inn in Fengyan City to recuperate, and with the help of the miraculous efficacy of 10,000 spirit wine, in just 2 days' time, the serious injuries in his body were miraculously healed. Not only that, even those shocking trauma wounds, at the moment, there was not the slightest hint of scars from the injuries that had once been inflicted. At this moment, Qin Hao's body exuded vigorous vitality, as if the legendary holy beast Phoenix was reborn in nirvana, full of vitality. Qin Hao stood up and moved his limbs, the bones of his entire body emitting a crackling sound, every inch of his muscles full of elasticity and strength. He closed his eyes and felt with his heart the stabilization of his heavenly dipper realm cultivation within him. Every strand of breath flowing through his meridians was filled with majestic power. That power raced through his body as if it could erupt at any moment. It's time to go. Qin Hao revealed a satisfied smile and muttered. Since his injuries had completely healed and his own state had reached its peak, he should also continue on his way. A hint of determination flashed in Qin Hao's eyes. The road ahead was full of unknowns and challenges, but he was fearless. When he thought of the familiar trace of the aura of the technique practiced by the War King's house that he had vaguely detected when he was far away from the battle with Liang last time, he had some guesses in his heart. I'm afraid that in the end, it was the people from the Battle King's house who made a move to stop the other party, and only then did they give themselves a chance to escape. It seemed that this assassination operation against himself did not come from the hands of the Battle King's house, but from someone else. This realization made Qin Hao feel a slight relief in his heart, even though his relationship with the Battle Royal House had been completely severed. After all, the same bloodline as Qin Lengtian flowed through his body. He really didn't want to go to the point of no return with Qin Lengtian until it was absolutely necessary. Taking a deep breath, Qin Hao pushed open the door of his room, ready to embark on a new journey. At the gates of Fengyan City. At this moment, the scene at the gates of Fengyan City was very different from the previous days. A team of guards were heavily armed and scattered everywhere. Their eyes were alert as if they were on the verge of an enemy, carefully surveying their surroundings, and the 3 gates out of the city were even heavily guarded and heavily guarded. The soldiers held lances and wore long swords at their waists, and the armor on their bodies shone with an icy light under the sunlight. Even the head of the city had been set up with a huge crossbow, its arrows flashing cold and ready to fire. Seeing this scene, Qin Hao was slightly puzzled in his heart. He remembered that 2 days ago, when he had entered the city, the guards were very lax and the people were peaceful. In just 2 days' time, what significant thing had happened to make this city's guards become so unusually tight? Qin Hao walked toward the city gate with a steady pace. It was then that he realized that the guards at the city gates were holding a stone that emitted a strange light in their hands, and were strictly checking everyone who entered and exited the city gates. He still had some impression of this stone. This thing was called the Demon Measuring Stone. It wasn't of high value, but this thing had an extremely important role, which was to detect the aura of the demon race. Anyone who practiced demonic techniques would have nothing to hide once they got close to the Demon Measuring Stone, a magical stone that had always been an important tool for humans to defend themselves against demonic invasions. Just then, Qin Hao heard the passers-by on the roadside talking, and his name seemed to be mentioned in the words, so he was curious and came over. But immediately afterward, his face suddenly became incomparably ugly. The worldly son of the Battle King's house, Qin Hao, has fallen into the devil's path. This Qin Hao deserves to die. It's really worse than that. Yes, how old is this devil? And he has already reached the cultivation level of the Big Dipper realm. Perhaps he has already killed hundreds and thousands of people, using the blood and souls of those innocent people to cultivate the devil's skill. In order to have this kind of strength, simply heartless, delusional for the human race. A young scholar gritted his teeth and said, The folding fan in his hand was pinched tightly, as if the folding fan was Qin Hao, itching to break him into pieces. Pity those benevolent men and women of the Li family, who failed to get rid of the devil, but were instead killed by that heartless devil. An old man next to him sighed painfully, shaking his head while tapping the ground hard with the walking stick in his hand. Fortunately, my stone country is protected by the War King. War King Qin Lengtian is righteous and deserves to be my stone kingdom's War King. The people of my stone country are free from worry, the scholar said, his eyes filled with worship and admiration for Qin Lengtian. Passers-by almost invariably reviled Qin Hao, denouncing him for practicing devilish techniques and killing his fellow clansmen. Those words were full of contemptuous spurning of him, and every word, every sentence, was like a sharp dagger that mercilessly pierced his heart. Qin Hao stood in the crowd, and when he heard these words, his expression instantly became as cold as frost. His hands were tightly clenched into fists, his nails deeply embedded in his palms, blood seeping out from between his fingers. But he was oblivious to it, sneering in his heart. He naturally understood why all this was happening. From the comments of the passers-by around him, he already knew clearly that Qin Lengtian had openly characterized himself as a devil without any substantial evidence, and even intended to put on a show of righteousness as a way to win the praise and support of the crowd. What a great justice! An angry flame flickered in Qin Hao's eyes, and that blood-red color became more and more intense, as if it was about to burn up. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly, and a piercing chill flickered in his eyes. Well, devil, ha! Qin Hao recited silently in his heart, the corner of his mouth hooked into a cold smile. Then I'll become that world's #1 devil as you all wish. This is not just a word of anger, but also a deep-seated struggle against the injustice of fate, and a counterattack against the stigma that has been imposed on him. He knew that from this moment on, his life would change completely, and he would be the enemy of the entire world. Since everyone in the world had decided that he was a devil, then he would become a true devil, a devil that would make everyone tremble. He would use his power to make those who had slandered him and framed him pay. But he was fearless. He wanted to let those people know that he, Qin Hao, was not a lamb to be slaughtered, not an object to be slandered at will. End of chapter. Langya Holy Land. Above the vast land, the clouds and mist were dense with spiritual qi, and the immortal qi was curling up, as if it was an earthly paradise that transcended the mortal world. And every inch of the land contained endless vitality and mysteries. Far below the sky, a palace towers, brilliant, magnificent, like an immortal palace above the 9 heavens, inspiring awe. That is the residence of the Luanjia's sacred lord, Luanjia's sacred palace, a collection of heaven and earth's aura, the essence of the sun and the moon of the magnificent hall, highlighting the supreme majesty and splendor of the Langya Holy Land. And at that moment a family feast was being held in the palace. Su Shi, these are all your favorite dishes. I purposely had someone go and prepare them for you, the Langya sacred lord Lin Tianxian said with a smile, his eyes filled with favor. One could only see an exquisitely carved pearwood table filled with a wide array of dishes, and as far as the eye could see, they were all rare. This is with the 8th grade ferocious beast red flame dragon tiger's tender tenderloin, after special cooking techniques, with 1,000 years of Ganoderma lucidum, 1,000 years of ginseng and other heavenly treasures made from the delicacies. The meat is tender and juicy, melt in the mouth. The fragrance of the medicinal herbs and the fragrance of the meat is a perfect blend. Is the brother's heart good? You also taste. And this emerald spirit lotus root, born from the water of the spirit spring, is refreshing and delicious to eat, with a lingering flavor on the lips and teeth. This you also taste. This is I specially let people go to the deep sea to fight the spirit fish made of chopped fish. The fish meat is tender, thin as a cicada wing, with my Luanjia Holy Land exclusive secret sauce, the taste of a great. Lin Tianxian eagerly pinched food for his sister, the look of favor in his eyes growing stronger. In his opinion, his sister in the War King's residence followed Qin Lengtian, that bastard, only afraid to not have a few days of good days. Now it is not easy to come back to a trip. They are the brother must be well entertained. However, in the face of this table full of delicacies, Lin Sushi only nodded gently, her eyes wandering a little, with an absent-minded look. Just then, a light and agile figure came over. Auntie, you've come. At this moment, a young girl's voice with surprise rang out. Lin Sushi turned to look at the words, only to see a young girl walking in. The young girl was dressed in a pink flowing fairy dress, with a lavender ribbon tied around her waist, making her waist even more slender, and her cherry mouth was slightly raised with a playful smile, her whole person exuding a lively, spirited aura. Is this Cher? I haven't seen you for a year, and you've grown up again. It's prettier, too, Schwerer. It's been a long time. Come. This is a gift from your aunt. Lin Sushi forced a smile and took out a gift and handed it to Lin Schwer, then sized up the other party. Worthy of being Hauer's cousin. Yuer's cousin. Any more is very similar. As Lin Sushi looked at Lin Shuer in front of her, she couldn't help but think of what happened to Qin Hao again and sighed once more. Auntie, are you upset about something? Lin Shuer blinked her big soulful eyes and asked curiously. Lin Tianxian also frowned and said, Su Shi, you've been sighing ever since you came to the Holy Land. What exactly happened? Lin Sushi sighed, a hint of sadness showing between her brows. Hao ran away from home. Hao ran away from home. Sacred Lord Lin Tianxian of Langya froze, the wine cup in his hand almost slipping, his eyes full of unbelief. Regarding Qin Hao, Lin Tianxian naturally knew about it. He had also been heartbroken at what had happened to this nephew. At first, Qin Langtian couple will Qin Hao foster outside this thing he did not know, otherwise to his character, has long defied all the nephew to take back to the Luangjia Holy Land to raise properly. For Qin Langtian, he had always looked at him with disdain, and the two of them had always been at odds with each other because of their differences in philosophy and personality. This was also one of the reasons why Qin Langtian preferred to foster Qin Hao outside rather than sending him to the Langya Holy Land. What happened to the War King's mansion? Lin Tianxian frowned. Lin Sushi sniffed and immediately told the events of the past 3 years, including from when Mr. and Mrs. Qin Langtian found Qin Hao to bringing him back to the Battle King's mansion. Then there were the various unfair treatments Qin Hao had suffered in the Battle King's mansion, as well as Qin Hao's recent resolute departure from the Battle King's mansion and his expulsion from the Qin family by Qin Langtian's order. As she spoke, Lin Sushi suddenly covered her face and sobbed, her heart filled with helplessness and pain. It's all our fault for not doing our job as parents. Bang! Lin Tianxian was furious after hearing this and slapped his palm on the table, causing the tableware to jump and dishes to spill all over the place. His face was blue, anger flashing in his eyes. Hao has been wandering around since he was a child and has suffered a lot. It was not easy for you guys to find him. Instead of cherishing him, compensating him, and giving him love and care, you guys are letting him suffer in the War King's mansion and be bullied. You guys are simply too much. Do you have any sense of parenthood left? In my opinion, you don't deserve to be parents at all. His voice echoed through the banquet parlor, filled with anger, although Lin Sushi did not speak in detail, but simply brought it up in a single sentence. The bitterness and helplessness experienced by Qin Hao and it made people listen to it with a bad taste in their hearts. Lin Tianxian is even more clear that his own nephew's heart is only afraid to suffer from the blank stares and humiliation of those people in the War King's house, and only then will resolutely leave. Lin Shuer on the side listened, and a deep sympathy appeared in her eyes. Cousin Qin Hao is really pitiful. Since he was a child, he has not been accompanied by his parents, and it is not easy to go home, but then he is treated like this. Cousin, he must be very sad and disappointed. Lin Shuer's heart was filled with sympathy for Qin Hao. She couldn't imagine a child who had grown up on the streets suffering such coldness and hurt after finding a loved one. Lin Sushi lowered her head, tears in her eyes. It is me who is sorry for Hao. I did not protect him well. But, Langtian, he has his hardships. The situation in the War King's house is complicated, and he cannot help it. Bull asterisk 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 bitterness. Bull asterisk 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 not being able to do what you want. Lin Tianxian laughed back in anger. This is just his excuse. He can even ignore his own son for the sake of the power and status of the War King's house. He is simply heartless. Su Shi, you should stop defending him. From today onwards, Hao will be handed over to me. I'll send someone to bring him back to the Luangjia Holy Land. Take good care of him, and never let him suffer anymore. Saying that, Lin Tianxuan's emotions gradually calmed down. He took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, you guys can't do this parental duty well, but I can't just stand by and watch my own nephew living on the streets. I'm going to bring him back to the Luangjia sacred ground. You don't want him. The Luangjia sacred ground, want him? After all, he also has my Lin family's blood flowing in him. Tell Qin Langtian that if Hao makes the slightest mistake, I will never let it go. End of chapter. Luangjia Holy Land. The sunlight sprinkled down on the Luangjia Holy Land's splendid hall, reflecting a bright and dazzling light. However, the atmosphere within the hall at this moment is a heavy. From now on, Hao will cultivate in my Luangjia sacred ground. Under my care. Lin Tianxuan's voice was loud and firm, echoing continuously within the empty hall. Lin Sushi stood by the side, hearing her elder brother's words, her lips slightly opened, wanting to speak, her eyes revealing complex emotions. On the one hand, she knew very well that if Qin Hao returned to the Battle King's mansion, given the current situation, she was afraid that the days would remain unimproved. But on the other hand, if Qin Hao was allowed to stay in the Luangjia sacred ground, it would inevitably further intensify the conflict between the War King's mansion and the Luangjia sacred ground. Either way, the end result was not what she wanted. However, after thinking for a moment, Lin Sushi still sighed softly. understanding in her heart that right now it would be better to really let Qin Hao follow Lin Tianxian to cultivate in the Luanjia sacred land, which would be the best arrangement for him. Then I'll trouble big brother. Lin Tianxian nodded at his words and said, Hao is my own nephew no matter what. This is something you can rest assured. He will never be made to suffer while he's in my Luanjia sacred land. Schwerer, immediately bring someone to the stone country. Make sure to bring Qin Hao back. Lin Tianxian put his hands behind his back, his voice carrying an unquestionable majesty. His eyes were incomparably firm, revealing his determination to definitely bring Qin Hao back. On the side, a trace of determination flashed through Lin Schwerer's soulful eyes as she immediately nodded her head and responded, Yes, father, I will definitely bring my cousin back safely. Her heart was filled with sympathy for Qin Hao's encounter. Poor cousin Hao, who had been living in exile since he was a child, and was found with great difficulty, but had suffered a lot in the War King's house, and was now forced to leave home again. Schwerer must bring you back, so that you can live a peaceful life in the Luanjia sacred ground and never be looked at by others again. Lin Schwerer's eyes revealed a look of determination. Lin Tianxuan's gaze was as cold as frost as he continued, If Qin Langtian dares to block, humph, I won't be able to spare him. Although the stone country isn't weak, it's still a step behind compared to my Langya Holy Land. I'd like to see how big of a nerve he, Qin Langtian, has to dare to be an enemy of my Luanjia Holy Land. Lin Sushi sighed once again at his words. His heart was filled with mixed feelings. This own brother had always been at odds with Qin Langtian, and the contradiction between the two of them had a long history. If the two of them really fought one day because of Qin Hao, he himself was caught in the middle and was in a dilemma. What should he do? Lin Schwerer was well aware of her father's concern for Qin Hao, and without the slightest hesitation, she nodded and then turned around to leave the Great Hall, ready to depart for the Stone Country. Inside the War King's mansion, the night was as thick as ink, as thick as if it was melting ink. The lights in the lobby swayed in the night wind, and the dim light cast eerie shadows on the walls. Qin Langtian, the mighty War King of the Stone Country who had shaken the four directions, was currently sitting on top of the lobby, wearing a black brocade robe with golden patterns embroidered on it that were hidden in the light. His face, which was as sharply defined as if it were cut by a knife, was at the moment somewhat distorted by his anger. Those sharp eyes swept over the men in front of him, and his voice was like the frost of a cold winter month, piercing through the silence of the night. Haven't you found that rebellious son yet? The man under his hand lowered his head, cold sweat on his forehead, and replied with fear and trembling, reporting to the War King, Young master he, as soon as the words came out of his mouth, he realized that he had said the wrong thing and hurriedly silenced himself, knowing that mentioning the words young master was like pouring oil on the War King's anger. Shut up! Qin Langtian slammed the table, and a deep crack instantly appeared on the table that was made of fine sandalwood. What the hell, young master? This king already removed his name a long time ago. There is no young master in my Battle King's mansion. Qin Hao is a devil, and has nothing to do with my Battle King's mansion. Pass the order down. In the future, when Qin Hao is mentioned in the residence, if you want to mention the young master again, you will be killed without pardon. The man under his hand was so scared that his body trembled, his legs softened, and he trembled and fell on his knees. Bang bang cowed out a few times, and hurriedly changed his words. Yes, that devil Qin Hao, since he has already left the imperial city, he may have already left the stone country at this moment. Left the stone country and disappeared far away. The world is so big, I'm afraid it's hard to find. Qin Langtian's face became even more unsightly, as if the sky was covered in dark clouds, so gloomy that it seemed as if water could drip off. He took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart, yet the killing intent in his eyes became even more intense as he gritted his teeth and said, Then launch a hunting order. Let the shadow guards make their move. At all costs, make sure to bring Qin Hao back, and if you dare to resist, kill on sight. The shadow guards is an elite force that the Battle King's mansion has secretly cultivated. They were all highly cultivated and proficient in the art of assassination, coming and going without a trace. Back then, on top of the battlefield, he had assassinated a lot of outer realm powerhouses for Qin Langtian, and had made great achievements in battle, and was a sharp blade of the Battle King's house. Qin Qingyue, who had been standing at the side, heard her father's decision and couldn't help but open her mouth. Father, with the shadow guard's strike, there is no way for Qin Hao to live. Mother sighed, although she loathed Qin Hao in her heart and rejected him, but that person is himself after all. Hearing that Qin Langtian really wanted to kill Qin Hao, it was still a bit hard in her heart. Qin Langtian glared fiercely at Qin Qingyue, the gaze seeming to be able to pierce one through, and rebuked. Ridiculous, it's simply a woman's benevolence. Such a sinner, keeping him will only be a scourge. My War King's house will never allow such a stain. Qin Qingyue's eyes immediately reddened and tears welled up in her eyes when Qin Langtian yelled at her like that. She couldn't figure out why her father was so desperate when it came to the matter against Qin Hao. Anymore, they are blood relatives. Qin Hao was the only bloodline of Qin Langtian in this world. How could his father bear to kill him painfully? Father, Qin Hao, he might have been framed. You just easily convicted him and sent out shadow guards to hunt him down. Qin Qingyue tried to convince Qin Langtian. Even though she didn't deal with Qin Hao anymore, she still couldn't accept it when her own brother, who was her own brother, was really going to be killed by her father. Qin Langtian snorted coldly. Framed? The evidence is overwhelming. It's an indisputable fact that he had an affair with the devil race's Gong method. If he is not removed, he will become a great danger in the future. But Qin Hao has suffered so much since he was a child, and it was so hard for us to find him. Can't we give him a chance? Why Don? You give him a way to live and let him leave the territory of the Stone Country is. Chance? I've already given him a chance. He's the one who doesn't appreciate it. Qin Langtian stood up and paced back and forth within the lobby with his hands behind his back, his feet heavy, each step seeming to carry endless pressure. The honor and status of the Battle King's house is not to be lost, and anyone who threatens the Battle King's house cannot be retained. Qin Qingyue looked at her father helplessly. She knew that no matter what she said, her father would not change his mind. She could only pray silently in her heart, hoping that Qin Hao would be safe and sound. End of chapter. Border of the Stone Country. Xianyuan City. The early morning sunlight sprinkled on the ancient city walls, giving this city on the border of the Stone Country a faint golden glow. The morning sun was slightly exposed and the mist had not yet completely dispersed, making the city look like a hazy picture. Qin Hao was dressed as an ordinary citizen, wearing a bucket hat on his head and a rough cloth around his face, only revealing a pair of eyes. His clothes were slightly worn out and stained with the dust from traveling all the way, and he cautiously arrived in front of the city gates, observing the surroundings with extreme caution. When he raised his eyes, he saw several portraits posted above the city gates, and the figure on the portraits was clearly himself, with the artist's brushstrokes depicting the features of his appearance like no other. The portrait is accompanied by the bold symbol of the warlord's house, announcing his crime to the world. It looked like Qin Langtian was determined to capture him back to lead him to his death. Qin Hao's gaze lingered on the portrait for a moment, but he suddenly burst out laughing. This old thing, Qin Langtian, is really ruthless. Thinking back to all the injustices and traps he had suffered in the War King's mansion, those cynical and sarcastic words were like sharp thorns sticking in his heart. Qin Hao's hands clenched his fists tightly, his nails deeply embedded in his palms, blood seeping out from between his fingers, but he seemed to be oblivious to it. At this moment, the anger and sadness in his heart were intertwined, and a strong killing intent surged in his chest, which was as if it was substantial, making the air around him seem to condense. But after a moment, reason still prevailed, and he forced down the killing intent in his heart. He understood that this was the fusion of his predecessor's soul memories, and the residual obsession was influencing him. Now is not the time to be impulsive. His current strength is still weak. Go back to take revenge will only throw himself into the net. The thing that strikes a stone with an egg, he will not go to do. It's not too late for a gentleman to take revenge. Qin Hao took a deep breath and tried his best to calm down. He watched the guards at the gates, and took advantage of the moment when the guards were changing shifts and their attention was distracted. He blended in with the crowd, keeping his head down and his feet hurrying towards the inner gates. Hey, wait, why do you look so familiar to me? Right at this moment, a guard called out to Qin Hao and frowned. Qin Hao's heart tightened as his mind hooked up with the underworld demon sword, and once the guards approached, he immediately struck out. Just as the guard was walking towards Qin Hao, a cacophony of noises suddenly came from behind the two of them, which was also mixed with miserable screams. Qin Hao turned back to look, only to see a few strong men with big swords constantly hacking and slashing, rushing towards the city gateside. Murderers found. Quick, go kill them. A group of guards rushed to draw their weapons and kill the murderer. The crowd panicked and surged towards the gates, and the guards at the gates were rushed away, no matter how much they shouted. God help me! Qin Hao immediately mixed into the crowd and rushed out of the city gate, running wildly into the distance. After running for not long, Qin Hao stopped and turned back to look at the city and country behind him, the rolling hills, the fertile land, and the War King's mansion, which once carried countless painful memories. It's all going away from him. Stone Country. One day, I will return. Some coldness gradually surged out from Qin Hao's face, his eyes terrifyingly calm. As the words fell from his lips, he turned with determination and took a firm step into the unknown distance. The road was rough under his feet, and his figure was moving away in the morning sunlight, but he looked resolute. Langjia Holy Land. Lin Tianxian was about to send Lin Sushi away, but Lin Shuer's voice suddenly rang out. Father, Auntie, something big has happened. Lin Shuer jogged all the way here in a hurry. Her pink dress fluttered in the wind. Her hair was a bit messy, and fine beads of sweat were still hanging on her forehead. Obviously she had traveled all the way here at a brisk pace. Lin Sushi and Lin Tianxian's hearts were both tightened when they heard Lin Shuer's cry, and the two of them hurriedly asked, "Shuer, what happened? Speak slowly." Lin Shuer gasped for a few breaths and calmed her breathing. Her chest rose and fell violently, and her eyes were filled with anxiety. "Father, aunt, it's about cousin Qin Hao." "Hao? What happened to Hao?" Lin Sushi asked eagerly. The teacup in her hand clenched tightly. Lin Shuer continued, "I just received the news back from the Stone Country, saying that cousin he became a devil." "What? Hao has become a devil?" When Lin Sushi heard this news, her body shook and she almost collapsed to the ground. Her eyes widened, full of disbelief, and she couldn't stop shaking her head. "Impossible, impossible. How could my Hao be a devil? This must be a misunderstanding. Someone is framing him." Lin Tianxian also frowned and snorted coldly. "Even if he became a devil, it was because you guys forced him to." His gaze flickered with anger, filled with rage at what the Battle Royal family had done. After saying that, he looked at Lin Shuer and anxiously inquired, "What is Hao's current situation?" Lin Shuer bit her lip and continued, "Cousin Qin Hao has disappeared. The War King's residence has already removed Qin Hao's name, and the War King claimed that he wants to destroy his family in a big way. Great righteousness." Lin Sushi was instantly enraged when she heard these 4 words. Her eyes were red as tears welled up in her eyes. "I didn't expect that Qin Lengtian would be so cold-blooded. How could he treat his own son like this? Asshole." Lin Tianxian became furious and a strong wave of qi erupted around him. That wave of qi transformed into a fierce wind, blowing the curtains inside the palace hunting. The powerful cultivation was on display, and the surrounding tables and chairs were shaken slightly by the wave of air. Lin Sushi's breath stuttered. His elder brother's cultivation seemed to have refined again. "The matter has yet to be investigated. Qin Lengtian is rushing out. This is to clear the air. Afraid that the War King's mansion will be implicated? If he, Qin Lengtian, dares to touch my nephew, I, Langya Holy Land, will not be finished with him." Lin Tianxian shouted angrily in a low voice. His voice echoed within the palace, shaking the walls as if they were trembling slightly. "This Qin Lengtian is simply lawless." Lin Sushi was in tears as she pulled Lin Tianxian's sleeve and begged, "Big brother, you must save Hao. You can't let Qin Lengtian harm him." Lin Tianxian patted Lin Sushi's hand and comforted, "Sushi, don't worry. As long as I'm around, I won't let anything happen to Hao. I'll immediately send people to look for his whereabouts, and make sure to bring him back to the Langya Holy Land safely." Lin Shuer also said, "Auntie, father, I will also do my best to search for my cousin, and I believe that my cousin is definitely innocent." After saying that, Lin Shuer turned around and left the palace, going to gather people to prepare to set off in search of Qin Hao. Lin Tianxian sat on the chair with a gloomy expression. Obviously the anger in his heart had not yet receded. Lin Sushi looked at the sky outside the window, silently praying in her heart, hoping that Qin Hao would be safe and sound. End of chapter. After leaving the boundary of the Stone Country, Qin Hao traveled all the way at a brisk pace, crossing mountains without stopping for a moment. After 2 days of grueling trekking, he finally arrived at the edge of the Great Wasteland. Qin Hao stood on the top of the mountain and raised his eyes to look into the distance, only to see that the great wilderness in front of him was vast, desolate and pale. In the distance, the continuous primitive giant forests are like sleeping beasts, emitting an ancient and mysterious atmosphere. The lush branches and leaves intertwined into a green dome, as if hiding countless secrets and dangers. Farther away from time to time a few earth-shaking beast roars, echoing in this silent heaven and earth. These all highlight the ferocity of the great wilderness. However, although the great wilderness had wilderness in its name, the ecological environment here was far better than the Blue Star where he had traveled from. The fresh air, pure water, and the vegetation that was full of vitality all made Qin Hao a little trance for a moment. But he quickly came to his senses. There were no traces of human civilization here, only endless wilderness and unknown dangers, a paradise for ferocious beasts. The Stone Village, on the other hand, is a small village that survives in the midst of this great wilderness, where the villagers hunt for a living, fight with ferocious beasts, and struggle to survive in this cruel land. Qin Hao looked at this great wilderness, killing intent towards Qin Lengtian surging in his heart once again. "Sending your own son to a place like this and not thinking you'll make it out alive?" he murmured, his voice drifting on the mountain breeze. "When I think about it, the predecessor from the great wilderness out of the difficult, during which experienced countless life and death test. I do not know how many times in the fangs of ferocious beasts under the dangerous. I do not know how many sufferings, only by chance did not become a ferocious beasts in the belly of the meal. I didn't expect to have the chance to return to this place after leaving the Battle King's mansion." Qin Hao let out a long sigh, his eyes complex with emotions, helplessness, and a hint of determination. On this trip, he only traveled to the stone village to see the village head's tomb in order to fulfill the obsession of his predecessor. Taking a deep breath, Qin Hao calmed down, took a firm step, and resolutely stepped into this crisis-ridden great wilderness. Qin Hao had just entered the great wasteland not long ago, when a ferocious beast with a huge body and the appearance of a vicious wolf suddenly scurried out from the side. This ferocious beast's eyes were blood red, as if it was burning with two blazing fires, and its sharp fangs flashed coldly under the sunlight, the sharpness of which seemed as if it could easily pierce through gold and stone, making one's bones creepy. It opened its bloody mouth, revealing the layers of interlocking sharp teeth inside, and let out a deafening roar, the sound echoing through the valley like rolling thunder. Carrying a strong fishy wind, this ferocious beast lunged straight at Qin Hao, seemingly wanting to tear him into pieces instantly. Just after entering the great wilderness, a ferocious beast of the innate realm appears? Qin Hao's expression remained unchanged, but a hint of sternness flashed in his eyes. Facing this raging ferocious beast, he had no fear and instantly drew his sword. The underworld demon sword blossomed with a dark light in his hand, a light that was like a few stars in the night, deep and mysterious, as if a ghost in the darkness was stirring, eager to show its hideous side. Qin Hao's figure shifted and drifted like a ghost, his footsteps light and swift, making it hard to catch his trajectory. The sword in his hand was like lightning, instantly slashing through the neck of the ferocious beast at a speed so fast that people couldn't see it clearly, only to hear a pfft sound. The beast's head instantly rolled down, and blood sprayed out from the broken neck like a spring, splashing down on the surrounding land, coloring the originally yellow grass into a bright red. The bloody scene was shocking. With his cultivation nowadays, it was practically effortless to deal with this kind of ferocious beast whose strength had not even reached the heavenly Dipper realm. The underworld demon sword greedily devoured the essence of the ferocious beast, its body slightly trembling as it emitted an excited sword sound. The voice was sharp and cheerful, as if it was celebrating a sound victory, and as if it was urging Qin Hao to continue this killing feast. It seems like you like the flavor. Qin Hao's eyes looked tenderly at the sword in his hand, which had accompanied him through several life and death battles, and was his greatest reliance in this world. In this world, he has no relatives, no friends, only the magic sword in his hand to fight alongside him. Afterward, Qin Hao offered the devouring devil gourd. The devil gourd hovered in the air, slowly rotating and emitting a bizarre blood-colored light. The light was like an invisible giant mouth, filled with the desire to devour everything. A powerful suction force suddenly surged out, like an invisible giant hand, instantly absorbing the essence of the decapitated ferocious beast's body into a clean slate. As the essence continued to be injected, the light of the magic gourd grew stronger and stronger, and there were hidden runes flowing in the light, mysterious and powerful. The 10,000 spirit wine inside had also become more mellow, the wine churning and emitting a tantalizing aroma. Qin Hao tilted his head and drank a mouthful of 10,000 spirits wine, and immediately, a powerful force spread out within him. The power was like a raging wave, impacting his meridians and internal organs. A crimson glint flashed in his eyes, and his entire person exuded a chilling aura, as if he was a demonic god that had stepped out of hell. Just then, another group of ferocious beasts appeared not far away. They sensed the death of their companions and furiously ran towards Qin Hao furiously. This group of ferocious beasts was numerous, and their footsteps sounded like dense drumbeats, shaking the ground slightly. The corner of Qin Hao's mouth hooked up a cold smile, without any intention to retreat. Carrying the underworld demon sword, he took the initiative to meet this group of ferocious beasts. Sword light flashed like silver snakes dancing about, Qin Hao's figure weaving freely through the ferocious beasts, each swing of the sword carrying the determination to kill. His clothes had long been dyed red with blood, some of it from the ferocious beast just now, and some of it spattered from his own injuries during the battle. But this did not affect his movements in the slightest. His stance was athletic, his sword strokes were powerful, and his killing intent filled the air. A ferocious beast sneaked in from behind, and Qin Hao sidestepped and agilely dodged it, his movements flowing without a trace of procrastination. With a backhanded sword, the sword wind whistled and cut it in half. Another ferocious beast took the opportunity to bite his arm, its sharp teeth sinking deep into his muscles. Qin Hao frowned slightly, but didn't let out a single painful sound as he threw it away fiercely with a force, followed by stabbing a sword into its heart. The battle lasted for a long time, and Qin Hao's physical strength was constantly depleting, but his will became more and more determined, and the killing intent in his eyes became more and more intense. Finally, the last of the ferocious beasts fell under his sword as well. However, before he could take a short break, the strong smell of blood attracted another group of ferocious beasts. This group of ferocious beasts had an even more powerful aura, and each of them was no less powerful than an expert of the innate realm, and there was even an aura of the Big Dipper realm among them. Looking at the ferocious beasts that ran wildly not far away, Qin Hao's mouth was aglow with a hint of crazy smile. and the underworld demon sword in his hand trembled excitedly, as if he couldn't wait to drink the blood of the ferocious beasts bitterly. Then keep killing. Kill a lot. Qin Hao was fearless, holding the devil's sword, facing on, and plunging into killing once again. End of chapter. Qin Hao's eyes were stern, just like a sharp sword out of its sheath, and he was bathed in blood like a god of war returning from hell. The mottled blood not only didn't make him look lousy, but also added a bit of bravery. He stared tightly at the ferocious beast in front of him with teeth and claws, no intention of retreating in his gaze. This ferocious beast was far more massive than the other ferocious beasts, standing in front of Qin Hao like a mountain. Its thick limbs were muscular and full of explosive power, causing the earth to tremble slightly with every movement. Sharp fangs flashed with a cold chill in the sunlight, as if they could easily pierce through steel. A berserk aura emanated from his body, one that raged as if it could tear everything to pieces. It's time for you to be on your way, Qin Hao murmured. His voice was light, but it was permeated with indifference. He took a deep breath and his chest cavity bulged slightly, as if he wanted to incorporate all the aura of this mountain forest into his body. With this deep inhalation, the air around him seemed to stagnate slightly before it surged madly towards him. The spiritual energy in his body quickly revolved, like a river rushing and surging. The long sword in his hand instantly blossomed with a bizarre light, and his figure flashed, like a ghost rushing towards the ferocious beast, so fast that it only left a blurring residual shadow in the air. The ferocious beast roared and lunged. The sound was like rolling thunder. Qin Hao sidestepped and dodged. His movement was light and agile, just like a willow in the wind, moving with the wind but not losing its direction. The long sword in his hand swung in a smooth manner, and the sword was powerful, carrying the sound of breaking wind, as if it was going to tear this space apart. Put! Blood splashed out like a red fountain, tracing a beautiful and bloody arc in midair. The head of the ferocious beast instantly landed on the ground. The huge head rolled to the ground, smashing out a deep crater, and the heavy body fell down with a loud bang, as if a mountain had collapsed, smashing up a cloud of dust, and the flying dust spread out, enveloping everything around it. Qin Hao picked the remote area where he had walked out in the first place, and the ferocious beasts on this trail were not strong, mostly in the innate realm. However, he never expected that after only being away for a few years, a heavenly deity realm fierce beast would be able to appear here, which was undoubtedly an unexpected challenge. Fortunately, he is not the Qin Hao of the past. After several times of life and death to sharpen him, his strength has long been different from the past. A Big Dipper realm beast was just a beast. It couldn't help him. Ding! Congratulations to the host for completing 100 kills in the innate realm. Reward 1000 kill value. A mechanical voice sounded in Qin Hao's mind. With a thought, Qin Hao didn't hesitate to pile all the kill values directly on his cultivation. In this great wasteland realm, cultivation was the root of survival, the key to being able to dominate one's own destiny. In a flash, a powerful force surged within him. His meridians were rapidly widened, and it felt like a dry river ushering in a raging torrent. Spiritual energy rushed like a torrent, hitting every inch of his meridians and acupoints. Each impact brought a sharp pain, but Qin Hao clenched his teeth and bore it silently. Qin Hao closed his eyes tightly, his brows slightly furrowed as he guided this power with all his might. The air around his body rippled from the agitation of the spiritual power, spreading outwards in a circle. His clothes hunted under the onslaught of spiritual power, as if telling of this orgy of power. A moment later, Qin Hao slowly opened his eyes, and a brilliant light flashed through his eyes. The light was like lightning cutting through the night sky, brilliant and heart-stopping. The meridians were widened and acupoints were struck. I didn't realize that killing value to increase cultivation would have such an effect. Qin Hao could feel that his cultivation had successfully advanced to the middle stage of the Big Dipper realm, and his breath was more deep and introverted, no longer as sharp as before, but as if it had merged with the surroundings, if anything, making it hard to catch. A familiar feeling, Qin Hao said blandly, a faint smile hanging at the corner of his mouth. Looking at the corpses of the ferocious beasts all over the ground, there was not a trace of pity in his heart. In this great wilderness, pity was the most useless emotion, and the only way to survive was to constantly kill and be strong. Qin Hao lifted his leg and left. The corpse of the ferocious beast under his feet seemed to be just a stepping stone on his way forward. In this great wilderness, only the strong could survive. The weak and the strong are the eternal and unchanging laws here. Not much longer. A piece of ruined debris appeared in front of Qin Hao's eyes, but unlike in memory, the once familiar houses collapsed to the ground, leaving only broken walls, overgrown with weeds and barren. The erosion of years and the ravages of ferocious beasts had left the place in a state of disrepair. This used to be the stone village he knew so well, but now it was dilapidated and devoid of its former vitality. At the entrance of the village, there is a huge stone covered with signs of age and moss. Once a place for children to play, the stone now stands alone. witnessing the rise and fall of the stone village. The stone village has actually been overthrown, Qin Hao muttered, a hint of emotion and helplessness in his voice, but not too much sadness. After all, in this great wilderness full of dangers and unknowns, life and death were impermanent, and the rise and fall of the world was a commonplace thing. Surviving in this great wilderness where ferocious beasts were everywhere, there was already the danger of facing beast tides at any time, and the destruction of the stone village was not an uncommon thing in this cruel world. Qin Hao didn't have too many mood swings about it. He only came on this trip for the village head. He didn't care about anything else. He walked into the village with heavy steps, each one seeming to carry the weight of memories. Once laughter, once warm cooking smoke, are gone. The village is filled with a dead silence. Only his footsteps echo in the void. Seems particularly clear. Based on his memory, Qin Hao found the grave of the village chief. The grave was simple and lonely, with weeds growing around it. Qin Hao took out a bottle of wine from his bosom and gently poured it on the tomb. The wine spilled on the ground and quickly seeped into the dirt. He stood silently as the breeze whipped through, blowing the corners of his coat. In this moment of tranquility, the aura on Qin Hao's body became more and more solid, as if he had gone through a baptism of the mind. All the impatience and confusion gradually dissipated, and the obsession of the predecessor also completely dissipated at this moment. Qin Hao turned around and left, and when he came to the entrance of the village, a voice suddenly came from his mind. I didn't expect your kid to actually come back alive. Qin Hao's eyes stared and asked vigilantly, who are you, kid? This seat is the Stone Village Sacrificial Spirit Chaos Stone. Your kid even kneeled to worship the seat when he was a kid. Upon hearing this, Qin Hao's gaze suddenly looked at the boulder beside him. The one who just spoke. Was it this boulder? He carefully recalled his memories of his past, but he didn't seem to have any impression of the Stone Village Sacrificial Spirit. This piece of rock, it's got a spirit? Hearing the sound of the Stone Village sacrificing the Spirit Chaos Stone made Qin Hao feel both surprised and curious. End of chapter. Kid, look at you. Have you forgotten about this seat? Heartless fellow. You even slept on this seat when you were a child. The boulder's dull and slightly disgruntled voice resounded once again, echoing in the empty ruins. Qin Hao sniffed, his gaze tightly staring at the boulder in front of him, his eyes filled with doubts and thoughts. He continued to frown in deep thought, as if something in the depths of his memory was trying to be unearthed. Finally, some blurred images became clearer, and something finally came to mind. When I was a child, it seems that the boulder was indeed said by the village headman to be the village's sacrificial spirit, and often led the villagers of Stone Village in solemn ceremonies. In the village headman's mystical narrative, it is the sacrificial spirit that protects the Stone Village. However, in Qin Hao's memory, this sacrificial spirit had never manifested itself. The passage of years, hope again and again failed. For a long time, the village people thought that the spirit of the sacrifice is simply false, but is a legend handed down by the ancestors. Unexpectedly, today, in the middle of this stone village that has fallen into ruins, it was actually discovered by him that this sacrificial spirit really has a spirit, a piece of stone that can talk, worthy of being a metaphysical world. Qin Hao murmured. His voice was soft, but it carried a sense of emotion towards this strange world. Boy, what did you just mutter? What world? There was a question in the boulder's voice. Nothing? Qin Hao answered casually, not wanting to explain too much. Kid, this seat sees that the sword and gourd in your hand are good. Why don't you sacrifice them to this seat, and this seat can take you as a disciple. The boulder's dull voice sounded again, with a hint of anticipation. I didn't expect this little guy who walked out from the stone village to have such a good thing on his body. Looking at it really made it greedy. Take me as your disciple? Qin Hao raised his eyebrows slightly, a trace of skepticism flashing in his eyes as he looked up and down at the boulder in front of him. This sacrificial spirit actually hit on the idea of the underworld devil sword and devouring devil gourd, and Qin Hao's heart became more and more ice-cold, as these two treasures were the reliance on which he relied on to survive in this cruel world. How could he easily hand them over to others? That depends on whether you have the strength. Qin Hao's voice was firm and powerful. In the next moment, Qin Hao unexpectedly chopped over directly with a sword without hesitation. The sword was powerful, carrying the sound of breaking wind, and instantly chopped on the huge stone. However, what surprised Qin Hao was that the boulder was actually unharmed. The sword slashed at the boulder as if it was just flicked over, leaving no trace behind. Pain. It hurts my seat, the boulder wailed, his voice filled with pain. Kid, what's wrong with you? What are you hitting me for? Qin Hao didn't believe it and swung the underworld demon sword in his hand again, chopping a few more swords. Each sword had used up his full strength, and his forehead was rippling with veins. However, the boulder remained unharmed. Not even a single scratch had been left behind. How is that possible? A trace of astonishment flashed in Qin Hao's eyes. With his cultivation of the Big Dipper realm, His full strength strike couldn't even break the defense of this stone. The boulder ate the pain and said, "Brat, don't fight." With a flash of dark light, the boulder instantly changed. It was no longer a huge stone, but turned into an egg-sized stone. The small stone was extremely fast, like a bolt of lightning, rushing towards Qin Hao with lightning speed. Qin Hao was shocked. He tried to dodge, but realized that his reaction couldn't even keep up with the speed of the stone. He only felt a flash in front of his eyes, and then he felt a pain in his chest, and his entire body was knocked back a few steps by a huge force, staggering backward and almost falling to the ground. The sacrificial spirit floated in the air and laughed smugly. "Brat, don't go too far. This seed isn't something to be messed with." Its voice was filled with smugness, as if it was mocking Qin Hao's insouciance. Qin Hao stabilized his stance, and with a flash of cold light in his eyes, he immediately executed the Tai Shang Jie, and for a moment, the sword chi was spreading out and overflowing with light, and the air around him seemed to have been cut apart by this overwhelming sword chi. What kind of swordplay is this? The sacrificial spirit was shocked in its heart. It didn't expect Qin Hao to have such a powerful move. It didn't dare to be slow and started to dodge continuously. "Brat, stop fighting. There's no end to it." Its voice no longer had the smugness it had before, and had a few more points of helplessness in it. As if he didn't hear it, Qin Hao continued to swing his magic sword, his eyes focused, with only one thought in his mind. That was to let the sacrificial spirit taste his power. "Enough! If you keep fighting, this seat will go berserk," the sacrificial spirit shouted, a threat in his voice. Qin Hao remained indifferent. Only his sword light flashed and stabbed at the sacrificial spirit. Each sword light was like the call of death. All right, it's okay for this seat to admit defeat," the sacrificial spirit yelled while dodging. "You're too rude. The moment you make a move, it's a killing move. If it weren't for the fact that you're from the Stone Village, this seat would have to teach you a good lesson." Qin Hao stopped his attack and looked coldly at the sacrificial spirit. "Still accepting disciples? No more, the sacrificial spirit said in a hurry. It didn't want to provoke this difficult brat again. "Then do you still want my sword and gourd?" Qin Hao asked again, a hint of cold smile in his tone. No, it's yours, the sacrificial spirit hurriedly replied. For some reason, even though he was facing a stone, Qin Hao still heard a hint of pleasing intent from the sacrificial spirit's tone, and couldn't help but shake his head helplessly. I didn't realize that the legendary sacrificial spirit was actually of this nature. Seeing that this sacrificial spirit was weird, Qin Hao didn't want to mess with it too much and turned around, ready to leave. He still had his own path to travel, and there were more challenges and unknowns waiting to be faced. There was no time to tangle with this mysterious and unpredictable sacrificial spirit. Hey, brat, why are you leaving?" the sacrificial spirit shouted from behind. Qin Hao was unmoved by what he heard, and continued to walk forward with a firm pace, not paying any attention to the sacrificial spirit. Seeing this, the sacrificial spirit hurriedly chased after him. "How meaningless it is to walk alone. This seat will join you." Qin Hao suddenly turned back and chopped over with a sword, frightening the sacrificial spirit into retreating in a hurry. Cursing angrily, "You're sick, aren't you? Drawing your sword without moving? Scared me to death. Don't follow me," Qin Hao said in a deep voice. He didn't know anything about this sacrificial spirit, and there was no way he could let go of having such a bizarre thing following him around. Ghosts know what strange and weird things are in this great wilderness. It is not possible to say that at some point, this sacrificial spirit will be pitched. Qin Hao continued to walk forward, and the sacrificial spirit was anxious and hurriedly stopped in front of Qin Hao, saying, "Wait, don't draw your sword first. This seed is with you, and you can gain something too." Qin Hao looked at the sacrificial spirit coldly. "What can you bring me?" the sacrificial spirit hurriedly said. "Kid, this great wilderness is full of dangers. With this seat, it can warn you of the dangers, and also tell you some hidden treasures and secrets. Taking this seat with you will be of much more use." End of chapter. It's 50,000 words and on the shelf. QQ reading are like this, and the big boys are well aware of it. A subscription purchase will be required when it hits the shelves, or it will be directly accessible to members. We recommend that you start a membership for 8M for the first month and 18M for consecutive monthly packages. QQ Reading has many authors, hundreds of them, and the books of these authors are free for members to read. Plus there are a lot of authors over at Starting Point who have to turn on monthly subscriptions to read for free. So it's cool to be able to read hundreds of thousands of books for $10 or so. Even after adding a few more bucks and reaching 22 meters, you can read hundreds of thousands of books from QQ Reader plus tons of comics from Quick Look for free at the same time. If you have opened a member of the Big Brother, I suggest waiting for 12 o'clock after the book's homepage will appear members free to see words. Directly go in to open it. Of course, a subscription is fine. It's just a little bit of a loss compared to a monthly subscription. Also, recommend 2 friends books. Book 1, Rebirth of the Northeast Tiger, Opening Initiative into the Zoo. Introduction, Fierce Beast Battles, plus, Devouring Evolution, plus, Killing Indecisive, plus, Dark Wind. When an unprecedented blood-colored rain swept across the globe, global organisms began to evolve rapidly, and all sorts of evolved monsters appeared, and human beings fell from the top of the food chain to the abyss in a short period of time. Returning from 10 years later, Xiaofan realized that he had actually become a wild northeastern tiger, and the first thing he did was to take the initiative to come out of the forest and enter the Zhanghai City Zoo. The reason he did so was simply because in his previous life, a black tiger had appeared within this Zhanghai Zoo, awakening the legendary SSS innate ability, devouring, the innate ability to devour other living beings. In this life, he approached the black tiger in advance, and when the night of the blood rain descended, he dug out the black tiger's ability crystal core and swallowed it. Then he would be able to obtain the SSS innate ability, devour. Book 2, Doobie, Marrying Wife Keyed, but she refuses to round up. Gu Fei traveled across the Do-Chi continent. He became the personal grandson of the ancient clan's 8-star Do-Shang powerhouse, the Black Annihilation King Gu Lai. At the age of 16, Gu Fei had already become the most outstanding genius of the ancient clan. After this, Patriarch Gu Yuan recalled Kaoror and promised her to Gu Fei. However, after the marriage, for half a year, Kaoror refused to consummate her marriage with Gu Fei. Although Gu Fei was infatuated with Kaoru before, when he realized that Kaoru's indifference towards him was because she was attached to other men, his heart was completely dead. It turned out that Kaoru-chan's comment about not being ready was an intention to leave her chastity to another man. How could Gu Fei tolerate this? He decisively chose to divorce Kaoru. No, Gu Fei, you have to believe me. I definitely haven't betrayed you. When she learned that Gu Fei wanted to divorce herself, Kaoru was instantly flustered. End of chapter. In the middle of the great wasteland, Qin Hao's figure was like electricity, shuttling between the canyons. Roar! Right at this moment, a deafening roar resounded through the clouds, only to see a huge, fierce-looking beast suddenly scurrying out from the shadows, carrying with it a fierce wind and endless ferocious aura. Its bloody mouth was opened extremely wide, its sharp fangs flashed with chilling coldness, and those sharp eyes stared at Qin Hao as if they wanted to tear him into pieces. It's a ferocious beast comparable to the late stage of the Heavenly Dipper realm. Kid, you can't beat it. But I can. The sacrificial spirit's smug voice rang out. All you have to do is apologize to me, and I'll help you finish it off. Qin Hao didn't pay attention to the sacrificial spirit, but drew his magic sword and slowly walked towards the demon tiger and leopard. The devil tiger and leopard's pupils suddenly tightened, keenly sensing a hint of killing aura. Its thick and powerful limbs violently stomped on the ground, bringing up a piece of dust and dirt, as fast as lightning, pouncing on Qin Hao. However, Qin Hao didn't have the slightest fear in his eyes. Instead, he revealed a biting killing intent, only to see his wrist turn, and the underworld demon sword instantly erupted with a piercing light, and a powerful force surged out from the sword. Qin Hao's body swayed, his feet stepping in weird steps as he rushed towards the devil tiger and leopard. Forget it, you'll need this seed to save you later. The sacrificial spirit was planning to wait for a good show, yet the next moment, it was dumbstruck and shocked. How is this possible? Only to see Qin Hao's sword penetrate through the body of the devil tiger leopard. The devil tiger leopard couldn't even react in time, and its huge body stagnated in the air, and immediately after, the devil tiger leopard in front of him couldn't even let out a final hiss before his body and head fell to the ground with a loud crash. Dust filled the air and the scent of blood spread quickly. Kid, who's your master? This swordplay is not bad? A voice came from the chaos stone floating beside Qin Hao with a few curiosities in its tone. Its ordinary-looking stone body was vaguely flickering with a strange light, which flickered on and off, as if it was emitting some kind of mysterious power. Seeing that Qin Hao didn't care about himself, the chaos stone continued. This seed has lived from the ancient times until now, so perhaps I know your master. Its words were full of pride. Qin Hao ignored the chaos stone's words, which couldn't help but make him slightly embarrassed. Qin Hao's face was cold, as if he was an ice sculpture, looking down at the underworld demon sword in his hand, devouring the essence of the ferocious beasts on its own, the sword body flickering with a blood-red light, which was weird and mysterious, as if it came from the Nine Ghosts abyss, exuding a bizarre aura. TSK. This sword is really good. Kid, you let this seat eat this sword. How about this seat passes on a supreme technique to you? Chaos Stone paused, still somewhat undeterred, and asked. Qin Hao still ignored it, then took out the devouring devil gourd, which emitted a powerful suction force, and the essence blood of that just dead ferocious beast was instantly sucked into it, with not a single trace left. A faint layer of blood chi lingered around the magic gourd, looking more and more bizarre and unfathomable. What an evil gourd. You can't give up this sword. Give me the gourd. It's really a supreme technique. You really don't lose out. This seed doesn't lie to you, Chaos Stone said eagerly. Qin Hao waved his hand and said, no change. Brat, don't be too greedy. This seat gives you 2. Oh no. 3 supreme feats in exchange for one of your gourds. Young man, don't be too greedy. The Chaos Stone floated around Qin Hao, chattering. Qin Hao got a bit tired of hearing this, and with a miso sound, he pulled out his underworld demon sword, pointing it at the Chaos Stone. Chaos Stone immediately smiled awkwardly and stopped talking. The young people nowadays really don't know how to respect the old and love the young, at all, Chaos Stone muttered. Qin Hao sniffed noiselessly, put away his magic sword, cut off 2 pieces of meat from the demon tiger leopard and roasted them in place, and all of a sudden a meat aroma emanated out, then sat on the ground and chewed on it. It had been 2 days since Qin Hao left the stone village. In the past 2 days, Qin Hao had sort of figured out the virtue of this Chaos Stone. This guy really followed Qin Hao around for 2 days, like a nagging old woman who kept running out of words. Sometimes they bragged about their former glory, telling how they had witnessed countless earth-shattering battles in the ancient times, and how they had fought side by side with the great powers of the past. Sometimes they tempted Qin Hao to offer treasures, promising him endless wealth and power. Sometimes they told some strange stories in the great wasteland, what with mysterious relics, rare immortal herbs, and terrifying forbidden places. However, Qin Hao turned a deaf ear to these words and simply chose to ignore them. The great wilderness was desolate and boring, and with such a noisy guy around, it wasn't exactly smooth, but he didn't feel lonely either. Not bad, not bad. Although the meat of this devil tiger leopard is not as good as the dragon heart windwings, it smells quite fragrant, and if there's a sip of small wine, TSK, it's really great, Chaos Stone praised. Qin Hao's heart moved, took out the devouring demon gourd from his bosom, and with his head tilted back, he drank a mouthful of 10,000 spirit wine. As the 10,000 spirit wine entered his throat, a warm power spread out within his body, flowing like a warm current to his limbs and bones, nourishing his tired meridians. Wherever that power went, the subtle damage in the meridians began to be slowly repaired, and the spiritual energy gradually regained its fullness. The Chaos Stone's eyes lit up at the scent of the 10,000 spirit wine, and the stone emitted a faint glow as it coveted. Kid, this wine looks good. Let this seed have a taste. It floated to Qin Hao and circled around him. That eager look was like a greedy child seeing a beloved candy. Qin Hao didn't even pay attention to it, operating on his own, channeling the power of the 10,000 spirits wine to his entire body. His brow was slightly furrowed, and fine beads of sweat seeped out from his forehead, as he was clearly concentrating fully on his attunement. How petty, the Chaos Stone muttered, reluctantly floating to 1. You really think this seed is rare? Cut. There was a whine in its voice. With the help of the 10,000 spirits wine, Qin Hao quickly finished adjusting and restored himself to his peak state, then continued to rush. The great wasteland was treacherous and full of crises, and every extra moment one stayed there was one more point of danger, so one had to leave as soon as possible. However, just when Qin Hao was about to leave the great wasteland, a powerful aura suddenly descended, an aura that was like a titanic mountain pressing down on him, causing Qin Hao to instantly feel difficulty in breathing. Qin Hao, I've been waiting for you for a long time, a majestic voice rang out, the sound reverberating through the great wilderness, shaking the surrounding low grass and trees to rustle. Qin Hao's expression changed immediately, and a strong sense of crisis surged in his heart. He looked up and saw an old man suspended in the air. The old man was dressed in a black robe, with white hair and a serious face. His eyes were as sharp as a falcon's, and he exuded a powerful aura around him, which was like a storm that made the air around him become heavy. Imperial Void Realm Powerhouse. Qin Hao's pupils suddenly tightened, gripping the underworld demon sword tightly, his eyes staring at this strong man with vigilance, his heart quickly thinking of a countermeasure. He knew very well that facing such a strong person, the slightest carelessness would lead to a catastrophe. Kid, you won't be able to escape today, the old man said coldly, without the slightest emotion in his voice, as if Qin Hao was already a dead man in his eyes. Qin Hao snorted coldly. Who are you? Why are you stopping me here? He forced himself to be calm, but his heart was incredibly grave. The old man laughed out loud. You don't need to know, just know that you're going to die here today. As the old man spoke, the aura around him grew stronger and stronger, as if he was about to strike the next moment. End of chapter. Kid, looks like you're in big trouble. The somewhat gloating voice of the Chaos Stone sounded in Qin Hao's mind. Seeing that Qin Hao didn't pay attention to himself, the Chaos Stone followed his own advice and said, how about this seat making a move to help you? With a mere Imperial Void Realm cultivation, this seat can raise you to the Imperial Void Realm in the blink of an eye. How about it? Qin Hao was speechless, his expression icy cold. like a 10,000-year-old iceberg, his gaze calmly looking towards the old man floating in the air, whose clothes danced with the wind, his breath bulging more and more around him, and his powerful pressure made the air around him seem to freeze. Did Qin Langtian send you? Qin Hao's voice was without ripples, as if he was just stating an ordinary thing. Even when facing a powerful person of the Imperial Void Realm whose cultivation far exceeded his own, he did not have the slightest fear. Why ask questions when you're about to die? Kid, your life will be taken by the old man today. As soon as the old man's words fell, he didn't give Qin Hao any chance to react at all, and directly struck out, only to see a majestic spiritual energy surging out from his palm, transforming into a huge palm, and fiercely slapping towards Qin Hao. Qin Hao was too late to defend, and could only hastily lift his magic sword across his body. The huge palm slapped heavily on the sword. Qin Hao was instantly struck by this powerful force, and his body flew out like a cannonball, smashing heavily on the ground. He let out a muffled grunt as a trace of blood spilled out from the corner of his mouth, but his eyes remained calm without the slightest bit of panic as he quickly pulled out the devouring demon gourd from his bosom and drank a mouthful of 10,000 spirit wine without hesitation. In an instant, the power of the 10,000 spirit wine exploded within him. Qin Hao whispered the wine god mantra, and the 10,000 spirits wine in his body swiftly transformed and flowed into all his limbs and bones, and the aura of his body steeply soared like a volcanic eruption, his strength increasing tenfold, and surprisingly approaching the late stage of Heavenly Dipper realm. Late stage of the Big Dipper realm? You have such a secret treasure in your hands. When the old man saw this, a flash of surprise flashed in his eyes. He thought that killing Qin Hao this time wouldn't yield any gains, but he didn't expect to come across a secret treasure that instantly boosted his strength. If he could seize the secret arts and treasures on Qin Hao himself, his cultivation would definitely be able to reach another level. After all, he was a powerful person of the Imperial Void Realm. His strength was unfathomable. Even if Qin Hao's strength had skyrocketed, he was still dying in front of himself, and this secret treasure was not his. As long as I kill you, all the treasures and secret arts on your body will now belong to me. Ha ha ha. The greed in the old man's eyes increased, and before his words fell, he had already transformed into a stream of light, carrying the momentum of the mountains and the seas, and lunged at Qin Hao. Qin Hao's figure spread out and barely dodged this fatal blow, but he was still shocked by the aftershock, his blood churning and a trace of blood spilling out from the corner of his mouth. Looking at the old man floating in the sky, killing intent filled Qin Hao's eyes. Even though he had already elevated to the late stage of the Big Dipper realm, he was still no match for this old thing at the Void realm, but that didn't mean that he would willingly ambush him. The devil sword in Qin Hao's hand trembled slightly, emitting a sword roar, seemingly sensing Qin Hao's boiling battle and emitting weird devil light. Qin Hao, those who know what's right are wise. Obediently hand over the secret treasure and scrap your own cultivation, and I can leave your body intact. Otherwise, die. The old man floated in midair, condescendingly looking at Qin Hao, his voice arrogantly saying, "Kid, this old man is at the Imperial Void Realm cultivation level. You can't beat him. Why don't I help you?" The Chaos Stone's voice suddenly sounded with a hint of lure. "Sword and gourd. Just pick one for this seat." However, Qin Hao's response to the old man and the Chaos Stone was, "Draw his sword. Want something from me? Idiot." Qin Hao didn't flinch, and with his battle power at full strength, he rushed toward the old man, his hands immediately exchanging hands. "Stubborn. If I kill you, the secret treasure is also mine." The old man was enraged by Qin Hao's attitude, and instantly moved to kill, increasing the intensity of his attacks, his moves becoming more and more vicious. Qin Hao clenched his teeth, holding the devil sword, and started with the Tai Shan Jiexia chop. In the blink of an eye, swords and shadows crisscrossed and light flashed. His figure flashed, the sword moved with him, the sword wind whistled, the space seemed to be torn, the grass and trees were broken and flying. This sword contained the meaning of ruthlessness. Qin Hao's heart was free of distractions, and the sword blended with the sword, and the sword's power reached the peak of its radiance, as if it was going to devour the world. A sword, pointing straight at the old man. This son has such a strong aura. Is this really that punk? When the old man sensed the power contained in this sword, he couldn't help but look pale, but then his greed increased. Such a sword move if he learns, to waste this kid later, and then tortured. Must let him hand over the know-how of this sword move. Thinking about it, the old man gathered a little bit of power to prevent himself from accidentally killing Qin Hao. Wanting to drag him to exhaustion, the battle intensified. Qin Hao looked extremely wretched under the old man's stormy attack. His clothes shattered, his body covered with wounds, and blood continuously flowed, but his eyes remained steadfast, without the slightest hint of submission. Right at this moment, the Chaos Stone that had been silent all this time suddenly voiced out with a few teasing words. "Kid, don't hold on. This old guy isn't even serious about fighting against you. He wants to consume you." Give your sword to the seat to eat, and this seat can step in to save you. Qin Hao tightly gripped the sword in his hand. His tone calm and firm, the sword is in the person. The Chaos Stone seemed to have anticipated this and made a new request. Then it's okay to give your gourd to this seat. Qin Hao was speechless. And when Chaos Stone saw this, he sighed helplessly, as if raising his hands in surrender. Fine, 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 fine. This seat is kind of convinced. You brat is a stubborn bone. Seeing that you're so stubborn, then it's always okay to give the wine to the seat, right? Qin Hao thought briefly and returned. Deal. Seeing this, the old man laughed coldly. Qin Hao, what are you muttering to yourself there? Could it be that you're afraid? The words fell, but the old man's face suddenly changed, only to notice that he was instantly locked by an extremely terrifying aura, with nowhere to escape. What's going on here? The old man quickly retreated and flew back into midair. Looking at Qin Hao's floating stone with a wary expression, the rich and terrifying aura was exactly what emanated from the stone. What the hell is that damn rock? You dare to say that this seat is a piece of broken stone? Seek death. The Chaos Stone's indifferent voice suddenly rang out. The old man's complexion suddenly changed drastically. A stone can also speak? The next moment, the old man saw the most frightening scene in his life, only to see the Chaos Stone suddenly erupt in a burst of light, followed by a rush towards himself at an unimaginable speed. The old man only felt a flash of black shadow in front of him, and before he had time to make any reaction, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. He was shocked and looked down, only to see that his heart vein had been pierced through his chest. How is this possible? The old man looked unbelievably at his chest, and then glanced at the Chaos Stones floating back muttering. His eyes gradually lax. His body fell with a bang. End of chapter. The Chaos Stone hovered in midair and said disdainfully, "Humph, a mere imperial void realm. How dare you act recklessly in front of this seat?" Looking at the old man's corpse, Qin Hao's pupils tightened, and then he turned his gaze to the Chaos Stone. This piece of broken stone that followed him around all day long and had no proper form, could even kill an imperial void realm powerhouse in one move? It was beyond his imagination. In the next moment, the Chaos Stone flashed in front of Qin Hao, impatiently saying, "Kid, quickly give the wine to the seat." Its tone was eager, mixed with a hint of longing. Then, a shocking scene occurred. A depression actually appeared in the center of the Chaos Stone, as if it had opened a large greedy mouth. Qin Hao remembered that the Chaos Stone had just saved his life, and without the slightest hesitation, he opened the devouring devil gourd in his hand and poured a large portion of the 10,000 spirits wine to the Chaos Stone. The Chaos Stone made a contented sound and burped. Hiccup, it's so refreshing. This seat hasn't had this good wine in how many years? Boy, it's still counting on you to keep your word. What exactly is your origin? Qin Hao finally couldn't help but ask. Chaos Stone he smile, pretending to be mysterious. This seat is a spirit born at the beginning of the chaos. The unique existence of heaven and earth, on the knowledge of astronomy and geography, is the world's most treasured universe supreme? As for the specific wait for you to be strong enough, naturally we'll tell you. Qin Hao sighed helplessly. Sure enough, as soon as business was mentioned, this guy immediately started to talk full of nonsense. Alright kid, you've made this seat quite comfortable with this wine. This seat is going to sleep. Don't disturb this seat. After saying that, the Chaos Stone directly turned into a dark light and landed on Qin Hao's shoulder. Qin Hao secretly thought in his heart that just now, the Chaos Stone was afraid that it had consumed quite a lot from the strike it had sent out to save him, and at this moment, it was afraid that it had fallen into a deep sleep, needing time to recover. He looked over his shoulder at the Chaos Stones and casually pocketed the other, then began to organize his gains from the battle he had just fought. The bag must be licked after the battle, which is what a qualified monk should do. Qin Hao crouched down and carefully looked through the items scavenged from the enemy's Nagara, which was full of all kinds of precious pills, magic treasures and secret books. He first picked up a bottle of elixir and gently opened the cap. A strong medicinal fragrance came to his nose. He carefully recognized it and found that it was a bottle of elixir that could quickly restore his spiritual energy. Then, he picked up a secret book and opened the cover, revealing the 3 big words Prisoner Dragonfinger. After roughly skimming through the contents, he realized that it was an extremely good martial arts secret. In addition to pills and secret books, there were also a few magic treasures in the nascent sack. Among them was a sword that emitted a blue glow. Its blade was incomparably sharp, and it was not a mortal product at first glance. There was also a small shield with mysterious runes engraved on it, which must have a strong defense capability. Qin Hao nodded with satisfaction. These things were undoubtedly important resources for him, and those secret books of magic treasures that couldn't be used could also be auctioned for money. However, as Qin Hao flipped through the many items, he unexpectedly turned out a Li family token, and when he saw it, his eyes instantly turned ice cold. It seemed that this Imperial Void Realm powerhouse who had come to kill himself should be someone from the Li family. Li family, I will destroy you in the future, Qin Hao said with a chilly expression. In his mind, he had already stamped the Li family with the mark of certain destruction. When he returns to the Stone Country, the first one he will destroy will be the Li family. After disposing of the corpse briefly, Qin Hao found a relatively safe place and started to heal his injuries. Sitting on the ground, running the gongfu in his body, mobilizing the surrounding spiritual qi, and repairing his injured meridians and body, the surrounding aura slowly converged to his side, forming a small vortex, and Qin Hao closed his eyes, fully concentrating on guiding the aura into his body, repairing the damaged meridians. With every meridian he repaired, he could feel a pain, but he gritted his teeth and held on. 3 days later, 3 days passed by in a flash. Qin Hao slowly opened his eyes, a hint of essence flashing in the bottom of his eyes. After these 3 days of recuperation, his injuries had already healed for the most part. However, the Chaos Stone was still sleeping. Without the slightest sign of waking up, Qin Hao took a deep breath and stood up, ready to leave the great wasteland. The sunlight sprinkled on his body, reflecting his slender figure. Not long after he had just stepped out of the great wasteland, several black shadows suddenly sprang out from the roadside and blocked his path. Qin Hao's heart was flabbergasted as he immediately sensed the powerful auras of these people, who were all at the late stage of the Heavenly Dipper realm. Qin Hao quickly drew his sword, pointing the tip at the black shadow in front of him, and asked sternly, "Are you also from the Li family?" The black shadow at the head replied coldly, "The War King has ordered to kill Qin Hao." Qin Hao's heart was shaken. He didn't expect Qin Langtian to be so determined, actually sending people after him, determined to put him to death. The battle instantly erupted as Qin Hao drew his sword out, sword shadows flashing, and engaged in a fierce exchange with the black shadows. However, as soon as they exchanged hands, Qin Hao realized that these people were performing a combined attack technique, working extremely well together. Their attacks echoed each other and their defense was tight, putting him in a bind for a while. Qin Hao's sword stabbed at his enemies like a blizzard, but the black shadows were always able to skillfully avoid or fend them off. Their attacks always appeared in unexpected places for Qin Hao, making him unable to defend himself. "Looks like he's determined to kill me." Qin Hao's voice was ice cold. After a few battles, Qin Hao realized that he was no match for these people. If this group of Big Dipper realm killers who specialized in the art of combining attacks were to strike, no Big Dipper realm would be able to escape with their lives. During the fierce battle, he gradually added many wounds to his body. Blood stained his clothes red, and his strength decreased. But that didn't mean he would give up. Seeing that the situation was getting more and more unfavorable, Qin Hao forced back the crowd with a sword, took out a gourd and drank the remaining 10,000 spirit wine in one go, and then cast the wine god mantra. The power of the 10,000 spirit wine instantly erupted within him, giving him a brief boost in strength. "Qin Langtian, if I don't die this time, I will kill you," Qin Hao secretly swore in his heart, and all of his spiritual energy was infused into the underworld demon sword, charging at the group of killers once again. He was still not afraid of life and death when facing a powerful person of the Royal Void Realm, let alone these guys in front of him who were in the same realm as himself. His swordsmanship became even more severe, and each move carried the determination of certain death, even at the expense of exchanging injuries for injuries. Qin Hao's sword stabbed at a black shadow, who sidestepped to avoid it, but Qin Hao kicked him in the stomach in the process, sending him flying out. However, another black shadow took the opportunity to stab at Qin Hao's back, and Qin Hao couldn't dodge in time, adding another wound on his back. Seeing this, the group of killers attacked even more fiercely, trying to put Qin Hao to death as soon as possible. Qin Hao's physical strength was depleting, but his will was getting stronger and stronger. His sword swung faster and faster, as if he wanted to cut down all the enemies in front of him. At the edge of life and death, Qin Hao's potential was completely stimulated. His swordsmanship became more and more refined, and his moves became more and more vicious. End of chapter. Qin Hao and the Shadow Guards fought for a moment. Sword shadows crisscrossed, light flashed, and the sharp sounds of metal clashing were endless in the fierce battle, as if it was a symphony of life and death. However, both in terms of strength and number, the Shadow Guards were far superior to Qin Hao, and each of his attacks was easily neutralized by the Shadow Guards, while the powerful counterattacks of a group of Shadow Guards were like a storming wind and rain, making it difficult for him to fight. Every time the Shadow Guard's sword stabbed, it carried a deadly threat, and Qin Hao could only desperately dodge and block. As time slowly passed, the wounds on his body became more and more numerous. The wounds were shocking to the eyes, blood gushing out like a stream, quickly soaking his shirt, the crimson color looking particularly blinding in the sunlight. "Qin Hao, bind your hands and surrender. We can leave your body intact," a Shadow Guard said in a deep voice. Qin Hao was speechless. silently calculating how to retreat in his heart, his eyes quickly sweeping through the surroundings, searching for a possible retreat. At this moment, his forehead was full of beads of sweat, and his breathing also became rapid, but his mind still remained clear. He deeply knew that he was not the opponent of these well-trained and well-coordinated shadow guards, and continuing to tangle like this without any chance of winning, the only thing that awaited him was a dead end. He had to find a way to get out as soon as possible to have a chance of survival. Stone, help me one more time. The rest of the wine is all yours, Qin Hao said to Chaos Stone while fighting against the Shadow Guard's attacks. However, the Chaos Stone did not respond, and there was only the sound of fierce fighting and the shouts of the Shadow Guards around them. Hey, broken stone, drinking my wine and pretending to be dead, right? Without hesitation, Qin Hao directly grabbed the Chaos Stone and smashed it towards the Shadow Guard behind him, then turned around and ran. What are you doing? Chaos Stone wailed. Brat, do you think this seat doesn't need to rest? And make the seat kill for you again. Before the words fell, only to see the Chaos Stone's body with a dark light. That light was like lightning in the darkness, instantly pierced through a Shadow Guard. That Shadow Guard could not even let out a scream before he had fallen to the ground and died. Seeing this, Qin Hao accelerated the pace of his feet and swiftly swept towards the distance. What is it? Seeing that one Shadow Guard was killed in seconds by what Qin Hao threw out, the rest of the Shadow Guards were startled and their figures lurched, and before they could react, the Chaos Stone transformed into a dark light again, catching up with Qin Hao in a lightning-fast speed. Brat, you're trying to get me killed, Chaos Stone shouted angrily. Qin Hao, however, was not amused. Broken Stone, aren't you still alive? How about you help me kill them all and I'll owe you 2 jugs of wine. Qin Hao followed the advice, trying to convince the Chaos Stone to continue helping. No. Killing that Imperial Void Realm earlier consumed too much. I can't kill them now. Chaos Stone sternly refused. I won't do it even if you give me 2 more pots. Qin Hao laughed coldly and mocked. Just this still claims to be some kind of universe supreme Chaos Stone, which has existed since the beginning of chaos. I think it's nothing more than that. He then shook his head helplessly. It seemed like he was in for a bad day. He looked at the Shadow Guards that were getting closer behind him, and a hint of resignation flashed in his eyes. He had managed to detach himself from that Battle King's mansion with great difficulty and had gone through countless hardships and dangers to achieve his current cultivation level. He had thought that he could make his way in this world with his own efforts and strength, but he had never expected to face the threat of life and death again in the blink of an eye. However, this didn't mean that Qin Hao was resigned to his fate. He wouldn't sit and wait for death. Qin Hao gripped the underworld demon sword tightly and stood horizontally with his sword, his chi sinking into his dantian and the few spiritual powers in his body running wildly. He stared at the group of Shadow Guards who were charging over, his eyes filled with determination as he prepared to make a final desperate fight. Even if he had to die, he would make his enemies pay a heavy price. In his Qin Hao's dictionary, there was no such word as giving up. Qin Hao's clothes hunted in the wind. The wounds on his body reopened due to the strenuous movements, and blood continued to ooze out. But it was as if he couldn't feel the pain, and he was fully focused on preparing for the enemy's attack. However, just as Qin Hao was seriously injured, physically and mentally exhausted, and ready to fight for his life, a terrifying aura suddenly descended, as if the entire heaven and earth trembled. The surrounding air seemed to freeze instantly, making people feel incomparably depressed. Afterward, a domineering figure appeared in front of Qin Hao. Dare to kill my nephew, looking for death. That voice was as deafening as thunder, filled with endless majesty and anger. Just by waving his sleeves, this figure instantly erupted with a powerful force that was like a raging wave that surged towards the Shadow Guards in an overwhelming manner. The Shadow Guards didn't even have time to react in any way before they went up in smoke under this power. The next moment, this figure flashed to Qin Hao, looking at him with eyes full of heartache. Howard, I'm your uncle, Lin Tianxian said heartily. Uncle is late. Qin Hao's vision had long been blurred, and he wanted to see the face of the person in front of him, but his injuries were so severe that his consciousness gradually blurred, and then he directly collapsed. Lin Tianxian took an arrow step forward and caught Qin Hao, who was about to fall to the ground. He looked at the shocking wounds on Qin Hao's body. His heart was filled with anger and heartache. The wounds seemed to be carved into his heart. Killing my Howard, assholes. You guys really have a lot of guts, Lin Tianxian roared. His voice shook the heavens and moved the earth, and a berserk force that swept through the heavens and earth instantly shot out in all directions. For a time, even the heavens and earth were changed. The surrounding trees were blown by this force and shook violently, their leaves falling down one after another. The mountains in the distance also seemed to tremble slightly under this force. Howard, don't be afraid. Uncle is here and won't let anyone hurt you again, Lin Tianxian said softly, a tremor in his voice, his eyes filled with concern and heartache. His own nephew? What kind of hard life has he lived all these years? Lin Tianxian quickly pulled out a bottle of precious elixir from his pocket and carefully fed it into Qin Hao's mouth. The elixir instantly melted in his mouth, turning into a warm current that nourished Qin Hao's injured body. The warm feeling made Qin Hao's frowning eyebrows slightly stretch. Afterward, Lin Tianxian brought Qin Hao with him, turning into a stream of light and disappearing into the original place. Langjia Holy Land, a secluded valley with beautiful mountains and birdsong. It was an excellent place for healing. Lin Tianxian gently placed Qin Hao on a soft bed, then began to set up a healing spell formation for him. He made seals with his hands, and a mysterious rune flashed in the air, integrating into Qin Hao's body. Looking at Qin Hao on the bed, a flash of anger flashed through Lin Tianxuan's eyes. Even with his mind that had been cultivated for decades, it was impossible for him not to be angry in the face of what had happened to Qin Hao. Dare to lay hands on my nephew? Do you really think that Hauer has no one to rely on? Seek death. End of chapter. Stone Kingdom Palace. Third Princess. Are you satisfied now? Qin Qingyue looked at Shi Luoyan, her eyes filled with questioning. At one time, she and Shi Luoyan were like sisters, affectionately calling Shi Luoyan Sister Luoyan. But now, this address Qin Qingyue could no longer call out, and there was only rustiness and indifference in her words. Qin Qingyue's gaze was like a torch, as if she wanted to see through Shi Luoyan. Shi Luoyan was a little uncomfortable by such a stare and slightly looked away. She sighed slightly, her face apologizing, and said, Sister Qingyue, I didn't expect it to lead to the current situation. Shi Luoyan's voice carried a hint of helplessness. Her brows knitted lightly as she attempted to alleviate Qin Qingyue's anger with sincerity. Qin Qingyue snorted coldly. Humph, you're less pretentious there. Now that Qin Hao has become a devil, there's no place for him in the Stone Country, so you can rest on your laurels, right? Her words were filled with sarcasm, and a tinge of dissatisfaction surfaced on her beautiful face. Shi Luoyan hurriedly explained. Sister Qingyue, are you angry with me? Sister apologizes to you and will never strike at Qin Hao again in the future. There was an urgency in her eyes, hoping that Qin Qingyue would believe her. In her opinion, Qin Hao was already bound to die. After all, the entire Stone Country now unanimously believed that Qin Hao was an evil and crooked person who was addicted to killing people, and had already become a street rat that everyone shouted at. He himself even sent out a strong person of the Imperial Void Realm to result in Qin Hao, which if he could still let Qin Hao run away, he could only say that his life should not be ruined. Qin Qingyue glared angrily. I'm still not guilty of getting angry over a Qin Hao. It's just that you're damaging the reputation of my Battle King's mansion. And the reputation of my Battle King's mansion can't be tarnished by anyone. Her voice was icy cold, as if it could freeze the air around her. A cultivation level exploded and his breath solidified, pointing directly at Shi Luoyan. Shi Luoyan also sensed that Qin Qingyue seemed to be genuinely enraged and hurriedly apologized. Sister, calm down. Some other day, sister, I will personally go up to the War King's residence to apologize to the War King. She also knew that this time, she did go a little overboard. Pissing off the War King's house was no small matter. Her forehead oozed fine beads of sweat, and her heart secretly regretted some of it. Had I known that I should have sent a strong person of the Imperial Void Realm to assassinate Qin Hao at the beginning, and made things cleaner and prettier, where would I have all these bad things now? Qin Qingyue sniffed and no longer paid attention to Shi Luoyan. Turning around, Shi Luoyan looked at her departing back. The smile on her face gradually dispersed and her expression became a bit icy. She was about to open her mouth to call for someone, only to see a subordinate barging in a panic. How dare you? This is this princess's room. How dare you trespass without permission? If someone finds out, something will happen to you and me. Shi Luoyan angrily shouted, her voice raised an octave, her tone majestic, and her eyes filled with anger. The subordinate hurriedly knelt on the ground, swallowed his saliva, and said in a trembling voice, Gong, princess, something big is wrong. The powerful person of the Imperial Void Realm that you sent out, dead. His voice trembled as if he hadn't recovered from his fear. What did you say? Shi Luoyan was shocked in her heart, her eyes wide with disbelief. The Royal Void Realm powerhouse that he had sent to assassinate Qin Hao had died? Her body trembled slightly. The news was like a bolt from the blue to her. Princess, it's true. The Imperial Void Realm powerhouse's fate card has shattered. He has indeed fallen. The subordinate's head went even lower, not daring to look Shi Luoyan in the eyes. Shi Luoyan's face became extremely ugly as she paced back and forth in the room, pondering what this meant. Could it be that Qin Hao still has some hidden strength? Or is there someone else helping him? She muttered. The warlord's mansion. Father, is there any news about Qin Hao? Qin Qingyue asked as she walked over with a hurried pace. Her bright eyes were filled with anticipation, but also carried a hint of worry that was hard to hide. At this moment, she was incomparably apprehensive, both hoping to hear some good news and fearing the worse. Qin Langtian's face was so gloomy that it seemed as if water could drip out of it. His brows were furrowed. Anger flashed in his eyes, and without saying a word, he threw a secret letter to Qin Xingyue. Take a look for yourself. His voice was low and suppressed, as if a volcano about to erupt was struggling to control its raging emotions. Qin Xingyue hurriedly reached out to receive the secret letter and couldn't wait to quickly skim through it. Then her face suddenly changed and her voice trembled as she shouted, "The shadow guards that were sent out are all dead?" Shock filled her voice, and the letter, as if it had lost the strength of her hand to support it, slipped from her grasp and floated lightly to the ground. Hearing this, Qin Langtian's teeth clenched, clenching his fists so tightly that his bones turned white from the force, and said hatefully, "It seems that this rebellious son has already completely devoted himself to the demon race." In Qin Langtian's opinion, Qin Hao was by no means strong enough to kill the shadow guard alone. His eyes were filled with anger and disappointment, as if they were about to spit out fire. It should be the people of the demon clan behind him who are helping him. This sinner is truly incorrigible. Qin Langtian roared with rage. He had originally thought with confidence that sending out well-trained shadow guards would be enough to solve Qin Hao, but he didn't expect to wait for such an unexpected and unacceptable result. Qin Langtian's chest rose and fell violently, panting heavily, showing the extreme anger within him, as if that anger could burn everything to the ground. The face of his battle king's house had been disgraced by Qin Hao. If Qin Hao were here, he would have snorted and taunted Qin Langtian. "How in the world is it that only you can kill me and I can't resist?" Qin Xingyue furrowed her brows and said thoughtfully, "Father, I'm afraid this matter isn't that simple. If there really is a strong demon race survivor, why haven't we found any traces of the demon race all this time? Moreover, the devil race has always been at odds with the human race, so how could they possibly protect Qin Hao? A deviant? How could he suddenly devote himself to the devil race?" Her eyes were filled with doubt as she tried to find the truth in the confusing clues. Qin Langtian sneered. "Humph, maybe he was desperate and had to do this to save his life." His attitude was resolute, as if he had already determined Qin Hao's crime. Qin Xingyue shook her head. "Father, I always feel that there is something fishy going on. Perhaps we should investigate further so as not to wrongly accuse him." Her voice was soft but firm, unwilling to easily believe that Qin Hao would betray the human race. More importantly, sitting on the charge of Qin Hao's betrayal of the human race would inevitably affect the reputation of the War King's house, and it would also inevitably affect the reputation of her, the devilish sister. Qin Langtian glared at her. "You're still speaking for that rebellious son? He has now become a sinner of the Stone Country, and everyone will be punished." There was an undeniable authority in his tone. Qin Xingyue was silent, but in her heart, she always felt that things were not as simple as they appeared. She recalled Qin Hao's little in the War King's house. How did that guy suddenly become a devil in the eyes of the people? End of chapter. Langjia Holy Land. In a secluded room in the Luangjia Holy Land, Qin Hao woke up leisurely. His consciousness was still a little fuzzy. His head was dizzy, as if a fog was hanging over it, making all his thoughts sluggish and heavy. Qin Hao had just opened his eyes. The heavy eyelids looked like they were hanging 1,000 pounds, and his vision was a bit hazy. The whole world looked like a veil in his eyes. However, he still subconsciously touched the side, and when he touched the familiar magic sword and felt that it was still there, Qin Hao was instantly relieved. With the magic sword in his hand, his heart did not panic. This magic sword seemed to be his last line of defense in this world full of unknowns and dangers, as well as his closest reliance in this world. He turned his head laboriously, and the sight that met his eyes instantly lifted his newly relaxed mood, only to see the Chaos Stone is lying on the devouring devil gourd, drinking wine beautifully. That appearance to be more comfortable. It is surrounded by a faint fragrance of wine, as if immersed in a wonderful world that belongs to it alone. Qin Hao was immediately furious, and without even thinking about it, he directly threw it out with one hand. "Brat! You promised to let me drink." The Chaos Stone tumbled in the air a few times, and only with great difficulty was able to stabilize itself, yelling in dissatisfaction. The Chaos Stone's tone was a bit angry and aggrieved, as if he had suffered from Qin Hao's great abuse. With a miso sound, the underworld demon sword was sheathed, and the Chaos Stone immediately closed its mouth. Qin Hao laughed coldly. "Did you step in and save me? And you drink? Don't even look at what's going on now." His voice was cold and stern, and his eyes revealed his dissatisfaction with the Chaos Stones. "You're no good at fighting, but you're first in sneaking around." The Chaos Stone muttered in a small voice, as if cursing Qin Hao, but the voice was muffled, probably knowing that he was at a disadvantage. Qin Hao frowned and began to look around, only to see that the room was simply and elegantly decorated, with a few landscape paintings hanging on the walls, and a faint sandalwood fragrance filled the air. The landscape in that landscape painting seemed to have a tranquil and far-reaching mood, but at this moment, Qin Hao had no intention to appreciate it. The scent of sandalwood was supposed to be calming and relaxing, but a twinge of unease flooded through him at the moment, and none of those things were able to capture his attention. He just wanted to know exactly where he was. "What place is this?" Qin Hao asked, a hint of doubt and vigilance in his voice. "It seems to be called something like Langya Holy Land," Chaos Stone replied casually. "Luangjia Holy Land," Qin Hao muttered, recalling some fragments in his mind. Before Lin Su she seemed to have once said that she was from Luangjia Holy Land. He remembered again the middle-aged man who had stepped in to save him, the one who claimed to be his uncle. However, why did they save themselves? The ruthlessness and indifference of the Battle Royal House had completely cut off Qin Hao from the idea of kinship. In his opinion, the world was full of hypocrisy and exploitation, and he didn't believe that there was anyone else in the world who would be nice to him for no reason, even if he was saved. He didn't believe that the other party had good intentions. Could it be that you've captured yourself, the devil, in exchange for favors? Or maybe it's to make a public spectacle of righteousness and gain a good reputation for cutting down demons and eliminating devils? Thinking of these possibilities, Qin Hao's heart became even more determined to leave. Thinking of this, Qin Hao's eyes became even colder, and there was no longer a trace of hesitation in his gaze. He had to leave this place as soon as possible, and no longer have any involvement with these people. Not to mention that he didn't want to fall into other people's conspiracies and calculations again. So, Qin Hao quickly got up, took a deep breath, adjusted the disordered breath in his body. His action was decisive and resolute, without the slightest bit of procrastination, and pushed open the door of the room without any hesitation. The door of the room emitted a squeaky sound, as if it was telling about his determination. Walking out of the room, there was a peaceful courtyard outside the door. The sunlight poured onto the ground, forming patches of light. Those patches of light were like golden fish scales, glittering with a dazzling light. The courtyard was filled with all kinds of exotic flowers and plants, and the breeze brought a burst of floral fragrance. However, Qin Hao had just stepped out of the room door without going far, when he saw a figure appearing in a hurry, with medicine in the hands of the visitor, who was none other than Lin Su Shi. She had a pretty face, but it was a bit haggard, and her eyes were full of anxiety and worry. That worry was so deep, as if Qin Hao's well-being was the whole of her life. "Hao, where are you going?" Lin Su Shi, with a face of anxiety and worry, quickly stepped forward to pull Qin Hao. She stumbled slightly, her hands trembling slightly from nervousness. "You're hurt so bad." Her voice was filled with concern, the tone urgent and sincere, as if Qin Hao's injury was more important than her own. Her gaze was locked onto Qin Hao, her eyes filled with deep concern. Lin Su Shi looked at Qin Hao, her eyes full of heartache, and that gaze seemed to be able to transfer all the injuries on Qin Hao's body to herself. Her breathing became rapid, each breath carrying her attachment to Qin Hao. "Hao, do you really not want mother?" Lin Su Shi's voice carried a hint of trembling, and that trembling contained a hint of fear and dread, fear of losing her child. Her tears were swirling in her eyes, as if they would break the dike at any time, and those tears blurred her vision, but not her love for Qin Hao. Qin Hao looked at the teary-eyed Lin Su Shi, but there was no half-wave in his heart, and his expression was very cold. After all, in his memory, he had never had the warmth and care of his relatives, and all those long, dark nights, all those pains he had endured alone, had made his heart hard as iron. He put himself in the great wilderness, ignoring life and death, the War King's residence, and let himself live and die. Such parents, what is the use of wanting it? Those painful memories like a tidal wave surged to the heart. "Sorry, I haven't had any family since I was a kid." His voice was icy cold, and every word was like a sharp knife stabbing into Lin Su Shi's heart. It was as if that voice wanted to completely isolate himself from the person in front of him, building an invisible high wall between him and Lin Su Shi. Lin Su Shi's tears finally couldn't help but flow down, tears like broken beads that kept sliding down. "Hao, mother knows that you've suffered a lot of grievances, but mother now knows that it's wrong. Mother is sorry." Her voice choked, each word carrying deep self-reproach and remorse. Lin Su Shi's hands were even holding Qin Hao's corners tightly, her knuckles whitening from the force, as if Qin Hao would disappear forever as soon as she let go. Qin Hao was unmoved and said coldly, "Save those words for lying to others." His eyes remained cold as he tried to break away from Lin Su Shi's hand, but Lin Su Shi pulled tightly on his sleeve and refused to let go, as if this was her last hope. End of chapter. Hearing Qin Hao's words, Lin Su Shi's heart shook as if she was hit by a thunderbolt, and her whole body froze in place. Sad. All of a sudden, everything around her became blurry, and only Qin Hao's cold words kept echoing in her ears. "Hao, do you really not want your mother too? Do you hate me that much?" Lin Su Shi's voice trembled, unable to believe that Qin Hao would say such words. She stared blankly at Qin Hao's eyes, slightly lost in thought, memories of the past flooding her mind like a tide. Thinking back to the past, when she didn't take care of Qin Hao, causing him to be so cold to herself now, Her heart felt like it was being cut by countless sharp blades, and that pain went deep into her bones, making her almost unable to breathe. What mother would want to be hated by her own son? Lin Su-shi, it is necessary for me to remind you that I have long severed my blood relationship with you, so where did I get a mother? Qin Hao laughed coldly. There was not a trace of warmth in his eyes, only deep indifference. As for hate, what's there to hate? The corners of Qin Hao's mouth rose slightly, as if he was telling a very common thing, yet the expression that appeared to be a smile didn't have the slightest bit of warmth, but instead was full of mockery. Laughing at Lin Su-shi's naivety and self-righteousness, Lin Su-shi's body shook at the words, as if it was a broken leaf in the wind. Shaking, she felt that the whole world was spinning, and the scene in front of her eyes became blurred, followed by nearly fainting on the ground. Lin Shuer on the side rushed forward to support Lin Su-shi when she saw this. A powerful person with the cultivation of the Emperor realm was showing such vulnerability at this moment. Lin Su-shi was heartbroken. Tears rushed out like a flood that broke the dike, cutting across her haggard face and dripping onto the ground. She wanted to reach out to touch Qin Hao's face, but she was mortared in place and didn't dare to move, that outstretched hand trembling slightly, showing her inner uneasiness and fear of being rejected again. If I had been a little earlier, would Hauer not have suffered those humiliations? Would you and Hauer still be mother and son? Cousin, you're too much. How can you do this to your aunt? Auntie is worried and teared up day and night for you, and you're so heartless. Lin Shuer stabilized Lin Su-shi angrily, her delicate face filled with anger, her eyes burning with rage, shooting straight at Qin Hao. What's it to me how she is? You, what are you saying? Thanks to me, I thought of going earlier to bring you back, but I didn't realize that this is how you treat your aunt. You're not a good person. Lin Shuer pointed her finger at Qin Hao and cursed angrily, her chest rising and falling violently, obviously infuriated by Qin Hao's attitude. Qin Hao was speechless, only glancing coldly at Lin Shuer. Shuer, I don't blame her. It's me who didn't protect Hauer. Lin Su-shi's voice was hoarse, and her eyes were filled with self-blame and guilt. She broke away from Lin Shuer's support and stumbled forward, wanting to approach Qin Hao again. Qin Hao looked indifferent, not even glancing at them, without any intention of staying, and turned around to leave. Stop! At this moment, Lin Tianxian suddenly appeared, a thick and majestic aura stopping in front of Qin Hao. Lin Tianxuan's silhouette was like a towering mountain, emitting a powerful aura that made it impossible to ignore, and his appearance immediately brought a hint of oppression to the surroundings. He didn't deliberately estrange his aura, but chose to release it instead. Qin Hao recognized that this was the person who saved his life and stopped, but his eyes were still full of caution and distrust. His body was taut, ready to deal with possible dangers. Seeing his nephew's face unchanged in the face of his powerful aura, Lin Tianxian couldn't help but feel a little satisfied in his heart before opening his mouth and asking, "Where are you going?" His voice was low and majestic, with an undeniable aura, and it echoed through the air, striking straight to the heart. Qin Hao, the world is so big, where can't you go? His reply was without hesitation, and his gaze was firm as he looked towards Lin Tianxian, radiating a sense of fearlessness. Lin Tianxian was even more satisfied. He paused and continued, "Now that the Stone Country is hunting you, can you survive leaving the Langia Holy Land?" His gaze was firmly fixed on Qin Hao, trying to make him recognize reality. Looking at this dear nephew of his eyes were full of concern, and he hoped that Qin Hao would choose to stay, both inside and outside of his words. After all, only he deeply knew how dangerous Qin Hao's situation was at the moment. Qin Hao laughed coldly. "Can staying here guarantee safety?" His voice was full of questions, and the icy tone seemed to be able to freeze the air around him. Even his own father wanted to kill him. How could Qin Hao trust this so-called uncle? In his mind, kinship had long been broken and trust had crumbled. The affection he once cherished was now a sharp blade stabbing at him, making him defensively wary of all so-called loved ones. "Of course," Lin Tianxian replied without hesitation. "As long as you stay within the Langia Holy Land, I can guarantee that no one will be able to harm you." Lin Tianxian responded in a domineering manner. Those words seemed to have the force of 1,000 pounds, shocking people's hearts. "Hauer, uncle knows that you have suffered." Speaking of the suffering Qin Hao had endured, Lin Tianxuan's voice became softer, his eyes filled with pain. "But uncle assures you that no one will ever dare to bully you in the future." As he said that, he walked towards Qin Hao step by step, with a steady and powerful pace, trying to draw closer to each other. "From now on, you are a member of my Luangia sacred land, and that Battle King's mansion no longer have any relationship," Lin Tianxian said solemnly. His words were like an oath, sounding like an oath, and that resolute attitude left no room for doubt. Qin Hao raised his head and looked at Lin Tianxian, slightly pondering in his heart, not knowing whether he should believe this uncle who suddenly appeared. not knowing whether he should believe this so-called shelter and promise. Although he didn't believe Lin Tianxian, what the other party said was indeed true. Now that he was wanted by the Stone Kingdom, with the Battle King's palace and those shadowy assassins eyeing him, leaving the Luangia sacred ground, he couldn't be sure that he would still be chased down by the strongest people of the Imperial Void Realm. In the Luangia sacred ground, the Stone Country, even if it has heavenly powers, does not dare to act rashly, otherwise a bad one will be carried out with the Luangia sacred ground. However, after a whirlwind thought, Qin Hao still thought that it was not prudent to leave his fate to others. Humph, you think I would believe your words? Qin Hao snorted coldly. Promises in this world are nothing but passing clouds that can dissipate at any time. His tone carried deep skepticism and distrust. However, everything uncle said is true, Lin Tianxian said eagerly, his eyes filled with sincerity. I know you've experienced too many betrayals, but here, you can start over. Listening to Lin Tianxuan's earnest words, Qin Hao once again fell into deep thought. Do you choose to stay or go? End of chapter. The next day, Luangia Holy Land passed out a message, like a thunderbolt from the ground, instantly caused a furor in the entire Holy Land. There are new true disciples being born. This news spread quickly, like a gust of wind that swept through every corner of the Holy Land, immediately causing a sensation. A pro-disciple who had not appeared in the Holy Land for decades had now reappeared. Langya Holy Land. Hanging Sky Falls. A white-robed figure is sitting leisurely on a huge rock drinking tea. The waterfall is like the Milky Way hanging upside down. Majestic. The turbulent water pouring down from a high place, splashing the water splash in the sunlight to form a gorgeous rainbow. Like a dream. The white-robed man had a handsome face and a dusty temperament. He was one of the true disciples of the Luangia sacred ground, Shao Xingxian. His star-like eyes were deep and bright, and the slightly upturned corners of his mouth carried a smile if nothing else, as if everything in the world was under his control. At this moment, a disciple hurriedly ran in, only to see that he looked tense, with fine beads of sweat covering his forehead, and arrived in front of Shao Xingxian, kneeling down on one knee, clasping his hands together, and respectfully reporting, Senior Brother Xiaoxing, a new true disciple has been born in the Holy Land. Shao Xingxian frowned slightly, the delicate cup of tea in his hand stopped at his mouth. The movement that had just been brought to his mouth came to an abrupt end. After a moment of silence, he slowly put down his teacup, which gently touched the tabletop with a crisp sound. Shao Xingxian raised his head, his gaze calmly looking at the kneeling disciple and asked, Who is so lucky? His voice was gentle and magnetic, but it carried a trace of imperceptible majesty. Back to Senior Brother. It's a person named Qin Hao, the disciple hurriedly replied, his voice trembling slightly from nervousness. Qin Hao? A trace of doubt flashed through Shao Xingxian's eyes as he slightly narrowed his eyes, his mind quickly searching for this unfamiliar name. Never heard of this person before. What is he capable of becoming a true disciple? His tone carried a few moments of curiosity, and more than anything else, he questioned the decision. The disciple took a deep breath and said, I heard that this Qin Hao is personally appointed by the Holy Lord, and, moreover, I sent someone to the Stone Country to investigate. This guy seems to be a devil spy, practicing devil skills in the Stone Country, and addicted to killing people, and the Stone Country has already put a nationwide wanted notice on this devil. As the disciple spoke, a hint of worry showed in his eyes. What? Shao Xingxian stood up violently, moving so fast that he brought up a breeze, and his face instantly clouded over as if it was covered in dark clouds. How dare a devil want to become a true disciple of my Holy Land? This is simply absurd. His voice raised a few points, and the air around him became condensed due to his anger. Powerful waves of air quickly swept out, and the disciple immediately looked startled, his body retreating and trying his best to resist this power that Shao Xingxian had unintentionally unleashed. Senior Brother's cultivation has refined again. Purple Spectre Bamboo Forest. In the tranquil bamboo forest, a woman in green was practicing her sword. This bamboo forest was serene and peaceful, and the breeze rustled the bamboo leaves. The woman's face is exquisite. Her eyes are clear, her body is graceful, her movements are light and graceful. Every swing of the sword carries a powerful momentum. Wherever the sword energy passes, the bamboo leaves flutter down, just like fluttering butterflies. This woman's name was Zhao Linger, and she was also a true disciple of the Luangia Holy Land. Just then, a maid hurriedly arrived, her footsteps so rapid that she disturbed the tranquility in the bamboo forest. Only the maid came to Zhao Linger and saluted. Senior Sister Zhao, there is a new true disciple from the Holy Land. Zhao Linger sheathed her sword, gasped slightly, and asked, Oh, who is it? Her voice was clear and pleasant with a hint of curiosity, and her eyes looked towards the maid, waiting for her answer. The maid replied, It's a guy called Qin Hao. Qin Hao? Zhao Linger's eyebrows frowned slightly. Her diaphanous brows twisted into a tiny knot. It's a strange name. What's so special about him? There was a hint of doubt and imperceptible contempt in her voice. The maid whispered, "It said that he's a devil, practicing devilish techniques, and for some reason the Holy Lord has made him a true disciple." The maid's voice was suppressed extremely low, as if she was afraid of being heard by the bystanders. Zhao Linger snorted coldly. "Humph. It seems like there must be something fishy going on here. A devil can become a true biography. I'd like to see how capable he is." The sword in her hand trembled slightly, as if it also felt her inner questioning. Above the top of a mountain, Wang Mang was stout and muscular, as if an iron tower stood there. Each muscle contained explosive power, and a powerful aura emanated around him. When he heard the news that the Holy Land was going to have a true transmission disciple in the same position as himself, and that this new true transmission disciple might be a devil, he instantly widened his eyes in anger, those eyes as if they were copper bells, and exclaimed, "What? Surprisingly letting such a person become a true disciple. I will definitely show him some color during the challenge." His voice was like a flood bell, echoing among the mountain peaks and startling a flock of flying birds. "Why are you kids suddenly willing to stay in the room?" the Chaos Stone said. There were a few moments of puzzled disbelief in its voice. Qin Hao sat on the edge of the bed, staring firmly out of the window. The sunlight from the window sprinkled on his face, but it couldn't illuminate the depth in his eyes. He paused and replied, "Staying where you are is not staying, as long as you can get stronger." His tone was calm and resolute, as if he had made up his mind somehow. The Chaos Stone floated in front of Qin Hao and said, "Don't be naive. This Luengia sacred land isn't that easy to mix with. Those true disciples are all high-minded and won't accept you easily. And, with your strength, can you beat them?" Qin Hao laughed coldly, rubbing the underworld demon sword and said, "So what? I don't care about what they think. I only care about whether I can raise my strength." The corners of his mouth turned up and his eyes were fearless. The Chaos Stone sighed, its ebony light flickering, as if its mood was fluctuating a bit. "This is not a simple challenge. If you get killed, where will I find someone to drink with?" It slowly rotated around Qin Hao, seemingly considering something. "Should I wait for this kid to be killed and go lick the bag myself? But it seems like he can't rob that Holy Lord in his current state, right?" Qin Hao stood up, fighting spirit burning in his eyes, and said, "Whether there's any certainty or not, you won't know until you try. I, Qin Hao, am not afraid of anyone's challenge." Cultivation. The most taboo to know the difficulties and retreat. Only the courage to go forward can achieve the supreme road. Then we won't leave. The Chaos Stone continued. "If you get killed, don't blame the seat for robbing you all." Qin Hao's eyes turned cold, as if ice water in a cold pool, and said coldly, "Die, let them let their horses come over. I, Qin Hao, will just take it." End of chapter. Langya Holy Land. Somewhere secluded. The early morning sunlight passed through the gaps of the leaves and sprinkled on Qin Hao's body, forming dappled light and shadow, only to see Qin Hao sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed. A solid breath emanated out, inducing the surrounding grass and trees to sway and sway, rustling. A moment later, he slowly opened his eyes and exhaled a mouthful of cloudy air. He himself ultimately chose to stay and become a true disciple of the Luengia Holy Land. Nothing else? Just because the true disciples of Luengia Holy Land can enjoy those precious cultivation resources that they have never seen before. For example, spiritual herbs and sacred medicines that can break through realms. Moreover, true disciples are also able to have their own independent cultivation ground and specialized waiters, without external interference, and are able to devote themselves to cultivation. One was also able to receive a large amount of cultivation resources every month, especially the essence blood of powerful ferocious beasts, and the efficacy of the 10,000 spirit wine brewed from this essence blood was only stronger. Thinking about it, Qin Hao slowly got up, and his figure began to sway like a ghost, making it hard to recognize his trail. This was the stance he had learned from within the Luengia Holy Land's hidden scriptures. Ghost shadow misty trail. There is no shadow, no trace. Qin Hao deeply felt his deficiency in stance during the previous battle, and now that he had joined the Luengia Sacred Land, he was able to cultivate even more superior stance techniques, and even ancient secretarial feats, which were able to dramatically increase his strength. For Qin Hao, no matter where he was, as long as he could become stronger, he wants to take control of his own destiny, stop being swayed by others, and become a truly strong man. Langya Holy Land. Pilgrimage Peak. The sunlight poured down on the large martial arts plaza, a solemn and dignified place. The ground was paved by a clear blue stone, smooth as a mirror, reflecting a dazzling light, and in the martial arts plaza, a moss-covered giant bell hovered, emitting a mysterious aura. However, in the next moment, this top giant bell clanged twice, and the deafening sound of the bell instantly spread throughout the entire Holy Land. In a blink of an eye, a figure flashed out on the martial arts plaza, and it was clearly a group of high-level executives from the Luengia Sacred Land.
Do you remember how long it's been since anyone rang this bell? The bell is ringing. It seems that there is one person who wants to become a true disciple. What do you guys say? Can this person succeed in his challenge today? The elders of the Luanjia sacred ground gathered and discussed. Numerous disciples rushed over quickly at the sound of the question and gathered around, exchanging words. Lin Tianxian stood on top of the high platform, his stance erect, like a proud pine. He wore a long purple and gold robe, which was embroidered with mysterious runes that flickered with a faint light, only to see Lin Tianxian looking around. His voice was loud and clear as he proclaimed, "From today onwards, Qin Hao will become a true disciple of my holy land." His words were like a heavy hammer, hitting everyone in the heart and causing a commotion. "Cannot, sacred lord, that Qin Hao is a devil who cultivates devil kung fu, and is already wanted all over the stone country. If we allow him to become a true disciple, the reputation of my sacred ground will be in jeopardy." Right at this moment, Lin Yuan suddenly stood out and righteously said, "What? The devil?" All the elders frowned at the words, and an elder with a bursting temper even directly stood out and bluntly objected. "Sacred lord, 10,000 times impossible. If this son cultivates demonic techniques, allowing him to become a true disciple will definitely tarnish the reputation of my Luanjia sacred ground." This elder had a serious face and a sharp gaze. "That's right, my Luanjia sacred ground has been the seat of righteousness since ancient times. How can we allow a person who cultivates devilish techniques to become a true legend? How will this make the world view us?" Another elder also spoke. The duo's words instantly resonated with the other elders, who nodded their heads in agreement. "Yes, holy lord, this matter requires careful consideration." Lin Tianxian snorted coldly. His gaze was like electricity as he swept over the group of elders, his eyes filled with majesty and unquestioning. Lin Tianxian spoke, "My mind is made up. Whether or not Qin Hao cultivates demonic techniques will be known once I try." Saying that, he waved his hand and had the people carry the demon measuring stone up, only to see that the demon measuring stone was pitch black and emitted a mysterious light. "Qin Hao, come up!" Lin Tianxian shouted, his voice echoing over the square like thunder rolling. Qin Hao had no fear in his face, striding up to the high platform and standing in front of the magic measuring stone. In a flash, the light of the magic measuring stone flickered, and everyone held their breath, staring at the stone tightly, waiting for the result. However, to the disappointment of certain people, the light of the demon measuring stone gradually stabilized and then completely disappeared without a trace of demonic aura. Lin Tianxian looked at the elders with a hint of questioning in his gaze and said, "Elders, what else do you have to say?" The elders looked at each other, dumbfounded for a moment as they looked at me and me at you, their eyes filled with embarrassment. What had been firm opposition seemed so pale in the face of this pure light. At this time, Lin Yuan spoke again. "Sacred Lord, according to the rules of the Luanjia sacred ground, a newly promoted true transmission disciple must accept the challenge of at least 2 other true transmission disciples, and after winning, he will be qualified for promotion." His voice broke the brief silence and made the atmosphere tense again. Lin Tianxian immediately frowned and looked at Lin Yuan with a displeased expression. This true disciple was going against himself in every way? Really, his wings have hardened. Lin Tianxian looked at Qin Hao with concern in his eyes and asked, "Qin Hao, what do you think?" Qin Hao stood out, his eyes unquestionably firm, his posture erect, and he shouted, "I'm willing to accept the challenge." His voice echoed in the square like a great bell, and that firm tone shook the crowd present. How dare this guy do this? Accept senior brother Lin Yuan's challenge? This guy, what a big mouth. Let's see how senior brother Lin punishes him. I don't know this guy. Let's see how he loses. The crowd of disciples immediately sneered. In their opinion, how could Qin Hao, a nobody, compare to senior brother Lin Yuan? Lin Yuan took the lead and stood out, only to see his white clothes fluttering, holding a long sword like an immortal descending to the earth, but with a trace of contempt on his face. He sneered, "Qin Hao, how can you deserve to be a true disciple even if you are just a devil? Let me meet you. You're not my opponent," Qin Hao said indifferently. Lin Yuan saw this and became furious, pointing his sword at Qin Hao and shouting angrily, "Do you really think that you can win over my hallowed holy land true disciple with those demonic techniques? You're underestimating the Luanjia holy land too much. Qin Hao, today I will make you kneel down and beg for mercy. Let you, a condescending and arrogant fellow, suffer a bit." Qin Hao looked at Lin Yuan, his gaze as calm as water, and said, "Please enlighten me." His voice was unassuming, without the slightest hint of fear. "Go senior brother Lin, let this egomaniac learn a lesson." That's right, such an arrogant attitude. Do you really think that there is no one in my Luanjia holy land? The disciples were in solidarity with Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan asked voice without words, just touching lifting the long sword in his hand to look at Qin Hao. The corner of his mouth hooked up a cruel smile. "Let you underestimate me. Later I'll find a chance to chop off your arms and legs and make you a cripple for the rest of your life. End of chapter. Luangia Holy Land. The sunlight declared above the high platform on the martial arts arena, like a layer of thin veil, gently covering the ground, coating the entire martial arts arena with a layer of divine light. The verdant bricks on the grounds were illuminated by the dawn light, and the texture traces of the battle were still clearly visible, as if they were telling of the past. The noises around the martial arts arena rose in all directions, and there was a figure sitting on the undulating stone seats all around, shouting and cheering for the people in the arena. The countless gazes on the stone pedestal were gathered on the high platform in the center of it, on which two figures crossed paths, and every collision between the two sides would erupt with dazzling light and huge fluctuations of spiritual energy. It was none other than the warring duo of Qin Hao and Lin Yuan. One could only see that their figures were as fast as lightning, and their moves were so powerful that they dazzled people, and the roaring sound swept up from the engagement for a long time, echoing in the sky above the martial arts arena. Countless shouts of support stumbled around. Senior brother Lin, teach this egomaniac a lesson. A disciple stood up, waving his fists and shouting. If he wants to become a true disciple, it depends on whether he has the ability to do so. Senior brother Lin, defeat him. More disciples chanted in unison, their voices neat and loud, forming a powerful wave of sound as if they wanted to overturn the entire martial arts arena. The disciples of the Langya Holy Land were all cheering for Lin Yuan, their voices converging into a powerful wave of sound that was deafening. Seeing this, Lin Tianxian, who was floating in mid-air, frowned more and more tightly. This kid is going to lose. An elder shook his head slightly. Lin Yuan is as powerful as a rainbow. How can this Qin Hao, a nobody, win against him? Above the high platform, the battle between Qin Hao and Lin Yuan had already reached white heat. The underworld demon sword in Qin Hao's hand seemed to have a life, its body flickering with a strange light, which was sometimes ghostly blue, sometimes purple-black, like the flames of hell pulsating. Right after the two sides exchanged hands again, Qin Hao suddenly flicked his wrist, his figure violently rushed forward, and the underworld demon sword shot out at a surprisingly fast speed, like a rushing and roaring Milky Way raging down from the nine heavens. Unstoppable, as if it was going to overthrow the entire high platform. Lin Yuan felt this powerful pressure. His face instantly became as pale as paper. Bean-sized beads of sweat continued to roll down on his forehead, one after another, instantly wetting his forehead. He clenched his teeth and gripped his own long sword tightly with both hands, the veins on his arms rippling up like sinuous earthworms, trying to resist Qin Hao's powerful strike. However, when Lin Yuan came into contact with this sword, he realized that his power seemed so small in front of Qin Hao, and that surging power seemed like an insurmountable mountain. Boom! With a loud bang, like a thunderous explosion, Lin Yuan's entire body flew out backwards like a kite with broken strings. His body traced an arc in the air before falling down heavily onto the high platform, in an unimaginable state of disarray. The moment he landed, dust flew. Lin Yuan's clothes were broken. His body was injured in many places, and blood stained his clothes red. Qin Hao stood proudly, holding a devil's sword, and said coldly, "Next." His voice was not loud, but it clearly spread throughout the martial arts arena, carrying a faint sense of arrogance and majesty. The crowd was shocked and sucked in cool air. They had originally thought that Lin Yuan would be able to easily defeat Qin Hao, but they didn't expect the ending to be so unexpected. The crowd of disciples and elders had their eyes widened in disbelief as they looked at the upright youth on the high platform. The other true disciples also had grave eyes and began to take Qin Hao seriously. This guy is not an idle one. They realized that this new guy was not weak, and their previous contempt for Qin Hao instantly dissipated, replaced by a reassessment and vigilance of Qin Hao's strength. Lin Yuan is nothing but a waste. What's there to be proud of? A roar suddenly recalled, and in the next moment, a silhouette quickly landed on top of the high platform. This person was stout and muscular. Every muscle was filled with explosive power. He was none other than Wang Mang, who was ranked in the top 3 in terms of strength amongst the true disciples, and his appearance instantly caused a gasp of surprise. Surprisingly, it's senior brother Wang Mang. His strength can be ranked in the top 3 among the true disciples. Someone shouted excitedly, Qin Hao will definitely lose. There were also people who firmly believed that Wang Mang would put an end to Qin Hao's arrogance. Wang Mang stood on the high platform, his eyes like torches, staring at Qin Hao, saying, "Kid, don't be too arrogant." His voice was like a loud bell, vibrating people's ears, and at the same time displaying his strong confidence and majesty. Qin Hao smiled faintly, not putting Wang Mang's threat in his eyes at all, and said blandly, "Try it then." His tone was relaxed, but with a provocative undertone. Could Wang Mang's violent temper not stand this kind of provocation? The battle between the two sides instantly erupted. Wang Mang was the first to attack. He waved the heavy giant axe in his hand, bringing up a gust of wind. Wherever the axe blade passed, the air seemed to be torn apart, emitting sharp whistling sounds. Each of his strokes was powerful and heavy, vowing to split Qin Hao in half with an axe. Qin Hao's figure flickered like a phantom, easily avoiding Wang Mang's attack. His movements were as ghostly and elusive. He could only see his light footsteps and dexterous posture, weaving in and out of the gaps between Wang Mang's attacks. Holy Land's secret method. You're not a true disciple yet, but you're practicing the Holy Land's secret technique. Seeing this, Wang Mang became even more furious. His eyes were red, like a furious lion. He kept on attacking. His axe method became more and more powerful. There were no cracks between his moves, forming an airtight attack net. However, Qin Hao was always at ease. A cold aura flashed in his eyes, and a strong sword intent swept out. Ruthless sword intent, cold and stern, chilling the hearts of the crowd. Wang Mang was also caught off guard by the relentless sword intent, and his moves appeared disorganized. Qin Hao saw the right moment, and when a tiny break appeared in Wang Mang's axe technique, he stabbed out with a sword, which seemed simple, but contained Qin Hao's full strength. The sword was like lightning and instantly broke through Wang Mang's defense. Wang Mang wanted to resist, but realized that it was too late. Put! The sword stabbed into Wang Mang's shoulder. Blood splattered everywhere. The bright red blood stung in the sunlight. Wang Mang stifled a grunt in pain. His body shook a few times, almost unsteady on his feet. Qin Hao said coldly, "You've lost." His voice was icy cold, without the slightest hint of pity. The entire room was silent, and everyone was too shocked to speak by the sudden ending. Afterward, a gasp of astonishment erupted. How is this possible? Qin Hao even defeated Wang Mang. What exactly is his strength? It's terrifying. People were talking and were incredibly shocked by Qin Hao's strength. Even Wang Mang, whose strength could be ranked in the top 3 of the pro-disciples, had lost under Qin Hao? How is that possible? No, I haven't lost. Wang Mang roared angrily, and just as he was about to get up, he realized that he couldn't move at all. In the next moment, it was only seen that his clothes were shredded, and a dozen interlacing and vertical blood marks slowly surfaced on his body. Wang violently protruded a mouthful of blood, his eyes full of shock, obviously also unable to believe that he had lost. When was the sword wound left? End of chapter. Qin Hao defeated Wang Mang in battle. The result was like a boulder thrown into a calm lake, creating an uproar among the crowd. The originally noisy martial arts arena instantly fell into a shocking silence. The air seems to freeze, time seems to stop, then is like a tidal wave of surging murmurings, the sound of a wave over a wave. The crowd is incomparably shocked. Wang Mang, whose strength could be ranked among the top 3 true disciples of the Holy Land, had lost to a nobody? This was simply beyond the crowd's imagination. The crowd of outer disciples of the Holy Land were even more surprised. They stared at Qin Hao with wide eyes, those eyes filled with astonishment. No one could have imagined that this first-timer Qin Hao would be able to defeat the powerful Wang Mang. How is this possible? Wang Mang's eyes were filled with disbelief as he muttered, "I actually lost in his hands. Even senior brother Wang Mang lost. Doesn't it mean that this Qin Hao can be ranked in the top 3 of true disciples?" A disciple couldn't help but exclaim out in shock, his voice filled with shock. Looking at his performance, he seems to be swimming with ease. Perhaps he can compete with senior brother Qin Yu and senior brother Qin Feng for the first position in the true transmission. Another disciple chimed in, an expectant light flickering in his eyes. "Are you sure? The 2 senior brothers can be stronger than Wang Mang. Don't you dare to talk nonsense." Someone immediately chided. "I think it's very difficult. Senior brother Wang Mang once challenged senior brother Qin Yu, but he couldn't even last 10 back." A disciple shook his head. "Senior brother Qin Yu's swordsmanship is simply out of this world. Senior brother Wang Mang didn't have the power to fight back at all." Humph, don't jump to conclusions too early. This Qin Hao might have some hidden strength. No matter what, it's already remarkable to have defeated senior brother Wang Mang. The duo in their mouths are the well-deserved sword Dao genius and hegemony bladesman in the hearts of the many disciples of the Luangjia Holy Land, as well as the first and second true tradition of the Luangjia Holy Land in the past few decades. Just as the crowd was talking, the senior elders looked at the firm figure on the martial arts arena and couldn't help but appreciate it. This kid has actually comprehended sword intent. An elder stroked his beard, his eyes filled with surprise. Yes, to be able to comprehend sword intent at such a young age, the future is unlimited. Another elder nodded and said, "It might be able to become the new generation of leaders of our Luangjia Holy Land." Don't get too happy yet. We still have to see how he follows up, but this battle is truly a sight to behold. The elders had a word for each other, and they were all very appreciative of Qin Hao's performance, both inside and outside of their words. "It seems that another heavenly pride will emerge from my Luangjia sacred ground." Another elder smiled and nodded his head, his smile containing relief and longing for the future of the Holy Land.
as if he had already seen the glory and splendor that Qin Hao would bring to the Holy Land in the future.
This son is exceptionally gifted. In time, he will become a great man. Seeing the crowd of elders praising Qin Hao, Lin Tianxuan's pride overflowed, looking around with an incomparably proud expression. Worthy of being my Lin Tianxuan's nephew, just extraordinary. I declare that from today onwards, Qin Hao is a true disciple of my Holy Land. His loud voice spread throughout the martial arts arena, his tone filled with pride. In this battle, Qin Hao completely established the position of a prodisciple, and Qin Hao's name, which appeared for the first time, was quickly known, and his name spread to every corner of the Luangjia sacred land, becoming the focus of discussion. Langjia Holy Land, peak, power, this will be your territory in the future. Lin Tianxian brought Qin Hao to a mountain peak and opened his mouth.
Qin Hao raised his eyes and looked, only to see that the mountain peak in front of him was towering into the clouds, surrounded by clouds and mist, just like a fairyland, and the outlines of the mountain peaks were hidden in the clouds and mist, giving people a mysterious feeling. Above the mountain peaks, the ancient trees were tall and lush. The ancient trees were tall and straight, their branches and leaves intertwined to form a green canopy, and the sunlight sprinkled down through the gaps of the leaves, forming a golden patch of light. It is just like a holy place for cultivation. This mountain is not bad. Qin Hao couldn't help but praise it. That's natural. Lin Tianxian smiled and responded. This is the cultivation place for the prodisciples of the Holy Land. And with the spirit-gathering formation set up, the spiritual chi of the heaven and earth is 10 times denser than that of the outside world. So in the future, you will cultivate here. Lin Tianxian said, waved his big hand. All of a sudden the thin clouds shrouded around the mountain peaks dissipated in an instant, and the pieces of colorful haze formed by the rich spiritual chi were revealed. And those haze was like a thin veil that floated between the mountains. Like a dream. Just like a fairyland. Qin Hao looked a bit stunned. It's really magical. Without waiting for him to react, he had already appeared on top of a mountain peak. The breeze blew by, bringing with it gusts of flowers and the fresh scent of grass and trees. With every breath, one could feel the rich aura pouring into the body, nourishing it. He was slightly surprised. The effect of the spell is actually so obvious? That's for sure. Lin Tianxian said. This spirit-gathering formation is a heavy treasure of the Holy Land. You can name it, and in the future, any disciple within the Luangjia Holy Land who wishes to train here must go through your permission. Lin Tianxian smiled and looked at Qin Hao. His eyes were full of love. His own this pro-nephew is strong and young. The future is unlimited. It's just a pity. Alas. Qin Hao pondered for a moment and slowly said, let's call it Emotionless Peak. Emotionless Peak? Lin Tianxian was slightly stunned. Why this name? Qin Hao's gaze was firm as he said, I want to abandon all distractions, cultivate without any distractions, and walk out my own path on this merciless way. Lin Tianxian nodded and said, good, as long as you have a direction in your heart, Uncle believes that you will be able to accomplish something. Many thanks, Uncle. Qin Hao arched his hand. Cultivate well. Don't let down this great opportunity. Lin Tianxian patted Qin Hao's shoulder and turned to leave. Looking at Lin Tianxuan's figure, Qin Hao was voiceless. And with a flash of crow's light out of his pocket, the Chaos Stone appeared on his shoulder. Hey kid, just this Thai place got you mesmerized? Chaos Stone said disdainfully. Could it be that you've seen an even more advanced cultivation holy land than this one? Qin Hao couldn't help but be a bit curious, then shook his head, dumbfounded. How could this Chaos Stone tell the truth? Hey, brat, what's that look on your face? You don't trust this seat? Qin Hao stopped speaking, reached out and grabbed the Chaos Stone, stuffing the other side back into his pocket and looking at the mountain stream from afar. Emotionless Peak, Qin Hao muttered, his eyes becoming more and more determined. Let go of me, brat. I'm telling you, I'm going to get real. The Chaos Stone was still screaming. Qin Hao suddenly drew out the underworld demon sword, injected all his spiritual energy into it, and started with a Tai Shang Jie chop, blasting the mountain peak in front of him with dust flying all over the sky. I'll get out of my own way eventually. End of chapter. The War King's Mansion. Qin Xinyue held the letter in her hand, her expression flustered as she hurriedly ran to Qin Langtian, her footsteps incomparably messy, her breathing rapid, her forehead covered with fine beads of sweat. Qin Langtian couldn't help but frown at the sight. Father, take a look. It's mother's letter. She already knows. Qin Xinyue's voice carried a tremor. Her hands were also involuntarily shaking. The letter seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds in her hands. Qin Langtian took the letter, somewhat roughly tore open the letter, quickly skimmed through it. His face suddenly changed greatly. Anger instantly surged to his heart. Only his face turned from red to green, and the veins on his forehead bulged like a sinuous earthworm. A woman's opinion. Stupid. He slammed the letter on the table with such force that the teacups on the table jumped,
spilling tea and wetting the table. The teacup shook a few times on the table, but finally failed to stabilize. Bang fell to the ground, shattered. Qin Xingyue's heart tightened violently, and she could see that Qin Langtian had moved to real fire. Sushi, how can she be so biased in favor of that rebellious son? Qin Langtian's eyes were wide open. Those eyeballs seemed as if they were about to pop out of their sockets, and it was as if a blazing fire was burning in his eyes, wanting to burn everything to the ground. I'm cold and heartless? I don't spare my own flesh and blood? Simply ridiculous. I'm not doing this for the sake of the Battle King's mansion. Qin Langtian stormed out, his powerful cultivation displayed, instantly rushing in all directions, venting his inner rage. Father, why don't we go to the Holy Land first and retrieve Mother? Qin Xingyue had a worried look on her face. Ha? Come back? Can't you see she doesn't want to come back for the rest of her life? Fine. Go away. All of you. Get out of here. All of you. Qin Langtian roared angrily. His voice was like a wounded beast roaring. His face was so gloomy that it seemed as if water could drip out of it, and that gloomy face made people shudder. As long as that rebellious son lives for a single day, it will be a humiliation for me. Qin Langtian. Qin Langtian clenched his fists tightly with both hands, his joints whitening from the exertion, his knuckles emitting a cackling sound, as if they would break at any time. Yet he couldn't do anything about Qin Hao. The Luanjia Holy Land wanted to protect that rebellious son. Could he still go to war with the Luanjia Holy Land? Qin Langtian was silent, pacing back and forth in the room. His footsteps were very heavy. Each step seemed to be giving vent to the anger in his heart. Lin Tianxian, after so many years, you have been working against me. Qin Langtian gritted his teeth and squeezed out these words from his teeth. Someday. A hint of viciousness flashed in his eyes, a look that gave people the creeps, as if he was plotting some extremely vicious conspiracy to put the other party to death. This terrifying look at Qin Xingyue couldn't help but make her heart skip a beat. The true disciple of the Luanjia Holy Land did not expect him to have such strength. Qin Xingyue had a complex expression, unable to believe this matter. Thinking back to the days when she used to get along with Qin Hao. At that time, Qin Hao was nothing but a coward and incompetent person in her eyes, and was always ridiculed by her. But nowadays, how could she have never imagined that Qin Hao, who she had once regarded as a waste material, had completely surpassed her? She couldn't understand why the person she had once stepped on was now able to soar to the heavens, while she herself was still standing still. Humph. So what if he becomes a true disciple? What does our Battle King's mansion have to fear? Qin Langtian forced himself to be calm as he strained his neck, trying to make his voice sound full of courage. Father, we still need to deal with it carefully. After all, Luanjia sacred land. Qin Xingyue warned worriedly. Qin Langtian snorted coldly and stopped speaking. He turned his back to Qin Xingyue and fell into deep thought. The room was terribly quiet, with only the sound of Qin Langtian's heavy breathing. Stone Kingdom Palace, the third princess's house. Princess, there is news of Qin Hao. But, a maid said cautiously, her head hanging low, her hands clenching the corners of her coat tightly, her face with some hesitation. But what's going on? Speak quickly. Shi Luoyan suddenly felt her heartbeat accelerate as she stared tightly at the maid and asked, feeling nothing but a bad feeling in her heart. It's better for the princess to go through it herself. The maid did not dare to say it outright, and with trembling hands, she handed the information in her hands to Shi Luoyan. Her eyes were filled with fear, afraid that she would say something wrong to upset the princess. This master he served was not a kind person. Before himself, there had been an unknown number of people who had been given death by the princess because of some inexplicable things. Shi Luoyan grabbed the paper in the hand of the maid and quickly browsed through it, and just after a few glances, her face changed dramatically, and the paper in her hand almost slipped off. What? Qin Hao actually became a true disciple of the Luanjia Holy Land. Her voice was shrill with surprise, and it echoed through the room with disbelief. Shi Luoyan's eyes widened as she stared dead at the contents of the paper. How could she not accept this fact? In her impression, Qin Hao was a worthless waste, an existence that could be trampled on by her at will. A piece of trash. To have come this far, Shi Luoyan said angrily. Her face flushed red, her heart filled with resentment. Her hands were clenched into fists, her nails sunk deep into her palms, but she didn't even realize it. Princess, calm down. The maid was so frightened that she hurriedly knelt down, her body trembling unceasingly. She didn't dare to raise her head to look at Shi Luoyan. She just kept kowtowing her head, hoping to calm the princess's anger. But compared to the Violet Sun Saint Sun, you're still nothing more than an ant. At the mention of the Violet Sun Saint Sun, Shi Luoyan's face showed admiration, and her eyes softened as she imagined the Violet Sun Saint Sun's heroic appearance. The Violet Sun Saint Sun is the real genius. What is Qin Hao? Shi Luoyan gripped, fantasizing about standing shoulder to shoulder with the Violet Sun Saint Sun and becoming the envy of all. So what do we do next, princess? The maid asked carefully, her voice trembling for fear of offending the princess again. Observe for a period of time first to see Qin Hao's situation in the Langya Holy Land. Shi Luoyan took a deep breath and tried to calm herself down, secretly thinking about countermeasures in her heart. Yes, princess. The maidservant was as if she had been pardoned and hurriedly retreated. Shi Luoyan sat on the chair, her gaze looking into the distance, her mind filled with thoughts. She thought about Qin Hao's changes, about the Xiang Saint's son, about her own position and future in the palace, all of which required her to plan carefully without the slightest mistake. As for Qin Hao, since he has already made a grudge with Qin Hao, there is definitely no possibility of reconciliation. The other party is a true disciple of the Luangjia Holy Land. Personal safety and security is not in question. One had to find a solution to Qin Hao as soon as possible, otherwise she would be in danger. End of chapter.